Hey you all, welcome to Just a Shinobi. Today, we dive into an exciting what-if scenario. What if Naruto trained by Killer Bee for Chunins? Part 1. If you enjoy this, hit subscribe for more thrilling content. Explore my other videos, share with friends, enjoy them too, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. It motivates me. Let's not waste any time. Jump into today's what if. Propped against a wall, Jiraiya stared down at the blank white page of his notepad. The Toad Sage remained that way for a few more minutes before he sighed dejectedly and slipped the notes into his vest. It seemed that the muses weren't on his side today. His mind wandered as he continued to wait in the reception room outside of his sensei's office. What had been so imperative that it required his immediate attention? And if this issue was so important, why had he been standing outside of the Hokage's office for nearly 2 hours now? It just didn't make any sense. Of course, nothing about his unexpected return made any sense. The old lecher had been lurking around the local hot spring, catching up on his ever-important research, when a small orange monkey suddenly poofed into existence on his shoulder. If not for his ninja training, the Toad Sage may have very well screamed like a little girl. He may have been a veteran ninja, but there was no shame in being startled when primates began popping out of thin air. The lion tamarin had rolled its eyes at Jiraiya's un-ninja-like behavior before handing him a communique from the village, then promptly poofing away. The transcript he'd received had been heavily encoded and took close to an hour to decipher. Decoded, the message was mockingly concise. In short, it read. You are hereby ordered to return to Konoha. We need to talk. Grudgingly, Jiraiya had followed the Hokage's orders. He began the long trek from Lightning Country back to the village hidden in the leaves, cursing his sensei as he traveled past numerous hot springs that were open for mixed bathing. That tragic incident aside, however, the rest of his journey had gone by without issue. Only after arriving at Konoha did he slowly begin to realize that something was wrong. As the Sannin had wandered through the streets, waving to the familiar faces he saw, he got the distinct impression that the villagers were hiding from something. Their eyes darted back and forth nervously. It was like they were expecting to be attacked or something, and when he greeted them, they just sent him a startled look before quickly hurrying on their way. At first Jiraiya had thought nothing of it. Perhaps they were just running late. Yes, that was it. They were all just running a little late, that was all. He paused. Every single villager, all at the same time. Right. From there, things just got weirder. As he began to approach the Hokage's tower, a flicker of movement out of the corner of his eye caught his attention. Leaping across the rooftops in tight formation were no less than 20 Anbu. That had definitely set him on high alert. But it was only after entering the Hokage's tower that he realized the extent of this strange behavior. Instead of being swallowed up in the building's typical noisy din, he was instead greeted by silence. Dead silence. The staff had remained perfectly still when he'd entered the room. It was almost as if any sudden movement would spell instant death for everyone in the room. Their deer-in-the-headlights phase had only lasted for a few seconds before the room slowly returned to the hectic environment that he remembered it to be, but now the pervert was certain. Something was horribly wrong. Jiraiya-sama. Addressed the soft-spoken receptionist from behind her desk. His head snapped up and he turned to look at the woman. The Hokage will see you now. Jiraiya nodded and moved stiffly towards the heavy wooden doors. He pushed them open and was immediately greeted by the face of his old teacher. Or at least he guessed it was his teacher's face. The man looked terrible. Gaunt, hollow eyes stared back at him, sad and gray, as though all the laughter had been forcibly ripped out of the old man's life. His mouth appeared to be twisted downward in an eternal scowl that locked the man's pipe securely in place. Small particles of dust and soot had collected on the brim of the Hokage's ceremonial hat, and Jiraiya idly wondered if his teacher had moved at all during his many years of absence. But that wasn't what shocked him. What shocked him was the new set of scars that twisted across the old Hokage's face. 4 angry purplish lines ran across the length of his face, starting at his jawbone and traveling upward, past his lips, across his nose, and over his right eye, until they disappeared underneath his hat. It was almost as if he'd been raked across the face by the claws of an animal. But surely that couldn't have been right. What happened to you, old man? The Toad Sannin questioned, a look of concern spreading across his features. His teacher ignored the question and released a long stream of blue-tinged smoke into the air. Please take a seat, Jiraiya. The scars on his mouth writhed angrily as he spoke. The Toad Sannin gave his teacher a quizzical look before taking a tentative step forward. Behind him the double doors slammed shut, trapping him in the dimly lit, smoke-filled room. He suddenly felt very claustrophobic. The old Hokage took a long drag on his pipe, saturating even more of the room's dwindling air supply with a sweet-scented smoke when he exhaled. Judging by the amount that was hovering above their heads, Jiraiya could safely assume that his sensei had been here for a while. He just hoped that this wouldn't take too long, he still wasn't very good at sitting still and paying attention. The grin spread across his face. Not unless hot springs were involved. Still perverted, I see. The old man stated knowingly. Maybe. Both men chuckled at this, slowly tapering off until silence once again permeated the room. At least his sensei still acted the same. What's this all about, old man? Your letter said something about us needing to. He trailed off when he noticed the pained look on the teacher's face. Sarutobi gazed through an ash-smeared window down at the village. Even now, hordes of Anbu were the only things that could be seen. Jiraiya. He began, still looking through the window, when was the last time you were in the village? The younger man flinched at his leader's purely ceremonial question. He was well aware that old man Sarutobi liked to keep up the appearance of being a harmless washed-up old ninja, even in front of his students it seemed. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. Though he appeared old, his skills were just as sharp, if not sharper, than they'd been when he was in his prime. Always pushing oneself further was just another aspect of life for a shinobi. If you managed to survive long enough to experience the wondrous roller coaster of ghosts of missions past and chronic joint pain that encompassed old age, you were able to do one of two things. You could either A. Retire and live out the rest of your life in moderate comfort, becoming forever known as that old ninja. Or B. Mold your mind into a weapon scarier than any jutsu, becoming forever known as that old ninja. Not even a kill-me orange-wearing, ramen-obsessed moron would fail to notice the path that Sarutobi had decided on. The Sandaime Hokage was the very definition of that old ninja. He was an assassin, a puppet master, a tactical genius who hid himself under the guise of a kindly old man. He could smile at you to your face that morning, later that night order the complete eradication of your entire family, and then hold your hand through the funeral the very next day. The Hokage was a scary old bastard. There was no way in hell that the old man had forgotten when his student was last in the village. In fact, Jiraiya was fairly certain that Sarutobi still remembered exactly what the Sannin had eaten for lunch after they'd passed his bell test nearly 4 decades ago. In any case, the point was moot. His Hokage had asked him a question, and like an obedient subordinate, he would put aside his personal feelings and answer the question to the best of his ability. About 4 years ago. Jiraiya sighed, after Minato gave his life to seal the Kyuubi I had to leave. The pain of losing my student. It was just too much for me, I guess. I withdrew from the village and everything related to it. The Sandaime hung his head in shame. I couldn't even bring myself to take care of my own godson. Sandaime turned back to him, unconsciously running his hand across the scars on his face. Godson? He echoed in a faraway voice. Jiraiya sent him a puzzled look. You know, Naruto, cute little kid with big blue eyes and whiskers on his cheeks. His teacher cringed. This was immediately noticed. What's wrong? Did the kid do something bad? The third's jaw dropped and his pipe clattered noisily to the desk. The two ninjas stared at each other with mirrored expressions of perplexed shock. Sarutobi recovered first. Things have changed while you were away. He stated solemnly as he retrieved a thick manila folder from his desk. He released the seal binding the reports and slipped the document into Jiraiya's hands. The Toad Sage opened the folder. Inside appeared to be the dossier of a ninja. He began to examine the first page. It read. Name. Aboki Horo. Gender. Male. Rank. Chunin. Age. 24, deceased. Cause of death. Severe lacerations to the thoracic and abdominal area, resulting in massive irreversible hemorrhaging. His face began to pale when he looked at the photos attached to the report. The ninja in question was lying face up in an alleyway surrounded by a pool of deep crimson liquid. Bits of mangled flesh and gore were plastered to the alley walls, along with a liberal amount of kunai and shuriken. Deep claw-like gouges, eerily similar to those that now resided on the third's face, littered the man's legs and torso. The report detailed that the nin had finally died when his chest was ripped open. Massive hemorrhaging was an understatement. Jiraiya didn't even try to locate the deceased ninja's shredded heart and still managed to find it with relative ease. Jiraiya had had enough. He may have been a ninja, but there were limits to what even he could stomach. He turned to the next page and felt his blood run cold. The next page was practically identical to the first, the only thing that changed was the name of the person on the sheet. His eyes shot down to the bottom of the page. Age. 10, deceased. Cause of death. Blunt force decapitation. Blunt force decapitation. He thought in disbelief, what the fuck is that and why was it used on a 10-year-old for Kami's sake? He looked at one of the photos and felt the bile rise in his throat. Oh. So that's blunt force decapitation. For shinobi, death was something that came with the job. As academy students, they were taught that ninjas played 5 vital roles. Assassin, mercenary, spy, saboteur and thief. Out of these 5 duties, 2 of them were directly involved in the act of taking a life. Assassinations, by definition, required that a ninja take the life of their target. Coincidentally, the act of being a mercenary entailed the full-scale slaughter of an opposing army. Bloody. Of course. Just. Perhaps. Sad. Nearly always. But in the end, as long as you got paid, it didn't really matter. That being said, Jiraiya was an excellent ninja. Even being a semi-competent ninja meant having a lot of innocent blood on your hands. When you were one of the legendary Sannin. Let's just say that the silly carefree pervert had more than a few skeletons in his closet. Having fought in both the second and third great ninja wars made him no stranger to blood and death, however the style of execution portrayed in these photos. They just didn't seem possible. Most of the kills he'd been exposed to were clean, quick and efficient, exactly the way a veteran ninja was taught to operate. But these kills were entirely different. Flesh had been torn where it should have been cut. Lethal strikes were constantly missed a hair's breadth to perfect in their precision to count off as lucky hits. In fact, a majority of the reports so far seemed to indicate that the attacker had prolonged its victim's demise, allowing them to escape and then hunting them down again, like the whole act was nothing more than a sadistic game of cat and mouse. Jiraiya turned to the next page and choked when he read the name. Okami, no. He whispered. Name. Hada Kakashi, copy nin. Gender. Male. Rank. Anbu captain. Age. 18, deceased. Cause of death. Singular, severe laceration spanning the length of the thoracic cavity, resulting in massive and irreversible hemorrhaging. The feeling of emptiness swept over him, forcing him to close the docket. How? He asked helplessly. Kakashi was an Anbu captain. How could he have died? His mentor gave him a pained look before answering. Kakashi died protecting me. He said in a voice heavy with grief. He threw his body in front of an attack that was meant for me. His sacrifice allowed me to escape with ease. The third gestured to his face. He looked back at Sarutobi weakly. What in the hell could have done this? The old man's hand began to once again trail over his scars. After a long while he finally answered. Uzumaki Naruto. Jiraiya's breath caught in his throat, he felt like he was going to throw up. Naruto. He echoed in a broken voice. My godson. The third nodded. Although his outward appearance remained stoic and cool, on the inside he could feel his heart breaking. His student was crying again, and the old man wanted to do nothing more than act like the fatherly figure that his student desperately needed. He knew he couldn't though. Right now he needs to be the Hokage. He had to be that old ninja. No matter how bad it felt to do so. But how? His student breathed, he's only 4. The professor ignored his question, a rather annoying habit that the old man had picked up at some point during Sannin's absence. He calmly refilled his empty pipe with tobacco, another annoying habit that the old Hokage had picked up, lit it, and took in a deep lungful of harmful smoke. Only after several more drags on his pipe did Sarutobi finally feel inclined to answer his student. Let me tell you the whole story. As you know, 4 years ago the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. Its power was beyond anything that we could have possibly imagined. With just a sweep of its tails, it could level entire mountain ranges or raise a wall of water capable of swallowing a hidden village. Our ninja fought valiantly against the beast, knowing full well that their deaths would only buy you and Minato a few more seconds to finish the seal. The Hokage cringed. It was a massacre. The demon's unholy power cut through our ranks with an ease that suggested our shinobi were made of wet tissue paper. Its tail swung, killing dozens of men instantly. Our most devastating jutsu only served to agitate the great beast, reducing them to little more than beacons that focused the monster's rage upon the caster. We were helpless, utterly helpless before the unlimited power of the kitsune. Our only hope was to believe the yondaime would somehow conjure up a miracle. He did, but only after the heaviest of prices. The fourth sacrificed not only his life, but also the life of his newborn son, condemning the babe to a life of loneliness and pain, so that the village could survive. It worked. At the cost of his own soul, Minato's seal was able to imprison the mightiest of the Biju inside the weakest of containers. A baby boy. It was around this point you left. Sandaime commented offhandedly. Jiraiya hung his head. Anyway, after you left many things happened at once. In light of your absence and your student's death, the council requested that I come out of retirement and once again take up the mantle of Hokage. He gestured to his robes. As you can clearly see, I accepted. Being the leader of the village in such a tremulous time was interesting to say the least. The village was in ruins, morale was low, missions were scarce, and of course Naruto, our baby, needed a good home. With no one around to take care of him, the old man sent a pointed look at the downcast old sage. I was forced to send him to an orphanage. Many of the citizens considered Naruto to be the Kyuubi, and during his first year of life, my Anbu prevented no less than 20 assassination attempts on his life. The young boy developed at an astounding rate, being fully able to walk and talk when he was only 18 months old. For the villagers, this was proof that Naruto was in fact the Nine Tails in disguise, and attempts on his life skyrocketed. His sensei sighed. Looking back on it now, I wish I had made just a little bit of time for the boy. He was completely alone in the world, denied any type of positive human interaction because of the demon living inside him. The old ninja trailed off. I should have been there for him. A tear fell from the younger man's eye. He opened his mouth to proclaim how he was the one at fault, that little boy had been his responsibility, but his teacher quickly motioned for him to remain silent. The Hokage seemed to hesitate before continuing with the story. On his second birthday he was attacked by a mob of angry civilians. A look of rage crossed the Sannin's face, but the Sandaime didn't appear to have noticed. He was beaten badly before the Anbu guard had finally stepped in and put a stop to the mob. Naruto was unconscious for 5 days before he finally woke up. After that he was different. Only a few weeks later I received another report that he'd been attacked, but this time the attack had ended very differently. Out of the 20 people that had attacked him, none had survived. He slaughtered them all. Every single one of them had been killed by a 2-year-old boy. At first I couldn't believe what I was reading. How could a boy, who by all rights shouldn't even know what death is, be able to butcher nearly 24 people that were roughly 4 times his size? When the Anbu that was guarding him told me what had happened I nearly threw up. A scared Hokage pulled a document from his desk. At roughly 1900 hours the known as Uzumaki Naruto was assaulted by no less than 20 citizens of the Hidden Leaf. I was going to intervene when I suddenly noticed something. The boy was laughing as the civilians beat him with pipes and bats. He almost seemed to be taking a perverse pleasure at being struck by blows that would have crippled a normal man, to say nothing of a child. Since the boy didn't appear to be in any real danger, I decided to take careful note of the boy's actions. One of the men leaned over and said something inaudible to a profusely bleeding yet still laughing child that abruptly silenced him. Killing intent unlike anything I'd ever felt exploded from the boy, slaying a few of the villagers on the spot and bringing the rest to a near catatonic state. Just before I lost consciousness, I was able to make out what appeared to be 3 flaming tails swinging behind his back. The scene I awoke to can't be aptly described by any words that I know. Pictures are enclosed within Hokage-sama. I strongly advise you not to look at them. End report. Sarutobi set the paper on his desk and took a long drag from his pipe. I looked at those photos. He started with a slight tremor in his voice. And Taka was right, I shouldn't have. The professor shook his head, as if this act would remove the memories clinging to his mind. Slowly, he turned back to Jiraiya. Even though his actions went way beyond disturbing, I figured that this might, in fact, be a good thing. Well, not exactly good per se. Perhaps acceptable would be the more accurate word to use. Yes, I found this to be acceptable. Naruto had only done what he had because he was trying to defend himself. He had to kill those people or else they would have killed him. At least that's what I had originally thought. Someone in Anbu leaked what Naruto had done to the general public and then all hell broke loose. The civilian council demanded the boy's head in reparation for the people that he killed. The ninja council demanded that he be turned into a weapon to be used by the village. My advisors told me that I should just leave him in the forest and claim that he'd run away from the village sometime during the night. The general populace railed that he should stand trial for his actions. The Hokage massages his temples. Later that night nearly 150 people, both ninja and civilian, banded together in an attempt to finish what the Yondaime started and began to march towards Naruto's apartment. I sent one of my most loyal Anbu to rescue the boy before the angry mob found him. Sarutobi paused. He was later found inside Naruto's apartment with his head and arms torn off. The angle of the attack suggested that his opponent was only 3 feet tall. A dark look spread across the old man's face. No one was spared, no one escaped. 6 of the ninja in attendance that night were members of Anbu Black Ops. Again the Hokage paused. They were fighting a 2-year-old and the 2-year-old slaughtered them like animals. After that nobody ever tried to kill Naruto again. But as the months went on, people were still turning up dead. It was obvious that our little was the killer. Only he would be able to achieve the necessary amount of carnage in order to replicate these kills. I summoned him to the tower in order to question him about these murders. When I asked him if he knew anything about it, he laughed hysterically, saying of course I know about the murders you silly old ninja. I did them. Naturally, this shocked me. I knew that Naruto was most likely behind the murders, but to hear a 3-year-old boy proclaim in such a proud voice that he'd been mercilessly killing people for the past year was just. The Sandaime trailed off. I asked him why he'd been killing so many people. To this he'd happily replied the big fox told me that I needed to eat better. Now I was floored. How was I supposed to act after finding out that the murderer who roamed the streets of Konoha was actually a psychotic cannibalistic child? I wanted to arrest him, but I knew that would only provoke the boy's wrath. I'm fairly confident if combat between me and the little ensued, the resulting battle would have cost far more lives than simply allowing him to continue feeding. I let him go, telling him that he would be arrested if he was caught doing this again. He just smiled brightly and promised to stop. The killings persisted. For the next year, the village simply tried to pretend that the murders and Naruto didn't exist. People went out of their way to avoid him, hoping that he would allow them to live if they simply left him in peace. Only afterwards did we realize that isolating him was probably the worst thing we could have done. They say hindsight is 20/20. They are very wise. In an effort to appease the beast, we forgot one very important detail. It had two faces. It was the Kitsune, Lord and Master of Biju, the greatest of the nine, the embodiment of power and hatred, but it was also Naruto, a scared and lonely little boy, wondering why people ran in terror at the sight of him. In effect, we left an unstable little boy all alone with only a malevolent trickster fox for companionship. The demon twisted his mind, poisoning him with whispered lies and promises of happiness. Over the next year the two personas merged, the end result being a cruel, hateful, incredibly dangerous creature that lived for, and loved only, itself. His next birthday marked the darkest day in Konoha's history following Kyuubi's initial attack 4 years ago. The village was holding a service of remembrance in the local temple for the thousands that had died when Nine Tails attacked. I was leading a prayer when a massive wave of killing intent was suddenly leveled on the crowd. Naruto was there. The Hokage shivered, his hand unintentionally moving to stroke his scars. The rage burning in his eyes was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. He was furious that his villagers would rejoice in the demon's defeat, mocking the creature that he considered to be his closest friend. He attacked. The demon had given him claws and fangs sharper than any blade, and the civilians around him were quickly cut down. Behind it, 4 flaming tails lashed out like wrecking balls, crushing any that managed to slip past him. The shinobi tried to drive the beast back, but it was far too strong. In short, we were massacred. Whether by conscious decision or sheer dumb luck, the beast had managed to catch us when we were weakest. Using the demon's chakra had had a crippling effect on the people's morale. The situation was entirely too similar to one 4 years ago. Many veteran ninja panicked and ran when they saw that they would once again have to face the monster that haunted their nightmares. It had attacked in a crowded area, and because it was so small, the ninja couldn't kill the demon until it was too late. Engaging the beast at long range, as well as using our most powerful techniques, was impossible. It used the crowd as a shield, forcing our ninja to be careful so that they didn't accidentally kill a civilian by mistake. The demon had no such constraint, quite the opposite really. With every sweep of its claws it managed to bring down another batch of people. It barely even had to work at it. Amidst the chaos, the beast must have managed to work its way to the front of the crowd, because the next thing I knew was that I was being thrown to the side by Kakashi. The Hokage's voice began to tremble with rage. It killed him. That thing gutted one of my best ninjas. The enraged Sandaime slammed his fists on the desk. He was laughing when he did it. Jiraiya remained silent. We fought, and just like I'd predicted the year before, it was a bloodbath. The little bastard lured me into the crowd and then ambushed me in the confusion. That's when he gave me these. The old man growled, tapping his scars with the stem of his pipe. He maneuvered me into situations that forced me to kill my subjects in order to dodge his attacks. At one point I was forced to cut through a little girl in order to deflect a lethal strike aimed at my heart. The look of fear and pain on her face as her beloved Hokage-sama, Sarutobi, snarled, was forced to stab her in order to prolong his own wretched life, is something that will be forever burned into my mind. After nearly half an hour me, as well as several Uchihas, were able to bring the creature down. The Uchiha were able to use their partially suppress the shield of demonic chakra long enough for me to plunge a kunai into Naruto's head. The toad hermit flinched at this, but his teacher took no notice. The wound healed almost instantly. A Hyuga was brought to the boy and his vital signs were confirmed. Somehow the boy was still alive. Without ceremony an Anbu cut off his head and we watched in mute horror as it reattached itself to his neck. No matter what we tried, the thing wouldn't die. The only thing we could do was suppress his chakra and pray that he doesn't wake up until we figure out how to kill him. At this moment, Naruto is in a cell deep beneath the tower. We covered him with so many chakra suppression seals that he should have remained in a comatose state for the rest of his life, instead he began to wake up yesterday. This is why I've called you back. The old man let this sink in. Tears began to run down the Sanin's painted cheeks. How could this have happened? He'd promised Minato that he would be there for his son, promised that he would protect the thing that his student had treasured more than life itself. But he didn't. He lied. He ran away from his problems like a coward, breaking his final promise to a dying man because he was too sad and afraid to do his duty. Now look at what his failures had wrought. The copy nin was gone, his godson was eating people, the whole of Konoha lived in fear, and thousands of innocent people were dead. All of this could have been avoided if he'd simply been a little stronger. This is my fault. He whispered. You're right, it is. Sarutobi spat, his voice like acid. Jiraiya recoiled at the venomous words. The boy was your responsibility and yet you did nothing. You were the one who abandoned him. You were the one who left him in darkness. You were the one who wasn't there when he needed you the most. The Sannin wished for death at this point. But, the Hokage sighed, you were the one who came back for him. You can't give in to despair just yet, Jiraiya, your godson still needs you. The Toad Sage's head shot up. What do you mean? The anger vanished from Sarutobi's face and was replaced with that look, the keen calculating smirk that meant you were now dealing with that old ninja. Who was there for him when Naruto was all alone? Jiraiya's head began to bow again. No one. You're wrong. The old man simply stated. Now answer the question, who was there for him when Naruto was all alone? Sannin's eyes widened. The Kyuubi. Correct. Now, what does Naruto love more than anything else? The Kyuubi. He repeated. Correct again. My, you're getting rather good at this. Jiraiya frowned but of course, it was ignored. Final question. Who sealed the Kyuubi into Naruto? Minato. His sensei shook his head. God and me. The old man grinned. Exactly. He pulled out a sheet of paper and handed it to his student. I am assigning you an S-rank mission. It involves taking Naruto out of Konoha until you deem him fit to re-enter society at large. While in the field, you are to humanize him as well as train him in the ninja arts. Should you succeed, the village of the Hidden Leaf will be in control of the most powerful shinobi to ever live, stronger even than the Yellow Flash. Should you fail, you will most likely be torn apart and eaten, and Konoha will lose yet another ninja to the Kyuubi's talons. The silence was deafening. For a long time both parties remained unspeaking, they simply studied each other. Jiraiya's eyes hardened when they locked with the glowing pinpricks of scarlet light. This monster was not his godson. They say that the eyes are the windows to the soul. His teacher was right, they are very wise. The Toad Sage could see many things within the creature's eyes, its hatred, its power, and above all else, its inextinguishable rage. It may have worn the mask of a cute innocent child, but that was all it was, a mask. Those maelstroms of molten crimson crushed the last kernel of doubt in the Sannin's mind. This was Kyuubi. The stillness was broken by the saccharine voice of the demon. Sarutobi. He whined, when are you gonna let me down? I promise I'll be a good boy. The Hokage's stern visage remained unchanged. Come on old man, let me down. The boy pleaded mockingly. It's so boring up here, and besides, the maniacal grin returned. I'm feeling a little hungry. The boy erupted into insane laughter at this comment, as though he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. His laughter was abruptly cut off by a startled gurgle, and something warm and wet began to leak from his still open mouth. Jiraiya glanced nonchalantly to the side, taking note of his sensei's still extended arm. The old man let it fall to his side before calmly addressing the temporarily muzzled demon child. I have 499 more kunai sealed into the sleeves of my robe, demon. The Hokage idly commented as he retrieved another blade. We can do this all day long if you wish. The wheezed something indistinct around the kunai in his mouth. I beg your pardon. Sarutobi cupped a hand to his ear. The sound of spitting was heard, followed shortly thereafter by the clatter of steel on stone. This time the voice was neither childish nor demonic, it was compassed and amused. I said, you say you want to talk, but then you go around throwing knives in my mouth. Seems kind of backwards to me. Perhaps this is a negotiating technique that all cages use. Human politics is fascinate act. His prattle was cut off by yet another throwing knife. 498. The Sandaime deadpanned, drawing another kunai. Can I try? The third student asked in a detached manner. Sarutobi smirked at this. At least now the Toad Sage understood what this thing was. We need it to like you, Jiraiya. The Sannin was about to reply when a clang echoed through the room, signifying that the boy could speak once again. Although it only shot the old man an irate look, the fire in its eyes indicated that the beast was seething. Again the child stared at them. What did you want to talk about? He gritted out through clenched teeth. The Hokage smiled. I wanted you to meet someone. Naruto, this is Jiraiya, your godfather. The other man wished his teacher hadn't done that. Even though the little was incapacitated for the moment, very soon he would have to take the boy out into the field and believe it or not, Jiraiya didn't feel like being eaten by his student son. He waited for the boy to explode at him. Nothing happened. The vermilion discs blinked in confusion. He could almost picture the young boy motioning for his sensei to continue. That old ninja look crossed his mentor's face and he had to stifle a groan. Manipulative old bastard. Naruto. How do you feel about your godfather? The orbs narrowed in confusion before widening in what appeared to be horror. He's a bad man who left me all alone with only a demon gak. Sungava. 497. The kunai pinged to the floor. I don't care about him one way or the other. Ask me how I feel about you, old man. The Sandaime disregarded the last part and continued to question the child. Why don't you hate him for what he did? Jiraiya shot his teacher a look. Was the old man trying to get him killed or something? What are you talking about? The demon vessel sounded genuinely confused. His eyes flicked towards his godfather. That guy never did anything to me, in fact I've never seen him before in my life. Does it make you angry that he's a bad man who left you all alone with only a demon for companionship? Of course not. If he was around more, I probably would have never met Kyuubi. The old man's smirk broadened. So would you kill him if you were presented with the opportunity to do so? The Sannin threw his hands up in the air in disbelief. The old man was trying to kill him. Soft laughter floated through the darkness. It seems like your companion would rather you not speak about him, Sarutobi. Perhaps I would or perhaps I wouldn't, though I can safely say he wouldn't be my first choice. No, that honor is all yours, old man. His eyes turned to Jiraiya. You, J something, if you get me down I'll kill the old guy for you. The kunai whizzed through the air, stopping with an abrupt click. He, caught this time you stupid ow. Damn it. A second kunai sailed into his neck, causing the one clenched in his teeth to fall to the ground. What the hell do I look like to you, a dartboard? Most dartboards I've encountered aren't this annoying. The third replied as he readied another kunai. His student's hand caught his wrist in mid-throw. Don't piss him off. The hermit advised. It'll just draw out the demon's chakra quicker. Sarutobi gave the man a slight nod and lowered the knife. A metallic chime relayed that yet another kunai had been removed from the restraint. You know J something, I'm starting to like you more and more. He trailed off. Would you come back? If you brought me a present for my birthday, you can still give it to me now. J something gave his godson a flat look. No present, eh? Cheap bastard. Sarutobi's hand inched towards his kunai and the child growled. So why are you here? What does the old schemer want out of you? Are you gonna be the one to kill me? Are you gonna shower me with love and affection until I find the inner goodness buried within my tortured heart? Perhaps you're just here to check up on your demon spawn godson and be done with it. Whatever your reason for being here, it makes no difference to me. As soon as these seals give out I'm gonna show you, the old man, and the entire village just how scary I can be. Wisps of crimson chakra began to leak out of the overtaxed suppression seals. A wicked sneer formed on Naruto's face. Believe it. The instant that the demonic energy began to waft from the seals, the Hokage began to weave hand seals. He'd nearly finished when Jiraiya's hand unexpectedly lashed out and clamped around his hands, cancelling the nearly complete jutsu. The old man sent his student a frantic look, he was going to get both of them killed. However, Sandame's anxiety evaporated when he saw the hard look in Sannin's eyes. He let go of his sensei's hands and began to walk towards his enraged godson, fearless in the presence of the Biju's wrath. He came to a stop before the boy, visibly trembling as waves of killing intent began to descend on him. The sage steeled himself, what he was about to do would either save his life or get him killed. You're wrong. Naruto looked at him, fangs bared and tiny muscles straining at the manacles that prevented him from killing his prey. What the man said next stopped his movements dead. I'm here to kill you. Nobody moved. Sarutobi barely even breathed. He hoped his student had a plan, because if he didn't this was going to get very messy very quickly. The child's snarl morphed into a grin, the bloodlust shining clearly in his glowing eyes. Good. He purred darkly. Get me down from here so I can kill the old man. Why? Naruto looked at him like he was insane. He opened his mouth to speak, but was instantly cut off by his godfather. I mean besides the fact that you hate him. That doesn't really mean much because you hate everyone. The sage chuckled softly. The blonde replied without hesitating, because he's strong. Strong enough to best me. I have to kill him. Killing him will validate my existence. The Sannin laughed at the Jinchuriki's response and gestured to the third Hokage. Him? He snickered before once again breaking down into laughter. You can't be serious. Look at him, he's like 95. Why on earth would you possibly want to fight a washed-up old ninja like him? What pride is there in killing a sickly old man? Sarutobi winced. That was probably payback for the do you want to kill him question. The boy seemed to ponder his godfather's words, and he came to the grudging realization that he was right. The old man was powerful, no question about that, but he'd been inactive for nearly 20 years, dulling his skills and slowing his reflexes. What pride was there in killing a sickly old man? More like, what fun was there in killing a sickly old man? Naruto focused his gaze on the Hokage. Even in the dim light he could clearly make out the jagged lines that ran the length of the man's face. He'd already managed to hit him once, it wasn't even that difficult. That was snapped out of his musings by the Toad Sannin's voice. Do you see what I'm getting as a kid? Sandame is strong, but he's far from being the biggest fish in the sea. Hell, I bet I could probably teach him a thing or two. The demon boy shifted his gaze to Jiraiya. You? He spat. How can you possibly be stronger than him? He's the Hokage. I've never even heard of you. Jiraiya held up his hands in a defensive gesture. Easy Naruto. I can assure you that I'm a very competent ninja. The blonde raised an eyebrow at the man below him. Come on. The toad sage grinned. I did a good enough job at sealing the fox and you didn't I? The boy's eyes shot up in surprise. You? You're the one who sealed the Kyuubi inside me. Jiraiya nodded. A wide range of emotions flew across the boy's face. Confusion, disbelief, contemplation, exasperation, and finally something very human. Gratitude. He was quiet for a long while. The two simply looked at each other. This man saved him from loneliness. He'd left him alone, but had given him his dearest friend before he went. He wasn't there to protect him when he'd needed it, but that didn't matter because he'd given him the power necessary to protect himself. This man had given him the greatest treasure in the world, a nine-tailed guardian angel. The boy shut his eyes and uttered something that he'd never said before. Thank you. His godfather smiled softly but said nothing, figuring that it was better to remain silent than risk saying something stupid and invoke the demon's temper. For a long while neither party spoke, the two ninja opting to simply bask in their good fortune for the time being. With any luck, the god who was smiling down on them would continue to do so. It was Naruto who broke the peaceful atmosphere. Did you mean it? Did you mean what you said about killing with me? The Sannin gave him a serious look. That depends, are you going to continue attacking innocents? The boy snarled and his eyes began to blaze, it seemed that Jiraiya's luck had run out. That depends. He roared back, are they going to continue disrespecting me? The very Kyuubi-like grin spread across the hermit's face. Kid, when I'm done with you, nobody's going to disrespect you. Naruto mimicked the look on his godfather's face until something dawned on him. What do you mean by, when I'm done with you? He asked in a guarded voice. Fuck. It's okay though. It's just like lying my way out of a bathhouse, only instead of getting beaten by half-naked women, your head gets torn off. No pressure, super pervert. I'm going to train you to be a ninja, of course. Idiot. The young boy looked murderous. Red chakra began to whip around his body and the wooden structure holding him aloft was beginning to splinter. Listen to what I'm saying. The sage roared over the din that the chakra storm created. The whirlwind of demonic energy lessened only slightly. I won't become a puppet for the village. He roared. I won't let them control me. The Sannin leapt to the boy and the cross creaked dangerously under strain of his weight. He got nose to nose with the furious child, an act that caused the corruptive energy to burn the skin on his face. A look of surprise crossed Naruto's face, watching in awe as the older man apparently tried to kill himself. Petulant child, look at yourself. You think yourself all-powerful because of the demon caged within you, you fool. You rant and rave about honoring the Kyuubi's desires, about the amount of respect you have for the kitsune, but when I offer you the power and death that being a ninja can bring, you throw it back in my face and claim that you won't be a puppet for the village. Look around you. Look at where you are. You're already a slave to the village, but you're so blinded by your hatred that you can't even see it. Blood began to pour from Jiraiya's mouth due to the extended exposure to the Nine Tails chakra. He spat the coppery liquid to the ground and continued to yell. You're a demon. I'm a ninja. When you murder nearly 1,000 people in cold blood, they lock you in here. When I murder nearly 1,000 people in cold blood, they give me a fucking medal and tell me to do it again. The man coughed, causing more blood to fly from his mouth. Still, he persisted. The Nine Tails had its pride, but it wasn't insufferable like yours. At least it wasn't deaf to reason. You refuse to become a ninja on principle. Refuse your most logical option because of your deplorable pride. Wake up, kid, the fox is a ninja. It kills, it tricks, it manipulates, it steals, and it destroys. That is what a ninja truly is, and that is what you're throwing away. The tornado of ruby mist began to dissipate, leaving a barely conscious Toad Sannin forehead to forehead with the most dangerous creature to ever walk the streets of Konoha. The Sannin leaned back dizzily and poked his forehead. What's it going to be, kid? The young boy gaped like a fish at his godfather's words. Everything that the man said had been true. He was about to speak when a sudden resounding crack was heard. His restraints gave way and he and Jiraiya fell to the floor amidst a cascade of timbers. From his place at the opposite side of the cell, Sarutobi shot forward. The amount of speed he was displaying would have been surprising for a shinobi half his age. He crossed the room in the blink of an eye, standing his ground before the small boy that was kneeling over his unmoving student. Naruto looked up at the Sandaime, uncertainty clear on his face. Is he the right old man? Am I being an idiot? Only years of experience kept the old ninja's guard from dropping. As much as Sarutobi hated the creature, at the moment he couldn't bring himself to look past the beast's childish disguise. I can't answer that. He simply stated. You wouldn't listen to me anyway. The demon stared intently at his godfather's peaceful face, as though if he stared at it long enough he would find his answer. Part of him still wanted to kill the old man for the things he'd said about the fox, while another part of him wanted to thank the man for his insights about the demon. Simply put, Naruto was conflicted. Sannin's words echoed in his mind. You're a demon. I'm a ninja. When you murder nearly 1,000 people in cold blood they lock you in here. When I murder nearly 1,000 people in cold blood, they give me a fucking medal and tell me to do it again." The blonde's head snapped up and he looked at the old ninja. "Do you think that you'd die if we fought again?" Sarutobi was about to do something that he had never done before and would never do again, admit weakness. "Yes, I would probably die. Your godfather was right when he said that there was no pride in fighting me. The only reason I was able to last as long as I did before was because I had allies that could suppress your chakra shield. In a fair fight you would win." For a long time the boy sat over an unmoving Jiraiya, going over what the Hokage had said. If even the Hokage was no match for him, who was going to fight? However, if he was able to do the impossible, swallow his pride, and become a ninja, then perhaps he would be able to find an opponent worthy of his claws. Or maybe, a grin spread across his face at the new thought, maybe there would be a war. When he thought about it like that, being a ninja didn't seem so bad. Naruto looked up at Sarutobi. "I am not your puppet, old man, and I will not address you as Hokage-sama. If you ever forget this I'll cut you down without hesitation. Konoha is the one on the short leash around here, not me." The barely visible that old ninja smirk pulled at the edge of his lip. He trained his features before the boy noticed. "That is fine, Naruto. As long as you only kill the enemy, I believe we will be able to get along just fine." The boy looked away from the stoic features of the old man and ground his teeth in rage. "I'm not submitting. I'm doing what the fox would want. I'm going to kill people and no one will care. I will find someone worthy of facing me. I will validate my existence." A mischievous smirk crossed his features. "And after I'm done with this place, I can always burn it to the ground." The old man crouched in front of the boy and spoke to him in a voice that suggested he had a knife to his throat. "Naruto, to get us out of here I'm going to have to touch you. If you kill me, you will never be able to escape. Now, may I touch you, Naruto?" The child once again grit his teeth in anger. "Do it." Although the bristled under Sarutobi's touch, he didn't attack. No matter how much he wanted to. The three disappeared in a swirl of leaves. XXX. Nearly 3 days later Jiraiya woke to a repetitive beeping noise. He squinted against the harsh light and slowly turned his head towards the sound of breathing in front of him. The sensei stared back at him, pipe in hand. "If this is heaven I'm going to be very pissed off," he proclaimed in a voice that implied there was no room for argument. "I've been awake for nearly 10 seconds now and not a single naked woman has fallen from the sky." The Hokage breathed out another stream of smoke before responding. "I would tend to agree with you on that. Very disappointing." A small smile played on his lips. The Sannin reflected his mentor's look. "You shouldn't smoke in the hospital," he chided. "You shouldn't headbutt demons," the older man replied. Jiraiya chuckled softly. "Speaking of which, where is the little bastard anyway?" Sarutobi smirked. "He's at the local penitentiary, eating the inmates on death row." The student laughed, slowly allowing his eyes to slide shut. "Jiraiya?" Said man looked up. "How did you know all of those things you told Naruto about the fox?" The toad sage snickered. "I figured that I was going to die anyway, so at that point I was just pulling things out of my ass." And with that, the injured man fell asleep. The Hokage stared at the unconscious man with eyes as wide as dinner plates. The pipe slid from his gaping jaw and clattered to the floor. "Son of a bitch." A small smile crossed Sannin's face as his teacher finished drawing up the paperwork. "Thank you, sensei. I'm so sorry for everything." Sarutobi filed the paperwork away and turned to look at his pupil. "You created a hell of a mess when you left Jiraiya. Now you're going to fix it." But that he stood up and walked over to Jiraiya. "There are seals on the prison to prevent anyone other than me from sunshining inside. Hold on tight." Jiraiya took hold of the older man's arm and the two vanished in a swirl of leaves. Both men reappeared in a dark room, the only source of light being a few flickering candles. In the darkness the toad Sannin could vaguely make out the shape of a cross suspended nearly 50 feet in the air by thick steel chains. There was a figure shackled to the cross that appeared to be either sleeping or unconscious. "Wake up, Naruto," the Hokage called out. "I have someone I want you to meet." 2 orbs of ruby light flared into existence, the ambient light from them casting a hellish glare on the young boy's grinning face. "Sarutobi," a happy childish voice replied. His grin became psychotic and the light from his eyes intensified. The guttural voice he spoke in next radiated hatred and power. "Are we going to play again, old man?" The relationship that grew between the pair in those first few months was interesting to say the very least. Though the Sannin was stronger, smarter, faster, and had nearly 4 decades more experience than the boy did, there was no question that Naruto was in the position of dominance for the duration of their trip. The simple fact of the matter was that the child had access to the most powerful, and probably the most intelligent, being ever to roam the earth. Being a shinobi for 40 years was almost unheard of. Considering that the life expectancy of a normal ninja averaged somewhere between 10 and 15 years, 40 years of service was nothing short of miraculous. However, this feat was laughable when compared with the eons that the kitsune had been alive for. If Sarutobi, a mortal man, was capable of becoming that old ninja in only 60 years, then what made that fox? The demon had lived for countless millennia. It had seen the ancestors of man. It watched them change from cave-dwelling beasts into sentient life forms. It watched as they began to use tools, watched as they began to climb the food chain, watched as they reached the top of that chain, and watched as they, again, began to change. It saw empires rise and fall. It saw times of great war and times of great peace. Times of progression and times of regression. It had watched them discover and invent. Watched when they created giant steel birds that could traverse the stars and watched when they created staffs of iron that spit fire and thunder at their enemies. It watched as they destroyed themselves, watched unflinchingly as the world was obliterated by rays of light that rained down from the heavens. And then it watched as the little cave beasts crawled from the muck once again. Comparing that old ninja or the toad sage to that old demon was like comparing a candle to the sun, and the Sannin was quickly discovering that the line between the prisoner and the jailer was practically non-existent. For all intents and purposes, Naruto was the Kyuubi, the boy just hadn't fully unlocked the demon's power yet. In reality, he only had a fraction of its power and knowledge, and the boy knew it. It angered him greatly. He may have looked young, but that didn't equate to him being naive. Naruto hadn't been tricked by the crazy old hermit into thinking the fox was a ninja. The very idea was insane. But still, he would go along with it. He'd play the part of the reluctant yet obedient puppet demon until he no longer had any need for the village. Then, and only then, would he show them the heavy price to be paid for daring to dishonor the nine-tailed king. That was the real reason why he'd grudgingly accepted his godfather's offer to train him as a shinobi. He needed to become strong so that he could bring honor to the Kyuubi's name. Even if that meant becoming a ninja. And so, for the first year of his godson's training, Jiraiya was forced to walk a razor's edge, lest he anger the beast. Although the boy had agreed to become a ninja, he never said anything about his teacher still being alive when the training was finished. He fought the Sannin Fang and Talon to avoid learning even the academy basics. After walking and traveling for a week through Fire County, Naruto was ready to choke the proverbial bitch. The boy had already learned several things in short time away from the village. None of them were useful. One such tidbit was that, surprise surprise, the village hidden in the leaves was in fact surrounded by forests. Shocking. These forests that lined the road were pretty to look at. For maybe the first 3 hours. So after the first 3 days of traveling this way, the demon vessel was beginning to give serious consideration towards making Fire Country live up to its name. Another thing that the boy had learned was that he and his sensei shared absolutely nothing in common. So what do you think of toads? The older man wiggled his eyebrows deviously. Why the hell is he asking me this? Toads are kind of weird, replied the confused. His teacher's shoulders sagged. Oh. After about 5 more minutes. You want to go hunting with me? Naruto grinned as he pointed to a small furry thing scuttling up a tree. I'll give you some even if I'm the one who catches it. Jiraiya rummaged through his pack, pulling out a small plastic bag. I've got some jerky if you're hungry. The boy stared at the plastic bag for a few seconds before sighing. No, that's fine. The rest of the day passed in silence. Wonderfully, infuriating silence. As did the next day. And the day after that. The worst part about this was that the back of the Toad Sannin's vest was even more boring than the endless sea of trees. Today marked the 1-week anniversary of the pair's leave, it too passed in silence. Hence the choking of the proverbial bitch. Naruto slowly extended his talons. Naruto. What? I'm sensing that you're getting bored. Yes. That would be a fairly accurate description of how I feel right now. A faint click announced that the boy's claws had locked into place. How about I show you some of the basics? That sounds very pleasant. His sensei turned to him. Can you put your claws away? Yes. Nothing happened. Jiraiya groaned in annoyance. Would you put your claws away? Yes. With a sharp click his claws retracted and the hermit relaxed his posture. They began to move into the forest, coming to an abrupt and seemingly random stop a short time later. To Naruto, this place didn't look like anything special. They just stood a few hundred feet away from the road, surrounded on all sides by trees. The sage turned back to the budding ninja. Okay, let's begin with basic taijutsu, and then after a while we can move on to the proper way to throw kunai and shuriken. Maybe after a few months I can begin to teach you a few low-level ninjutsu. Jiraiya turned to his protege and smiled. Any questions? After a few months a wide-eyed Naruto shouted. Of course. The Sannin simply replied. How long did you think it took? A few hours. The only sound that answered him was a loud metallic click. The hermit eyed the razor-sharp claws that were now pointed in his direction. Huh. I guess the old man was trying to kill me. X. Believe it or not, the little demon child didn't succeed in the task of killing his godfather. Ironically, it was the man's perversion that saved him and not his skills as a legendary Sannin. Years of peeping on spas and bathhouses in order to gather research had caused the super pervert to develop a wide array of stealth-related skills. When the angry had attacked him, he'd used Kawarimi to get out of the boy's striking distance and then used a jutsu to hide underground until Naruto got bored. After the boy had had a day to cool off, the Toad Sage tried once again to teach the boy the basics. In short, he was awful. Not a single shuriken had managed to hit anywhere near the target tree, and more than half of the kunai thrown had ended up striking the back end first, causing little or no damage to the tree. At least they started out being ineffective. As the boy grew angrier and angrier, the butt of the kunai wound up being more lethal than the blade. The first time Naruto had used red chakra to enhance his throw, the tree had been blown completely in half. Along with the next 30 trees behind it. For the boy's godfather, it was both horrifying and comical. Horrifying that the boy would work himself up to the point where he'd use the Kyuubi's chakra over a simple training exercise, and comical because, in spite of all the damage he'd caused, the boy had still managed to miss the target tree. His sensei had stepped in and stopped the exercise when the demonic energy began to take the shape of a fox around the boy. The Sannin hoped that the simple act wouldn't offend to the point where it would push Naruto into the one-tailed transformation. To his great surprise and relief, the boy had stopped hurling the steel projectiles. When he saw Naruto's face, his eyes widened in surprise, however the man quickly schooled his features, not wanting to evoke the demon's wrath. The expression he'd seen on the boy's face was what had shocked him so much. His student was sad. For a normal student, this kind of thing happens often. They would fail, become mad, become discouraged, and ultimately would try again. But that was just it, Naruto wasn't a normal student. Jiraiya often had to remind himself that he was training a young demon on this trip, not a young boy, even though the two were practically indistinguishable. At least that was what the sage had originally thought. In spite of all the boy's boasting and preening, in spite of the fact that he could kill his sensei at a moment's notice, and in spite of the horrific body count hanging over his head, part of Naruto was still a 4-year-old boy. He was dangerous and hateful, but at heart he was just a child. So Jiraiya had tried to comfort the boy, saying that nobody ever started out good and that he'd been even worse when he was first learning to throw kunai and shuriken. The hermit had been rewarded for his efforts by the boy's razor-sharp talons tearing across his face. His student was livid that the man would even think of talking down to him. The little made it very clear that if he was ever disrespected like this again, the Toad Sannin would die. His teacher was only able to nod due to the bandages that he was pressing against his cheek. As the boy walked off into the forest, his godfather smirked under the gauze. If anyone else had made such an error, they would have been decapitated. For some reason, he was special. However, the Sannin knew that the boy would make good on his promise to kill him if he ever slipped up like that again. So they continued to travel, stopping to train when Naruto began to get bored, violent, or at the worst of times, both. Jiraiya had begun to train him into jutsu, a notion that seemed inherently suicidal, considering that the words non-lethal and friendly spar meant absolutely to the sadistic Jinchuriki. This was promptly remedied by the ever-useful shadow clone technique. However, the clones were quickly destroyed, and the friendly training spars quickly evolved into life-or-death combat between the sage and his pupil. The pair had nearly killed each other dozens of times within the first year of the training. At one point, the Toad Sannin hadn't been fast enough to totally avoid his student's claws, resulting in his jugular vein being torn open. Somehow he'd managed to cauterize the wound, buying him enough time to reach a town that was a few hours away. Again, the boy had surprised him. Jiraiya had been absolutely sure that his godson would go for the kill, but thankfully the boy had done nothing. He simply said, "I'll wait here for 2 weeks. If you don't return by then, I'll assume that you died. Better hurry too, you don't look too good." Of course, similar things had happened to the blonde. His teacher had used one of his father's techniques on him. The Rasengan. Jiraiya didn't really know how to feel after the deadly chakra orb had drilled through his student's head. The whole situation was so saturated with poetic justice and irony and what have you that it left the older of the pair feeling very confused and more than slightly nauseous. He just finished what the Yondaime started, an act that would have appalled Minato if he were still alive, by killing the beast, who was really Naruto, who thought he was the Kyuubi, with his father's signature technique. The situation was wrong on so many levels. Of course, a simple beheading wasn't nearly enough to put the demon child down, so his teacher didn't really feel the need to trouble himself with the condition of his headless student. Another very strange thing to think about. Superscript 1. X. Naruto's skull reformed with a wet crack and he began to turn back towards his godfather. The man was just looking back at him with a slightly amused expression written on his face. The child's anger quickly turned into excitement. "That was awesome," he shouted, retracting his claws as he ran towards his teacher. Jiraiya grinned. The boy rarely showed enthusiasm for his training, so on the rare occasions that he did, his teacher was always sure to utilize it. "You like that, eh?" The man stated disinterestedly as a second delphinium orb bloomed to life in his hand. "It's called the..." "You took my head clean off." The boy interrupted, continuing to bounce around his teacher's feet. "What a great fight. I mean, you've killed me before, but that time was amazing. I was almost sure that I would be able to cut you in half on that swing, but you pulled that victory out of nowhere." He mimicked looking thoughtful. "Have you been holding back on me, Jiraiya-sensei?" Naruto teased. The man deflated and his Rasengan flickered out rather anticlimactically. "You would think that being decapitated was awesome." He pouted. "Oh come on, Jiraiya." His student whined. "You won, so you can't be sad. Besides, there's no such thing as a sore winner." The blonde looked thoughtful. "Is there?" The Sannin stared at the boy blankly. He hated it when his godson screwed with him. Naruto's voice stopped him when he began to walk away. "Good kill." The man stopped, looking back at his young charge. "What was that blue ball you used? It packed quite a bit of bite to it." Jiraiya formed another Rasengan as he began to speak. "It's called the Rasengan, an A-rank original jutsu created by the 4th Hokage." He held it out so Naruto could have a closer look. "It's chakra manipulation in its purest form, no hand signs required." That pissed off the Uchiha clan to no end. He chuckled at the memory. "I can teach it to you sometime if you want." "No thanks. I don't need it." His teacher sighed. "I thought you wanted to get powerful. You're not going to be a very good ninja if you keep refusing to learn when I try to teach you. I understand that you don't want to be controlled, trust me, I get it, but you're just being stubborn for the sake of being stubborn." Naruto sent him an indignant look. "Be happy I'm here." His teacher moved to speak, but the boy cut him off. "Jiraiya, what does the Rasengan do?" It felt like being hit with a really powerful drill. "Massive damage to a small area, in other words an assassination jutsu." He pointed at a nearby tree. "Go hit that with your Rasengan." "But..." "Do it." His sensei sighed but did as he was told. The Rasengan connected with the trunk of the tree, effortlessly boring through the solid bark and coming out the other side. After the ball had disappeared, Jiraiya looked at him. "See that tree there?" The blonde pointed at another tree. His teacher nodded. Naruto flashed out of existence and the tree that he'd pointed to exploded violently, propelling a storm of wooden shrapnel high into the air. The boy was standing in front of the blackened stump, demonic chakra licking up and down the length of his claws. Chunks of smoldering lumber rained down on the clearing as the demon child turned back to Jiraiya. "I'll take my claws over your jutsu any day." XX. For both the second and third year, that had been Naruto's prevailing attitude. Both years had been spent trying to teach the stubborn demon child ninjutsu and jinjutsu. The boy had outright refused to learn anything for the first year. However, during that year the boy had grown considerably more tolerant of his teacher, even going so far as to drop the sarcastic tone when he addressed him as Jiraiya-sensei. The Sannin was willing to hazard a guess that Naruto's improved demeanor had something to do with the daily spars that they had. It seemed that the blonde's respect for him stemmed from the man managing to survive their gruesome battles. When the sage had beaten him with a surprise Rasengan, his godson had finally recognized him as a worthy opponent. After that, every time the demon child was bested by his teacher, the man's standing increased. Still, Jiraiya often found himself on the wrong end of his godson's claws for saying something that angered the boy. But even so, at least he was making progress. Having learned next to nothing in the previous year, the Toad Hermit was forced to take drastic measures to ensure that this year his student would learn ninjutsu and jinjutsu, in other words, bribery. For 3 weeks Naruto raised hell on the local bandit population in southern Rice country. Many civilians somehow managed to get caught in the crossfire between the and his frightened prey, but hey, shit happens. Jiraiya didn't like it, but he sure as hell wasn't going to get anywhere near the blood-crazed demon vessel. His teacher was just happy that Rice had few shinobi to speak of. Shit would have really hit the fan if a ninja squad had engaged his pupil. When Jiraiya began to teach him how to break a jinjutsu, he was amazed. The boy was a natural. He didn't even have to try to escape and the technique would still be released. When his godfather had asked, Naruto had said something about the fox breaking the illusion for him. This made sense considering a pulse of chakra was needed to snap the brain out of its confusion. Apparently just having the demon inside him made the boy jinjutsu-proof. However, his aptitude for the skill ended there. It was impossible for him to cast even the slightest jinjutsu. Not even the simple henge was within reach for the illusion-challenged boy. But Jiraiya just waved it off and began to teach him ninjutsu. It wasn't like the kid would ever use jinjutsu anyway. Destruction was his forte, not trickery. His teacher bypassed the academy ninjutsu completely, deeming them either ineffectual or unnecessary when compared with the boy's skill set. Kawurimi was completely redundant. If Naruto could survive a direct hit from an air rank assassination jutsu, regrow his head, and laugh it off, then he was certainly able to take a few kunai in the back or a punch to the jaw. Hell, the little psycho would probably be more pissed off than injured. Bunshin was also ruled out because it clashed horribly with his students' fighting style, not that it would have mattered anyway, seeing how it was a genjutsu just like the henge. At first, Jiraiya had tried to teach him tree walking. The main point behind this lesson was to build up the boy's lackluster chakra control, as well as impart him with a necessary skill that all shinobi eventually learned. Like most things in the sage's life, this had backfired terribly. The incident last year when the boy lashed out at him was nothing compared to this. For some reason Naruto didn't attack his teacher, he simply took out his rage on a nearby village. Naruto stood on a ridge that overlooked a simple farming village in the south of Rice. He was seething with hatred as he watched the villagers happily going about their business, totally unaware that they weren't going to live to see another day. Behind the 6-year-old boy, 4 blazing chakra tails swished threateningly. He was weak. So weak that he couldn't even master a simple chakra control exercise. His teacher walked up cautiously behind him. The man spoke as though negotiating for the release of a hostage. "Naruto, it's okay, just calm down. You can always try again tomorrow." The low growl slid through the boy's clenched fangs. "I'm not weak. I'm the host of the legendary 9-tailed fox, and I will not let people think that I'm weak. I will show Jiraiya that I am strong." "Hey sensei, want to see some chakra control?" His sensei watched in dismay as his protege got down on all fours. Naruto's 4 crimson tails lashed violently against the ground, carving glowing trenches of molten earth in their wake. They snapped forward, coming to a stop before the child's mouth. Bolts of ruby-hued chakra arsed between his tails, nearly shrouding his form from view within the tunnel of vermilion light. His tails remained absolutely still, acting as conduits for the demon's chakra as they coaxed a volatile energy towards the child's mouth. Having played their part, his tails struck the ground with a deafening crack, sending up a spray of melted stone on impact. For a moment nothing happened. The boy simply sat there, with enough demonic chakra floating between his gaping jaws to level a mountain. And then he struck. 4-tailed menacing balls. A small spark was the only warning Jiraiya had before a torrent of roiling crimson exploded from the Jinchuriki's gaping maw. Burning rays of light flashed outward and struck the village, instantly igniting it and the surrounding forest into a spectacular blaze. The ground buckled and heaved before exploding violently outward, acting as though it was alive and was trying desperately to flee from the horrible pain that this boy was inflicting on it. The very sky seemed to melt. Bleed. Fire and ash rained from the heavens as the village was engulfed by the raging conflagration and its outline greedily devoured by the sea of flames. After that, they were forced to flee Rice country. Every ninja within 100 miles had been alerted to the boy's presence, and though they wanted to stay, Jiraiya was able to convince him that they should leave. If Konohas as well as Jiraiya of the Sannin were discovered at the scene of the attack, it would plunge the hidden village into yet another war. Of course Naruto hadn't cared one way or the other as to the fate his village would suffer for the crimes he'd committed. He was just happy that so many people now recognized his demon's power. They fled to Lighting Country, a gutsy move, considering that the village hidden in the clouds and the village hidden in the leaves had never been on very favorable terms with each other. This proved to be of little consequence. After he'd obliterated the nameless village back in Rice Country, the little demon child was much more mellow and was only too eager to learn what his godfather had to teach him. The pair picked up where they had left off in Rice Country, chakra control and ninjutsu training. At the same time, the Sannin taught the boy how to wield kunai and shuriken. Again. If it was possible, the boy appeared to have gotten even worse at throwing projectiles after the 2-year intermission between his training sessions. This time, not even the shuriken managed to stick into the target, a task that was very difficult to accomplish seeing how a shuriken's entire striking area was a blade. Again the blunted portions of the weapons became more deadly than the intended blades. In his ire, the boy had crushed one of the weapons into a ball of crumpled steel and threw it at his target. Hurtling through the air at hypersonic speeds, the steel sphere struck the dead center of the target, causing the wooden board to nearly disintegrate under the force of the blow. Jiraiya had his answer. The Toad Hermit had bought a duffel bag, loaded it up with as many ball bearings as he could, gave it to his student, and sent him off to practice his aim. Every single ball had hit its target with marksman-level accuracy. In essence, the Sannin had turned his godson into a cannon, and by using the Kyuubi's eyes as long-range telescopic sights, Naruto ensured that one shot was all it ever took to put a target down for good. The only problem was that now Naruto wouldn't do anything but throw projectiles. The boy was infuriating. He would camp out on cliffs for weeks at a time, sniping any cloud shinobi, traveler, holy man, or small furry creature that had the ill fortune of straying too close to his position. After killing nearly 40 Kumonin in a period of 2 months, Jiraiya once again deemed that they needed to relocate. Like always, Naruto had complained, but lately the demon vessel hadn't been putting any heat into his words. It had been nearly 4 months since he last threatened to kill his godfather, and he'd been much less dangerous to spar with as of recently. At first the Sannin had thought that the child was beginning to have a change of heart, but after watching him pick off Cloud9 from a mile out, cackling maniacally all the while, the notion was quashed. Perhaps the boy had grown fond of him. Yeah, right. X. Naruto was licking his claws clean after devouring another nameless victim. Although he didn't know the man's name and didn't care, he had to commend the man for being such a tasty snack. He'd never eaten a pirate before, having spent his entire life either in a forest village or on the run from armies of angry ninja. He'd expected pirates to taste terrible, considering that they were a ninja's mortal enemy, but Naruto took the high road. The boy just wasn't the type to give in to prejudice. He ate all people equally regardless of race, profession, or religious doctrine, and now he was very happy that he'd expanded his palate. Must have something to do with the salty air. He mused. Kid. Jiraiya groaned from his position at the helm. That's disgusting. He rolled his eyes. Bigot. He turned around and what he saw caused the pirate meat to fall out of his mouth. His godfather was sporting a long naval petticoat, along with a puffy white shirt, black pants, and an eye patch. An enormous feather sprouted from the wide black hat covering his spiky white hair, and for some reason a monkey with a vest was perched on his shoulder. What the hell are you wearing? He exclaimed in horror. What kind of self-respecting ninja would dress up like a pirate? The ninja pirate raised an eyebrow at his student's outburst. What kind of self-respecting ninja eats a pirate? He replied. The hungry one. Naruto deadpanned. What? It wasn't enough for you that we stole their ship, so now we're stealing their clothes, the blonde paused, and their monkeys. A smug look spread across his sensei's face as began to stroke the monkey on his shoulder. Commandeered. He corrected me. We commandeered their ship. And the difference is. The boy motioned for him to continue. It's a nautical term. Both he and the monkey tilted their heads to the side. Savvy. For a long while the boy said nothing. Finally, he turned around and continued to eat his pirate. Bloody pirates. The pair sailed towards the land of waves. Hopefully, they would be able to find a remote island where he and Naruto could cut loose without having to worry about collateral damage. Jiraiya was right for once, the Misty Island country was a good choice for training the violent, and after 2 years, the boy had finally managed to complete his sporadic ninjutsu training. He could now tree climb and water walk, as well as use the shadow clone, fire dragon missile, swamp of the underworld, earth-style wall, and after much whining from his sensei, the Rasengan. It had taken the boy so long to complete his ninjutsu training because his chakra control was horrible that after he'd finally learned how to rein it in, he began inventing a few ninjutsu of his own. At the monument he only had 2, the Cannonade Doppelganger and the Yonbi Rasengan, but both were incredibly dangerous. The first was just his personal twist on the shadow clone shuriken jutsu. Unable to even throw shurikens, let alone use them in a jutsu, the boy had tweaked the existing technique to include his favorite projectile, a 3-pound steel ball. The result was devastating. With hundreds of heavy metal balls flying through the air at nearly Mach speed, entire battalions could be wiped out in the blink of an eye. That fact alone was enough to judge it an S-rank jutsu, only Naruto had gone one step further. When his godfather had first begun his ninjutsu training, he had tested the boy to see what his chakra affinity was. As it turned out, Naruto had 2 elements, fire and wind. There was no question that the fox was behind his fire element and apparently wind was his natural affinity. Fire and wind was a deadly combination for a shinobi to have, considering that the wind element fueled the ninja's fire jutsu to greater heights. Point in the case was the fire dragon missile. For a normal shinobi, the fire dragon missile was a B-rank mid-range ninjutsu, formidable but not unstoppable. For the host of the 9 tails, the fire dragon missile was a long-range A-rank jutsu that bordered on S-rank. Just adding a little bit of wind chakra brought the technique to an entirely different level. His original jutsu, the Cannonade Doppelganger, gained its lethal nature by piggybacking off of the force that the original ball was thrown with. One 3-pound ball traveling at 500 miles per hour became 1,000. This was just brute force and a cloning technique, but still it lived up to its S-rank title. For some reason, the boy must have found its destructive power to be inadequate and, for lack of a better word, upgraded it. By infusing the original ball with wind chakra then throwing it, the technique became incomparably destructive. The steel spheres cut through air at ungodly speeds, and the shell of wind chakra amplified the sphere's penetration power to the utmost. Even if his opponent took cover behind a mountain, the steel balls would still hit their target. When you were under fire by this jutsu, there was no escape. The Yanbi Rasengan was his second original jutsu. Simply put, it was a technique intended for use on a target that absolutely, positively, could not be allowed to see another day. In a nutshell, it was the four-tailed menacing ball in the palm of his hand. The only difference was that now he could change the ball's path. Erecting a barrier jutsu like the Earth-style wall would do nothing to lessen the impact of the Rasengan because Naruto would just sidestep the obstacle and deliver his payload. Mind you, the backlash from the Rasengan would instantly retire any normal nin that attempted to use the jutsu. Anyone who valued their limbs would want to stay as far away from this jutsu as they could. But on the other hand, Naruto was the only person who could even use the jutsu, so the unfortunate side effect of losing an arm or a leg upon detonation could be overlooked. Upon finishing his ninjutsu training, Jiraiya had suggested that they begin to head back towards Fire Country. His student had growled at this, but reluctantly agreed to follow him back. They may have respected him as a warrior and had actually grown rather fond of his godfather, but even so, the boy still hadn't warmed up to the fact that he was going to be a Konoha nin. After another year of traveling around Fire Country, the Sannin had basically exhausted what his student was willing to learn. The boy had picked up stealth and espionage remarkably quickly considering his violent personality. Though, after Jiraiya had remembered that his pupil had been sneaking around for almost 10 years as a manhunter, his pride as a master teacher had been somewhat lessened. The boy had calmed down significantly. He'd left the Leaf Village 6 years ago, but a few of his animalistic habits had remained. He still ate people and he still had issues with his anger, but overall the blonde was very agreeable. Sort of. Over the years, the Kyuubi had been oddly silent within the boy. This had caused the would-be nin to latch onto his godfather as a replacement companion. It all made sense now. Naruto was happy when the sage beat him in their spars because it reminded him that the man was a worthy opponent. The veteran ninja was powerful enough to beat him and was therefore worthy of recognition and was welcomed as one of the pack. He just had to remember who the alpha fox was. This pack mentality became disturbingly clear when they began to live in populated areas for extended periods of time. The idea was to reintroduce his feral student to civilized life by moving from town to town, traveling to more populated villages when the boy seemed to be ready to do so. The first 3 relocations passed without issue and the Sannin began to relax and fall back into a normal routine. That had been a mistake. When the man had been training with his godson, he'd either been fighting for his life or trying to teach the bull-headed child something new. This meant that Jiraiya, the legendary super pervert, was nearly 6 years behind on his research. After making sure Naruto wasn't going to massacre any innocent bystanders, the pervy sage had left for some well-earned peeping. Of course he'd let himself get caught. Being beaten by a mob of half-naked women usually meant that he could cop a feel, or 30, and no one would be the wiser. However, his overprotective student went insane at the sight of someone else beating on his packmate and had attacked. He'd pulled his teacher clear and then gone to hell on the village with Cannonade Doppelganger Jutsu. After that was done, the village, along with several others that just so happened to be located in the direction that Naruto had fired, had been utterly annihilated. Only after another year had passed did the not-so-pervy sage feel that it was safe to let his student back into a village. X. Was sitting on a bench in the village's park watching as the sun began to set behind the trees. Contrary to what most people would assume, Naruto liked sunsets, they were peaceful, and it was one of the few times that his favorite color appeared naturally. His softly glowing eyes were drawn from the scene when a small rubber ball hit his feet. "Sorry, Ani-chan." A childish voice called to him from a short distance off. "Can you give us back our ball?" Naruto picked up the little ball and locked eyes with the child that had addressed him. He could have killed the happy little girl that was smiling at him, but he didn't. The ball had annoyed him slightly, but it wasn't like it had hit him in the face or something. It had been an accident, and the child was sorry about disturbing him. And most importantly, she'd been respectful. Besides, killing a child would make a mockery of the kitsune's power. He only killed the weak if he needed food or if they disrespected him. He tossed the ball back and returned to his sunset. "Thanks, Ani-chan," the little girl said as she and her friends began to play their game again. 7 years ago you probably would have killed that girl. The Sannin said as he sat down next to the demon vessel. Naruto smirked. "You're right, I probably would have." The two of them sat in peaceful silence as they watched the fiery orange of the setting sun dissolve into the inky curtain of night. His sensei began to fiddle with his vest pockets. "I got you a present." "Oh? What's the occasion?" The man pulled out a rectangular box and handed it to the boy. "It's your birthday." Naruto looked confused. "You never gave me a present on any of my other birthdays. What makes this one so special?" His godfather chuckled. "If I'd tried this kind of thing before now, you probably would have gotten angry with me or something." Naruto smiled. "Yeah, you're probably right. Though I suspect you were just being stingy." He added as an afterthought. "Oh Naruto, you hurt me with your cruel words," the sage exclaimed melodramatically. "Just open your present, you little ingrate." The boy did so. In the box rested a pair of orange and black fingerless gloves. "You got me. Gloves?" he asked, feeling a little let down. "You are stingy." Jiraiya turned his nose up. "I'm not," he contradicted snootily. He quickly dropped the act before the boy got mad. "Those gloves have seals on the palms that will allow you to summon one of your oh-so-special cannonballs into the palm of your hand. Just channel some chakra into them and poof, instant carnage. The best part is, you look stylish and don't have to lug around that unwieldy duffel bag anymore. How's that for stingy?" Naruto grinned as he slipped on the gloves. "You always manage to get me the perfect birthday presents." They tapped his stomach. His sensei just smiled and turned back to watch the rising moon. "What can I say, kid? I aim to please." Another year passed before the pair returned to Konoha, and during this time the boy had learned absolutely nothing. The simple fact of the matter was that Jiraiya had nothing left to teach him. Or, that is to say, he considered his godson to be dangerous enough for the time being. In any case, Naruto didn't seem to care one way or the other. The one thing that never really changed over the years was the boy's insufferable pride. Rather than try to humble the boy and most likely end up headless in the process, his godfather just let it be, and as a result the boy had gotten even worse. At the beginning of the trip he'd only been and only was a rather iffy word to use when describing a demon vessel. Now, he was at that new 2S rank, 5A rank, trained extensively in hand-to-hand combat for nearly 8 years, and, who could forget, was able to pop off a target's head close to a mile away. Most genin couldn't even touch their sensei, Naruto had nearly killed him. His pride was well earned. But that didn't make him any less obnoxious. However, pride aside, the demon child was ready to return to Konoha, and so the Sannin had sent a messenger frog to his teacher. The old man had written back, "You may return when I have called for you." In other words, his teacher was in the middle of a diplomatic pissing contest with the clans and the council. Contrary to popular belief, paperwork was not the bane of all cages. Political backlash was. Along with their undying fear of paperwork, many people were also under the impression that a cage had absolute control over their hidden village. This was also false. In theory, a cage held all the power in the village, but in reality, their power was disturbingly finite. The old man wasn't able to just kill people left and right for disagreeing with him. That is to say, legally he had the power to do so, but if he tried, his ninja would instantly rebel and strike him down. For all of the laws that the village had, it was still the person holding the biggest rock that was in charge. There was no question that Sarutobi held the biggest rock, but this did him little good if every ninja in the village turned on him. The majority of the clan heads, as well as the civilian council, were vehemently opposed to the idea of letting the demon child return. And Sarutobi couldn't exactly blame them for doing so. Naruto's attack during the day of mourning 8 years ago was still very fresh in the minds of the citizens of Konoha. As such, they would never allow their leader to bring back the creature that had caused nothing but hardship for the village. This was true, but the simple fact of the matter was that Naruto was their ultimate weapon. All of Sarutobi's long-term plans rode on the boy. If the Nine Tails was coaxed into the hands of their enemies, the village would be razed to the ground within an hour. He had to return to the village as quickly as possible. In the end it had come down to base intimidation. The clan heads had threatened to remove him from office by force if the need arose, but Sarutobi had simply smiled at this. He pointed out that Jiraiya would be very displeased with them for killing his teacher, probably to the point where he would go rogue. As this was sinking in, the old ninja had offhandedly commented that Konoha was very protective of his godfather. He wondered aloud what the young boy would do to those who had killed his teacher's teacher. This of course shut everybody up. They tried to bully him by throwing stones, he retaliated by dropping a mountain on their heads. More often than not, this was the way that ninja politics played out. The clans and the council had no option other than to submit to their leader. But as a consolation prize, the Hokage was willing to give in to a few of their demands. It's much easier to rule when people were under the misguided impression that their opinions mattered. Most of the demands had no bearing on the demon child whatsoever. The most common of the demands were petty things that the civilian council wanted, things like Naruto can't eat here, or Naruto can't buy from so-and-so, and so on and so forth. In layman's terms. Nitpicking. Sandaime knew full well that the boy would eat whoever he wanted wherever he wanted, and that it would be a cold day in hell before the little bastard ever started taking orders from him. So he'd agreed. He loved Konoha, but people were going to die regardless of what he did. Right now, his job was to minimize casualties, not keep everyone happy. He could either anger the civilians or he could anger the Kyuubi. The civilians were clearly the lesser of two evils. The ninja present was a different story. They had wanted to wait another year to bring Naruto back, citing the upcoming Chunin exams as the reason to delay his return. If the boy was present during the exams and, kami forbid, killed one of the visiting dignitaries, Konoha would be ruined. Once word got around that the Leaf Village was home to a crazy ninja who ate potential customers, no one would hire a Leaf Nin ever again. The village's economy would be in shambles, making it all too easy for Iware Kumo to finish them off for good. Sarutobi wanted to tear his hair out at the naivety of their argument. In his letter requesting their return, Jiraiya had given him an overview of the Jinchuriki's training. Right now the only thing that the old man could think about was the passage that detailed Naruto's brief stint in Lightning Country. If the blonde thought it was fun to set up shop on a cliffside and throw heavy steel balls at Cloud9, how would he react when he saw a bunch of rich, brightly clothed fat people walking slowly and in single file towards the village gates? He'd have a fucking field day. If the child wasn't within the village walls by the time the Chunin exams began, the Leaf would be ruined. It was possible, though highly improbable, that the boy would risk attacking a VIP while he was within the village walls. Naruto was strong, but he knew that he wasn't able to beat the entire ninja population of Konoha, plus 2 or 3 irate visiting cages. He would most likely hole up in a dark quiet place until the exams had blown over. But if he was outside the village with only Jiraiya holding onto his leash when a procession of easy targets walked by, it would be a bloodbath. The Sandaime knew what the ninja were after. In reality, the clans wanted to postpone the boy's return because they didn't want their children to get stuck on a team with him. After the Hokage had informed them that Naruto would not be placed on a genin team due to the inherent danger it would bring, the clans had become quite agreeable. However, this statement was only half true. Prior to the meeting, it had become public knowledge that Jiraiya was assigned to be a Jonin sensei due to the lack of ninja who'd volunteered for the position this year. Naturally, the clans had been ready to rip out each other's throats if it meant that their child would be taught by one of the legendary Sannin. This forced Sarutobi to act rather quickly, fearing that the clans would take after his and actually rip out each other's throats. It had been a long outstanding Konoha tradition to pair the dead last of the graduating class with a top-marking boy and girl. The lesser-known side of this team setup was that the sensei was oftentimes totally inexperienced when it came to teaching raw genin. Jiraiya wasn't new to teaching per se, but it was close enough to count. It had been more than 20 years since the Toad Sannin had taught Minato's team, and his recent work with Naruto had been completely different than training a normal genin. Point in case, a normal genin was incredibly fragile and had to be protected for quite some time before they could actually stand on their own 2 feet. Naruto was the very antithesis of fragile. The boy was pretty cool, he regularly got his head drilled in and wasn't afraid of anything. Superscript 1, but shitty grammar aside, for some reason this method created abnormally strong genin teams. Or S-rank criminals, though that small detail was often overlooked. As it was, Inuzuka Kiba was the dead last of the class, with Yamanaka Ino and Uchiha Sasuke at the opposite side of the spectrum, both having top scores. These 3 were chosen to make up the unofficial Team Jiraiya, much to the chagrin of the remaining clan heads. However, the Hokage had neglected to tell them one vital detail. The sage's only stipulation had been that his godson was to remain with him so that he could keep a close eye on the boy's behavior. On paper, Naruto would never be on a genin team, but he would be hovering dangerously close to Jiraiya's. However, the Sandaime would only divulge that little piece of information to the clans after his mountain was securely in hand. Kiba growled as he looked at the seat behind him. Smirking back was Uchiha Sasuke, jackass extraordinaire. The boy had done nothing but piss him off from day one. When he first arrived at the academy, Kiba had tried to befriend him. Sasuke had arrogantly stated that he would not befriend a weakling from a nothing clan and had promptly turned to leave, as though the mere presence of the other boy sickened him. As expected, Kiba had attacked him in a fit of rage, hoping that he could catch his opponent off guard and quickly win the fight. The fight was short. Kiba had gotten his ass handed to him by the much more experienced Uchiha. 4 years later, it still made him angry. In the weekly spars, Sasuke had proven himself time and again as he quickly and gracefully dispatched his opponents, cementing his place as the #1 Taijutsu combatant. This had frustrated the boy to no end because his clan's claim to fame had been their unmatched ferocity in unarmed combat. Yet the Uchiha had managed to beat him at his own game over and over again, making his victories look easy. As if that wasn't bad enough, Sasuke also had the entire female population of their class chasing after him and proclaiming their undying love for him. That wasn't the bad part. The bad part was that he didn't do anything about it. He just sat there, stoic and composed as the girls went wild over how cool Sasuke-kun was. Kiba would have killed to be in the other boy's position, and just to spite him, the Uchiha did nothing. He didn't even seem interested in girls. That train of thought, of course, spawned the notorious Sasuke joke amongst the other boys in the class, but it was quickly snuffed out after he decimated them in the weekly sparring matches. The boy was absolutely perfect and he was stuck as the dead last just because he'd rather sleep than do written work. What good did the history of Konoha do him in a fight anyway? Again he growled. Sasuke continued to look smug. The lazy voice to his left snapped him out of his staring contest. Simmer down, Kiba, it's too troublesome to get worked up like that. Inyazuka rolled his eyes. Shikamaru said that about everything. In fact, he was fairly certain that the lazy boy would stop breathing if it wouldn't kill him. I can't help it, that guy just rubs me the wrong way. The crumpled heap of Shikamaru on the desk made a small noise of annoyance. Troublesome. You'll probably never see him again after you graduate, so why should you care what he does? Kiba was about to reply when he realized that the boy had fallen asleep. He contemplated hitting him on his oddly pineapple-shaped head to wake him up, but decided against it. Letting out a defeated sigh, he slumped in his chair and began to prod the sleeping Akamaru on his head. You hear that, buddy? We won't have to deal with that stuck-up jackass anymore. The puppy on his head just yawned and burrowed deeper into the hood of his coat. That was something to look forward to, never seeing Sasuke's haughty smirk was going to be the highlight of this year. Or so he thought. After Iruka had silenced the class with the notorious big head jutsu, he gave them a long, and rather boring, speech about how they were ninjas now and how they were expected to act like adults. At least that's what Kiba thought his teacher was talking about. He'd chosen to follow Akamaru's example and burrow into his coat. I hopes that he could sleep and as such, only caught every third or fourth word that the man said. He was rudely awoken by a piece of chalk bouncing off his forehead. Iruka stared at him pointedly. At least he had the common decency to look embarrassed. Sorry, sensei. He rubbed the back of his head. The Chunin just sighed and began to assign them their genin squads. Kiba dozed off again until he heard his name called. Team 7 consisting of Inyazuka Kiba, his and Akamaru's heads popped up. Yamanaka Ino, simultaneous groans were heard. And Uchiha Sasuke, at this Kiba's head slammed loudly against his desk, causing his puppy to bounce not too gracefully off the hardwood surface. The little dog latched onto one of his ears, and over the pain and the growling, he was able to hear a loud cry of, "Ha! In your face, Sasuke-kun is all mine." Followed shortly thereafter by several anguished cries from the female population. This prompted yet another use of the big head jutsu. Ahem, as I was saying, Team 7 consisting of Inyazuka Kiba, Yamanaka Ino, and Uchiha Sasuke, your Jonin instructor will be Jiraiya of the Sannin. Pandemonium ensued. However, Kiba paid it no attention. Jiraiya of the Sannin. Hell yeah. With him as my sensei, I'll definitely become a kick-ass ninja. It's almost worth having the noisy girl and pompous prick on my team. He spared a glance out of the corner of his eye at Sasuke. The boy was grinning. Not one of his usual smirks, but a full-on split-your-face-in-half grin. It was kinda creepy. No, it was really creepy. But who cares? I got the Toad Sage Jiraiya. X. After Iruka had announced the rest of the teams, he'd informed them that they would have to wait for their teachers to pick them up. Fortunately, Kiba didn't have to wait very long. After Team 8, made up of Sakura, Hinata, and Shino, had been escorted out by some smokin' hot chick with red eyes, Jiraiya made his appearance. The pervy sage was nothing if not flashy. Smoke filled the room, and a chorus of croaking filled the air. In the center of the haze a hand shot out, fingers spread and swing and tuned to the music. As the smoke began to fade away, the Sannin spoke. From the east to the west and the north to the south he roams, battling the forces of evil and darkness. A faint silhouette became visible within the cloud. Men lock up their wives and babies dry their tears before my gallant presence. The legendary sage of Mount Myabakuzen, the smoke cleared completely, revealing a man standing in a strange pose atop a giant red and brown toad. Jiraiya. For a few seconds nothing happened, and then the room went insane. The newly christened genin flocked around the perverted sage, asking him a myriad of questions or simply screaming and passing out. Jiraiya was very proud of himself at the moment, but a small spike of hateful chakra quickly froze the blood in his veins. He had forgotten one very important thing, Naruto was competitive by nature. Filling intent flooded through the room, bringing the academy students to their knees by the sheer magnitude of the murderous aura. A whirlwind of red light exploded from the center of the room, sending tendrils of demonic chakra coursing through the room, hungrily seeking out a victim to devour. Abruptly the chakra storm stopped, revealing a blond boy dressed in loose-fitting orange and black ninja attire, razor-sharp claws extended, fangs bared and crimson eyes blazing. Jiraiya-sensei, you forgot to mention me. He chided darkly as he began to advance on the Sannin. How well will I ever make any new friends if nobody knows my name? The Toad Sage just rolled his eyes. Enough with the theatrics, Naruto, they get it. You're a badass. How about you just wait at the training ground like we discussed and we'll come and get you after we're all acquainted with one another. The pouted. You used to be a lot more fun than this. His childish look quickly evaporated as he turned on Iruka. Do you remember my scar face? He grinned wickedly. Terrified, Iruka could only nod. Excellent, he crooned. I was beginning to fear that the village had forgotten me. With that he vanished in another blast of toxic chakra. Jiraiya groaned as he looked at his cowering genin team. Why did his godson always have to make things difficult? One thing that wasn't taught in the ninja academy was that for a shinobi, death was an unavoidable reality. Every facet of a ninja's life revolved around death, so much so that by the time a ninja makes jonin, the practice of taking a life has become second nature to them. After a while, killing becomes a reflex, like blinking or breathing. Reports of blood-drenched jonin returning from their mission and reporting that nothing had happened were fairly common. In most cases, the veteran shinobi had literally killed their attacker in their sleep or had killed their opponent and had then forgotten that they'd done so. The most famous example of this kill and forget mentality that most high-ranking ninja developed had been demonstrated by Kakashi. The copy nin had been assigned an A-rank mission that entailed the assassination of a missing nin who had taken over a large village in the south of Fire Country. The man had declared that the conquered town would become known henceforth as the village hidden in the darkness and had appointed himself Shade Yamakage. To make a long story short, Kakashi had killed the self-proclaimed Kage and had then proceeded to roam the countryside for nearly 3 weeks, searching for his long-dead target. He only returned to Konoha after he'd discovered that some spineless bastard had stolen his kill nearly a month ago, causing his mission to result in a failure. Having already received payment for the mission, Sarutobi simply chuckled softly at Jonin's report before telling him that he was dismissed. The killing reflex or auto-kill syndrome was polar opposite when compared to the mentality of a fresh genin graduate. Many genin were under the mistaken impression that the life of a ninja was glamorous and exciting. They imagined that they would grow up to be heroes, legendary ninja who garnered respect and adoration from all who encountered them. The overall attitude was that they would become powerful warriors who would one day swoop down on the enemies of the Hidden Leaf and crush them. To them, death didn't even enter into the equation. How could they possibly be killed? After all, they were ninja. However, the brutal reality was that more than half of them would die when confronted with their first kill. After that, 1 in 3 of those who succeeded in making their first kill would retire from ninja life completely. Cold hard statistics showed that out of the 30 genin who graduated from the academy, only 4 or 5 of them would live to see their 25th birthday. After Naruto's flamboyant entrance, many of the academy graduates were ready to hand in their newly acquired Hit-ites and quit being ninja altogether. Jiraiya couldn't really blame them for wanting to do so. His godson's overwhelming killing intent had crushed their misguided view of ninja life into dust. They were mortal, they could die, and most importantly, there's always a bigger fish, so whatever you do, don't piss it off. Of course Jiraiya and Iruka had played the whole situation off like it was one big practical joke, saying things like of course that wasn't a demon. And I guess one of last year's graduates wanted to haze the newbie genin. In short order, lying through their teeth. But this could be considered a necessary evil. The village desperately needed to replenish its ninja population. First the Kyuubi attacked, and then it attacked again wearing the guise of a 4-year-old boy. Alone, these 2 attacks had claimed more than half of their shinobi forces, a crippling situation for any village to endure, and even then, another dark day was on the horizon for Konoha. 3 years after the demon child had left, an Anbu captain known as Uchiha Itachi massacred his entire family, leaving only his younger brother alive. The Uchiha were elite leaf nin, but more importantly, their clan was huge. When Itachi slew his clan, he'd simultaneously robbed the village of its most powerful bloodline and killed off perhaps 10% of Konoha's shinobi forces. After losing more than half of its military in a period of 7 years, the leaf was out of time. With both Kumo and Iwa snapping at its throat and no military to defend against a combined attack from 2 of the strongest shinobi villages, Konoha would surely be annihilated. However, it was Naruto, the bane of Konoha, who ended up saving the village. 4 years ago, the of the 9 Tails demonstrated a fraction of his prisoner's matchless power by completely atomizing a village in southern Rice country. This unintentional display of force had stopped the enemy villages dead. Even though both villages had control over, they would not risk open war with the keeper of the 9-tailed Biju King. If their demons fought, no one would emerge victorious. Konoha was granted a brief reprieve, but it wouldn't last forever. They had to repopulate their military immediately, or they would be forced to rely on an unstable, sadistic little boy to shield them from the Cloud and the Rock villages. So now they were lying to children, tricking them into dying for their village. That was the way things had to be. Jiraiya led his genin team to Training Ground 56. Training Ground 56 was an area that primarily taught ninja how to use the environment to their advantage. It was a large marshy plain, partially submerged under dingy grey water. Towards the outside it was ringed by a thick bamboo forest that cast shadows that appeared to never stop moving. The entire training ground was eerily quiet, save for the soft squishing of mud under his students' feet. Ino wrinkled her nose. This place is gross. Everything is wet, and this nasty swamp smell is never going to get out of my clothes. The Sannin sent her a brief backwards glance as he continued walking. "Just think of how your teammate feels," he replied. Another quick glance backwards landed on a very sick-looking Kiba trying to use the hood of his coat as a makeshift gas mask. He did not envy the Inyazuka's heightened sense of smell at the moment. The blonde's eyebrows raised in realization. "Oh, of course." She turned to Sasuke. "Sasuke-kun, are you alright? I know this place smells horrible, but if you walk close enough to me, my perfume should cover it up." Sasuke didn't say anything, he just continued to walk forward. "He was talking about me, you idiot." The indigent muffled voice of Kiba interjected. Ino rounded on her teammate with her hands on her hips. "Don't be such a pervert. The only boy who can smell me is Sasuke-kun." "I don't want to smell you." Kiba shot back. "And even if I did, I'm an Inyazuka, I could smell your perfume from a mile away. But it's probably better if I didn't since you would smell just as bad as the swamp." Jiraiya winced at his student's blunder. Kiba was correct, of course. The marsh stink had probably already saturated the girl's clothing, however he lacked the necessary tact to protect himself from the girl's fury. Right now, the Sannin was remembering a very similar situation between him and his curvaceous teammate. "Have fun hopping around, kid." She gave Kiba a murderous look before lashing out with her foot, connecting squarely with her teammate's shin. As the super pervert predicted, the boy began to hop around like a monkey who'd been stung by a wasp. "Ow, son of a bitch. What the hell did you eat this morning?" "Soldier pills." "DCH, some ninja you turned out to be," stated a smug Sasuke. "I guess I shouldn't be surprised though, given that you come from a no-talent clan of flea-bitten mongrels." Kiba's face contorted into a mask of pure rage. "Okay, pretty boy, let's go." Inyazuka rushed his smirking opponent, swinging at his head. The Uchiha read the boy's attack and caught him by the wrist. Utilizing the slick terrain, he slid forward, bending Kiba's arm at an awkward angle and kneeing him in the stomach. The boy didn't even have time to register the hit to his gut before he found his leg kicked out from under him and his face buried in the foul-smelling muck, a still smirking Sasuke on his back. Ino cheered at how cool her Sasuke-kun looked, but the boy in question just ignored her. Her opinion meant nothing, she was just as bad as the idiot pinned underneath him, however if Jiraiya was impressed, then his victory had meaning. As he turned to his sensei, Sasuke's smirk was instantly wiped off his face. The Toad Sage was scowling at him, clearly displeased with how his student had acted. "So you like to beat up people weaker than you?" he asked in a voice like ice. The next thing Sasuke knew, it felt like his head had been struck by a sledgehammer. His vision went fuzzy and his ears began to ring, but still, he vaguely became aware that he was skipping like a stone across the wet ground. He slowly skidded to a stop and after lying on his back for a few minutes in a vain attempt to try and stop the world from spinning, he shakily got to his feet. He looked towards his teacher. Jiraiya hadn't moved at all, he was just massaging his temples in an attempt to alleviate his current aggravation. Naruto managed to fuck everything up. "You should play nicely with others," instructed a phantom whisper. The groggy Uchiha turned to face the voice. What he saw froze his blood. The demon from the academy. For a few seconds Sasuke couldn't even breathe. It wasn't a practical joke being played on the newbie genin by one of last year's graduates. It was a monster. A living, breathing monster. His mind screamed at him to run and hide from this creature standing behind him, but he couldn't. He was frozen with fear. That thought hit him like a bolt of lightning. He was an Uchiha, the last Uchiha, and yet he was cowering like an infant in the presence of this demon. Sasuke grit his teeth. He was a ninja, a fearless shinobi of the leaf, yet he couldn't even bring himself to face his foe. How could he possibly kill Itachi and avenge his clan if he couldn't even look at this creature? "I'm not weak. I will destroy you, Itachi." Without warning he pivoted on the slick grass, drawing a kunai from the holster on his leg as he spun and burying it up to the hilt in the grinning demon's neck. He leapt back, retrieving another kunai. And to his horror, the demon boy didn't fall. Hell, he didn't even flinch. Naruto's ruby eyes lazily examined the blade that was jammed into his throat. The boy's expression didn't change as he ripped the blade out of his neck and tossed it to the ground in front of Sasuke's feet. "You missed your target. You hit my clavicle instead of my jugular." A sharp metallic click caused a pair of wicked-looking talons to extend from the boy's fingers. "Here, I'll show you how you do it. Naruto." The boy's head jerked towards his godfather. Jiraiya had a disappointed look on his face. "Genin? Really?" The insane grin on the boy's face fell as he looked back at a trembling Sasuke. The boy was weak. Far too weak to put up a decent fight against him. He could crush the little Uchiha like a bug beneath his boot, but this fact brought up a very pressing question. Why kill a bug? No one prospered from killing an insect. In the end, all you wound up with was a dead bug and a bunch of sticky goo on your shoes. They turned away. "No. Your flesh will not satisfy my hunger. There's no honor to be gleaned by killing trash like you. And with that, Naruto's claws retracted and he disappeared. The Toad Sannin breathed a sigh of relief. For a moment there, it looked like Sasuke would end up as fox food, regardless of the fact that he was no challenge to the boy. He signaled for his students to gather around him, and as they were walking warily towards their sensei, the hermit raised a slab of dry land out of the marsh for them to sit on. As they sat down, Sannin examined his team. Ino was faring the best out of the three, aside from looking slightly pale she seemed to be perfectly fine. Kiba wasn't in as good of condition as his blonde teammate, but he would live. His wounds were superficial, and the mud that now caked the front of his body wouldn't hurt anything except his pride. Sasuke was the worst off, but would still be fine. The punch that his godson had caught the boy with would hurt like a son of a bitch, but would do much more than that. Like Kiba, his pride was probably more damaged than his body. Thankfully, Kami Naruto was pulling his punches. If he'd hit the other boy at full force, they'd be finding bits of Uchiha's head in Lightning Country. What the hell was that? Muttered Sasuke as he continued to rub his throbbing skull. Jiraiya glared at him. I was about to ask you the very same thing. You provoked your teammate into attacking you so that you could impress your sensei by beating him. Guess what, kid, I'm not impressed. I'm pissed off. Sasuke's eyes drifted away from Jiraiya's, hoping that if he appeared aloof the older man would just leave him alone. Right now he didn't need to be scolded. The sound of muffled snickering to his right drew the Sannin's attention to Kiba. What are you laughing at, idiot? Don't forget that it was you who attacked your teammate first. Also don't forget that he kicked your ass because you couldn't control your temper. Kiba and Akamaru sagged. And you, he pointed at Ino. Did you say that you're wearing perfume? The girl gave him a cautious look. Yeah. Why does that matter? Jiraiya pinched his brow in exasperation. Kiba. The boy looked at him. What did you say to Ino earlier? The boy perked up and grinned mischievously. That she smells like a swamp. A sharp punch to the arm quickly wiped the smile off his face. He rubbed his arm gingerly. Damn it, woman, quit hitting your teammate. Geez, you hit like a man. This comment earned him another punch. The hermit sighed. Kid, you need to learn how to keep your mouth shut and look pretty, otherwise you're not going to last very long. Here he focused on Ino. He said that he could smell you from a mile away. Now, I'm not even trained in tracking by scent and I could find you. Lesson 1. He held up a finger. Kunoichi do not wear perfume, they don't dye it, and they don't try to be pretty. If you do any of these things, you'll probably wind up dead. The faint pulse of killing intent reached the Sannin. Apparently Naruto was becoming restless. He would have to finish this next part quickly. You are all teammates now, and as such I expect you to leave your personal feelings behind. I don't care if you all hate each other. I don't care if you all hate me. You will become a functional ninja squad and you will stop acting like children. Do you understand? A mumbled yes sensei was the only acknowledgement that the Toad Sage got, but it would have to make do. Jiraiya brightened. Okay, I'm done being hard-ass sensei now. So how about we get to know each other? The students were caught off guard by his abrupt change in mood. Suo. What do we say? Ino asked. Oh, nothing much, just tell us your name, things you like or hate, and what your goal for the future is. Kiba pointed at him. How about you go first? Jiraiya smiled. He'd said the very same thing to Sarutobi nearly 4 decades ago. Alright. My name is Jiraiya of the Sannin, I like it, he giggled. Writing and researching literature. And sometimes, if I feel I've earned it, I'll relax by the hot springs. Don't you mean in the hot springs? Ino interrupted. Jiraiya's perverted grin widened. Oh, you're dirty. The students shared a confused look, but it went unnoticed by their teacher. I dislike people who abandon their comrades and people who would betray their friends in order to become powerful. And my goal for the future is to see the 3 of you make Jonin. He pointed back at Kiba. Your turn, dog boy. Inuzuka sent him an irritated look at the dog boy comment, but he let it slide. He'd eaten enough mud today. My name is Inuzuka Kiba. I like Akamaru, the little head dog yipped. And learning new ninjutsu. I dislike people who look down on my clan or underestimate my skill. He shot a glare at Sasuke who pointedly ignored it. And my goal for the future is to become head of the Anbu Hunter Nin like my dad was. Jiraiya nodded. This kid was so similar to him when he was young that it was scary. Princess. Go. Ino flicked a piece of hair out of her face and began to speak. My name is Yamanaka Ino. I like flowers and. She trailed off, looking at Sasuke out of the corner of her eye. I dislike perverts, the Sannin winced. And people who are annoying. She growled like forehead. And my goal for the future. She blushed and again began to stare at the Uchiha. A fangirl. Goody. He nodded at Sasuke. Duck hair. Sasuke ignored the hair remark and steepled his hands in front of his face. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. There are very few things that I like and there are many things that I hate. Jiraiya rolled his eyes. Great, another psycho for me to deal with. At least I can beat this one up if he gets out of line. The boy continued to speak, not noticing his sensei's inner commentary. My dream for the future is more of an ambition really. To revive my clan. Ino blushed again. And to kill a certain man. Yep. Psycho. The sage's train of thought was interrupted by mocking applause. He groaned. Speaking of psychos. Naruto melted out of the bamboo forest, prompting the sitting Team 7 to scramble to their feet and get behind their sensei. To kill a certain man. The boy quoted. What a crazy, crazy little world it is, am I right Ichiha? Sasuke growled but stayed behind Jiraiya. He couldn't kill this opponent. Yet. My goal for the future is to kill a certain man also, but it appears that you already know who it is that you're going to kill. Lucky bastard. I'm still searching for my prey. The stroked his chin in feigned deliberation. What if we're both going after the same person? Ooh, that would be bad for you. I bet that I'd get to M long before you do. Stay away from Itachi. Sasuke spat. He took everything from me, I am deceived to be the one who ends his miserable life. Naruto grinned manically. Messing with this kid was like punching a drunken monkey in the face. It never got old. The boy shook his head in amusement and looked to his godfather. Dog boy, princess, duck hair. How come everybody got a nickname except for me? He whined. The toad sage curled an eyebrow at the very dangerous and very annoying creature he called his godson. Okay fine then. Jackass, introduce yourself. Naruto's forehead crinkled in confusion. Jackass. But my name is oh I see what you did there. You clever dog, you. His godfather gave him a hurry-up gesture and the boy obliged. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, though most people address me as you or fucker or you fucker. But that doesn't really matter seeing as though I have a nasty little habit of killing people who piss me off. Ino's eyes went wide. Oh yes. Today, Naruto. The boy sighed. Man you became so uptight after I stopped attacking you in your sleep. Perhaps I should bring the practice back. Anyway I like to go. Camping in the mountains and hunting for wild game. I dislike people who disrespect me or my pack and my goal is to one day fight a foe who is worthy of my jaws. Suddenly his eyes lit up. Oh and one more thing. Two flaming tails began to skate across the stone platform. I'm Kyuubi. For a ninja, there is no distraction more treacherous to be ensnared by than the illusion of emotions. In the academy, students were taught from an early age that a shinobi's own emotions could be far more dangerous than any tangible opponent. Anger made a ninja stupid, it caused them to attack without thinking and in so doing, they would fall into every single trap that the enemy had set for them. Likewise, overconfidence would inevitably lead to a ninja's death. The same held true for impatience or ignorance. It seemed like a cruel joke that every single one of these words could be used to describe a fresh from the academy genin. Among veteran shinobi, words such as these had become synonymous with labels like idiot and crow food. The main reason for this problem stemmed from the way that the academy trained any would-be leaf nin. In essence, it was an academy teacher's job to do the impossible. They had to shield their students from the harsh reality of the ninja world, death, while simultaneously instilling them with the knowledge that they were, contrary to popular belief, not invulnerable. In essence, the academy teachers were the most important part of the village. Their sole responsibility was to rapidly and efficiently turn out genin, the universal building block for a hidden village. If the teachers were too straightforward with the truth, there would be no genin produced that year. On the other hand, if they built up their genin's confidence too high, they would churn out worthless ninja, and the genin that year would most likely be killed before they could correct their teacher's mistake. The academy teachers walked a dangerous line between making their students too stupid as opposed to just stupid enough. So, while they did teach the genin about the dangers of emotions or hinted at what would be expected of them, most of what was taught ended up buried beneath layers of idle praise and half-truths. Academy teachers would often say things like and so was a true hero. He or she built their clan up from nothing, became a great ninja, kissed babies, helped old people across the street, and most importantly didn't flee from battle, even after Rock Cloud Sand Wave proclaimed give up. All your bases belong to us. This kind of drivel is usually punctuated at the end by a phrase like, and guess what? They were just like you. Now who wants to kick the crap out of each other in the weekly spar? That was just the way things had to be. Thinly veiled propaganda was passed off as history or social studies. Desensitizing children to violence was seen and accepted as a normal part of a ninja's training. Anyone foreign to the village was immediately categorized as savage barbarians who sought to destroy everything that they held dear. While it seemed cruel to essentially brainwash naive and impressionable kids into being child soldiers, it was just a way of life. The only thing that their teachers could do was hope that their students would remember the important parts instead of the fluff and filler. After Naruto's not-so-gentile announcement that he was the Kyuubi, the most hated and feared enemy in the history of the Leaf, only Sasuke was able to remember his basic training. Though, it didn't do him much good. He remembered that his anger made him stupid, but he couldn't bring himself to calm down. Remembered that his fear would hinder his abilities, but still he trembled before the demon. Remembered that pride was the ultimate killer of shinobi, yet couldn't shake the delusion that he would be the one who would finally kill the Nine Tails. Sasuke's head remained attached to his neck at the end of the day, only because his sensei kept an iron-like grip on his collar. Reason abandoned him, and he scrambled wildly against Jiraiya's restrictive hand in a vain attempt to escape. Naruto's crimson eyes adopted a mixture of vague amusement and utter contempt as he watched the Uchiha struggle against the Sanin's grip. Sasuke clenched his fists, barely noticing when his nails cut bloody crescents in his palms, and began to thrash harder. Those loathsome red eyes held the exact same expression that Itachi's eyes did after he'd killed their family. Naruto said nothing, having no need for such an unpleasant interaction when his insane grin and malicious eyes were speaking far more eloquently than he could ever attempt to. Judging by Sasuke's frantic motions, the message came across perfectly clear. You're trash. You will always be trash and there's nothing you can do about it. I could crush you into dust on a whim and nobody would be able to help you. You think you're powerful, but you're not. You think you can beat me, but you can't. You derive your pride from a bloodline that you don't even possess yet, leeching off the honor that your ancestors obtained and claiming it for yourself. How pitiful. Your brother was right not to dirty his hands with your blood. The worst part was, the boy was right. He would die if he tried to fight the demon vessel. Naruto could destroy him on a passing fancy and no one would be able to save him. And what was truly horrible was this, he didn't have his Sharingan. In fact, it was possible that he would never develop his clan's famed Genkai. According to the scrolls in the Uchiha compound, a little less than half of the clan was never able to unlock the Sharingan. For Sasuke, the inability to activate his Sharingan was his greatest failure. Everything rode on his bloodline, his future, his dream, everything. For the second time in his life Sasuke found himself trapped under the wicked gaze of a scarlet-eyed monster. And for the second time in his life, he was completely helpless. Kiba was a different story entirely. The boy neither remembered nor wished to remember his basic training. As the dead last of the class, he only tuned in for the lessons where so kicked the asses of at least 100 enemy ninja and when it was time for ninjutsu or taijutsu practice. With only the sugar-coated lies fed to him by Iruka-sensei, the Inyazuka was ill-prepared to be a ninja, let alone look upon the face of the monster that killed his father. Ironically, it was Naruto's unimaginable killing intent, not logic, which saved Kiba's life that day. Inyazuka are fiercely loyal to their pack mates. Family and friends were protected at all costs, and any death that befell the clan would not go unavenged. For them, the Kyuubi's attack 12 years ago was an unspeakable evil. No clan had been scarred more deeply by the Nine Tails than the Inyazuka. Right now, the only thought that was going through Kiba's head was how to make the bastard fox suffer. His Inyazuka blood roiled at the thought of being so close to the creature that murdered his father. It demanded that he kill the boy, crush him, rip him to shreds, burn him to ash, anything in order to avenge his father's death. However he couldn't. He could barely even breathe. His Inyazuka side roared for the boy's blood, but his primal instinct screamed at him to run away. Every muscle, every cell, every fiber of his being begged him to flee from this demon that stood before him. The Jinchuriki's killing intent was triggering literally every single defensive instinct in Kiba's body to go off at once, paralyzing him by the sheer overload of information. The boy couldn't have moved even if his life had depended on it. However, his instincts played their part. Kiba walked away from training ground 56 alive. Ino reacted in the most non-ninja way imaginable, she fainted. For a ninja, fainting during battle was the ultimate dishonor. You could be knocked unconscious or pass out due to blood loss, but you would never ever faint like a spineless coward when presented with an opponent. Especially if you were female. The life of a kunoichi often made a shinobis look tame by comparison. Not only were they expected to carry out all of the duties of a male ninja, complete with war, assassination, and low life expectancy, but they also had to handle seduction missions. Seduction missions were the lowest of the low. A kunoichi was forced to give her body to an ugly and oftentimes violent man in hopes that she'd be able to weasel a piece of information out of him. After completing this task, the men back in the village would avoid the seductress for a few weeks, regardless of the fact that the mission was absolutely necessary. And to top it all off, the pay sucked. After all, most seduction missions were C-ranked. And if that wasn't bad enough, shinobi still had the gall to label them the weaker sex. Displays such as fainting only encourage this idea, hence why no female ninja would ever find herself caught dead fainting like a frightened little girl. While Ino's behavior was shameful, it wasn't entirely unexpected. At this stage in her ninja career, gender didn't even enter into the equation. A fresh from the academy genin couldn't possibly have been prepared to deal with the killing intent of especially the jailer of the Nine Tails. Naruto lazily eyed his godfather's team, snickering softly as the Uchiha continued to flail like a chicken with its head cut off. What an amusing little creature he was. It looks like I've outlived my welcome once again. He shook his head in mock embarrassment. I simply must learn to contain my excitement whilst meeting new people. I'll never make any new friends if everyone I meet is so opposed to my foxy companion. I suppose that if I can't be all buddy-buddy with your genin team, I'll have to fill the horrible void in my soul with violent and destructive missions. Oh woe is me. Naruto's face split into an evil grin. I'll be seeing you soon, Jiraiya. And with that, he flickered out of view. Getting his students under control proved to be an arduous task for the Toad Sage. Sasuke had been unusually vocal about following the little blonde killing machine, even though he knew that he couldn't even compare to the boy. This suicidal behavior would make Jiraiya's job very interesting in the upcoming weeks. What good would a legendary Uchiha do if he was batshit insane? The Sannin couldn't understand it, but for some reason Sasuke felt the need to use Naruto as a measuring stick. Jiraiya had nothing against friendly rivalry, but this kind of reasoning was fundamentally flawed. The most noticeable aspect of this backwards logic was that even Jiraiya of the legendary Sannin ranked below his godson in terms of raw power. Comparing Sasuke to Naruto was like trying to compare an anthill with a mountain. And if that wasn't bad enough, the Keeper of the Nine Tails would be furious if he ever found out that the Uchiha thought himself a worthy opponent. To besmirch the demon vessel's honor so blatantly would bring about destruction on an unimaginable scale. It would make the incident in Rice Country look like a joke. Kiba was just as bad, if not worse than Sasuke. Contrary to the boy's usual bombastic personality, he'd calmly asked when their training would begin. Even to an untrained civilian, it would have been simple work to discern the Inuzuka's intentions. He was going to try to kill Naruto. Jiraiya just shook his head. Right now, the hermit could count those who were a match for his godson on his hands. After the boy had fully realized his potential, he would be completely invincible. Again, Kiba wasn't even on the boy's radar and, in all likelihood, never would be. Thankfully Ino didn't follow the example of her teammates. She only signed on as a ninja because Sasuke-kun had become one. If it meant having to deal with an unstable demon vessel, so be it. However, that didn't mean, by any stretch of the imagination, that she would openly challenge the boy in one-on-one combat just to impress the Uchiha. She'd be eaten alive. And so would Sasuke if he decided to challenge Naruto. The Uchiha was dreamy and cool, but this kid was a monster. Even the Yondaime, the strongest ninja in the history of Konoha, hadn't been able to defeat the Kyuubi. What possible chance did fresh genin have against a beast that the fourth Hokage couldn't kill? After he'd managed to get his genin to calm down, Jiraiya spoke. Naruto, he locked eyes with each of his students. Is unlike anything you've ever encountered. He's not a boy, he's not your comrade, and he is not to be trifled with. Kiba scoffed at this, causing Jiraiya to raise an eyebrow. You don't believe me? The Toad Sannin pulled up his shirt, revealing a tangled mess of scar spider webbing across his chest. His student's eyes widened in shock. Take a good look at these, this is what you get when you tangle with a. Your reward is pain. He let his shirt fall again. None of you can fight him, no matter how much you hate him. You will respect him, even if you have to bite your tongue to do so. He will play with your mind and you will let him. He will strike you with his claws and you will not fight back. You will not provoke him in any way, because if you do so the entire village will pay for it. Do you understand me? Ino replied with shaky, "Hi, sensei," but her teammates made no move to acknowledge their teacher. Do you understand me, genin? Jiraiya repeated in a frigid voice. Yeah, Kiba mumbled. Sasuke just offered a HN that could probably be construed as agreement before turning his eyes away from his teacher. Perfect. The Sannin growled dryly as he began to stand. Let's begin your training. The process of being assigned a higher level mission, AR Anchor S rank, was more often than not an incredibly boring and convoluted procedure. Unless time was of the essence, accepting a dangerous mission could take anywhere between 6 hours to 6 days. There was paperwork, meetings with the client, strategizing, more paperwork, and last but not least, haggling over pay. However, the rules could be bent if it was the one asking for the mission. Nothing shaped clarity better than the threat of imminent death should the one receiving the mission become bored. When Naruto had barged into Sarutobi's office unannounced and demanded an AR rank mission, the old man had given it to him. After all, trying to reason with a bloodthirsty demon was like arguing philosophy with a brick wall. Idiotic. Luckily the Sandaime had just the mission for the boy. It was an internal affairs matter which meant the destruction that Naruto would inevitably create would be, more or less, contained and wouldn't reflect poorly on Konoha. Nothing ruined a ninja village quicker than killing a client. The boy's mission was simple, travel to a small town on the border of Fire Country and intercept a traitor Leaf Nin who'd stolen a valuable scroll in hopes that he could use it to barter passage into the village hidden in the sand. Of course Naruto didn't care one way or another as to the reason he was assassinating this rogue ninja, he just wanted to kill someone. Overall the boy's interaction with the old Hokage was very favorable, but nevertheless Sarutobi still had one stipulation for the mission, sending along an Anbu babysitter. They didn't seem to mind this new condition. After all, babysitter and sack lunch meant the same thing, right? Traveling at top speed, it only took 2 days for the boy and his Anbu consort to reach the border of Fire Country. Near the end of their first day of travel, it had begun to rain, and even now, the foul weather persisted. While this rain was annoying, at least for the Anbu, it was ideal for an assassination. The clouds shrouded the light of the moon, and the falling sheets of icy water obscured the target's vision. A target would be wrapped in perfect darkness, unaware of their imminent demise, even after the assassin's blade was lodged firmly in their heart. Then the killer would melt like a wraith back into the rain and darkness. That was the idea anyway. Climbing to the edge of a small cliff, the demon vessel came to an abrupt halt. Naruto adopted a low stance, gauging his target by using 2 of his fingers as makeshift sights. He appeared to do nothing, remaining perfectly still as rivulets of water fell from his statuesque body. He continued to aim into the darkness. His Anbu escort growled impatiently, rain pelting audibly off of his porcelain mask. "What the hell are you doing, demon? Your mark is going to be long gone if you don't stop wasting time." The boy said nothing. He flexed his gloved hand, causing a large steel globe to materialize. He lowered his finger sights. The bird mask hid its wearer's surprise. "You don't actually think you're able to hit him from here, do you?" Again the child said nothing. The Anbu threw his hands up in the air in exasperation. "You're insane. I'm an Anbu scout and I can't even see the town that this guy is supposed to be staying in. How could you possibly think that you'll be able to hit him from up here? We're probably over 2 miles away." The Jinchuriki's eyes flared to life, cutting through the gloom and the rain as they raked across the distant village with their baleful crimson glow. "Quiet," the boy bit out. His Anbu babysitter mumbled something about how it wasn't his fault that the mission had failed and that the Hokage couldn't blame this one on him. Naruto shot him a look that promised death. "The noise will cease or the killing will commence," he growled irritably. The man fell silent. Naruto turned back to the practically invisible town and spoke as though he'd fallen into a trance. "Target within interval of 3-mile range limit, shot deemed acceptable. Wind speed at approximately 2.8 to 3 miles per hour, compensate for interference with a rotational speed of 5.5-5.7 revolutions per second to the left. Negative gravitational acceleration and constant thermal expansion accounted for. Correcting shots for the Coriolis effect, Magnus effect, and gyroscopic drift. Target is stationary and unsuspecting. Projectile air time estimated to be 7.27.25 seconds, percentage of lethal shot. 98.5%. Engaging to render the target eternally silent." The Jinchuriki's arm seemed to teleport into the throw, sending the steel ball barreling towards the village at unimaginable speeds. A deafening bang accompanied the shot, an after effect created by the lightning-quick movement of the boy's arm. The concussive wave rippled through the tall grass and the falling rain, flattening the plant life near the epicenter of the blast and momentarily creating a crystal curtain out of the falling rain. The friction created by Naruto's arm cutting through the air had lit the appendage on fire. The flaming cocoon hissed angrily as it was struck by the droplet's earthbound water, however the boy didn't even notice. Even when the flames began to slowly peel the flesh from his arm, he stood perfectly still. A look of malicious excitement slowly spread across his features as he continued to track the orb's trajectory. But Sogo sat on the bed in his hotel room as he watched the rain fall. He was having a good day, just a few more hours, and he'd finally be in Wind Country, safe from the monster that plagued Konoha. No psychotic to worry about in Suna, no sir. Suddenly the man exploded. His head and torso appeared to have been liquefied completely on impact with a supersonic projectile, splattering messily across the walls of the hotel room. Absolutely nothing above his waist was identifiable, bones, organs, and muscle had melted together into an unrecognizable soup that now painted the room. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, Mitsugo was dead. So much for disappearing unnoticed back into the rain. Naruto smirked. Target has fallen silent. Mission accomplished. He slowly extended his claws as he turned around. "But you don't care, do you, Anbu-san? Because you're already dead, aren't you?" The boy finished turning around and learned that his previous statement was correct, the man was dead. Headless in fact. This shifted his attention to the cloaked figures that murdered his babysitter. A large oddly shaped man with something wrapped in bandages on his back and a smaller man with glowing red eyes stared back at him. The boy couldn't hold back his maniacal grin. Come now, you two. I of all people can understand a flair for the theatrical, however there's a fine line to tread between a dramatic entrance and out-and-out rudeness. Wouldn't you agree, Uchiha Itachi, Hoshigaki Kisame? Neither figure replied. Kisum hoisted the bandaged object from his back and Itachi's Sharingan began to spin wildly. Naruto clicked his tongue in mock scolding. So rude, but I guess it can't be helped. In that case I ask you, Uchiha Itachi, Hoshigaki Kisum. 5 flaming tails began to swing behind the boy. Will your flesh satisfy my hunger? Sheets of frigid rain fell unrelentingly from the sky as the trio of ninja continued to stare at one another. The opponents locked eyes again and again, ruby on ruby, then ruby on ichthyoid, daring the other side to make the first move. Waves of killing intent radiated from the 3S rank nin, mingling with the darkness and the falling rain, saturating the clearing with its malevolent presence. Naruto's lips peeled back, revealing the boy's cruel fangs in an insane mockery of what humans would describe as a smile. His expression held no mirth whatsoever, quite the opposite in fact. It was a look of sadistic excitement and bloodlust, a pale impersonation of human emotion. This would be it. This would be the battle that validated his existence. This would be the moment that defined his life. He would do battle with the pair of infamous nuke nin. The ninja would kill each other, stripping muscle from bone and until naught was left but hollow shells of twisted flesh in a macabre attempt to rip the life out of the opposing side. The Jinchuriki's heart began to pound in anticipation, his 5 blistering tails thrashing at the ground behind him. Across the field from him stood the ultimate prey. If he was able to bring them down, he would feast on the sweetest meat imaginable. The blonde began to salivate at the thought of it. Or better yet, they would kill him. Finally his nightmarish existence of eternal boredom and disappointment would be over. No more would he have to search for a worthy opponent. No more would his existence be meaningless. If Kisum and Itachi cut him down in battle, if he died violently and painfully in this unnamed field, torn in two with his blood mingling in the mud and rainwater, he would finally be happy. He could think of no other end more befitting for a demon than this. Again Naruto's eyes flicked to Kisum. The Kirinin's eyes held an identical malice within them, a cold animalistic hunger that only fellow monsters could understand. The missing nin's shark-like grin threatened to split his face in half, revealing row after row of large jagged teeth. Even in the suffocating darkness, the Jinchuriki's demonic eyes could clearly make out the shape of the swordsman's muscles, straining through his sodden cloak, begging him to do battle with the young boy. The boy's eyes shifted again, this time landing on Itachi. The Uchiha was much less interesting to look at when compared with his towering partner. His Sharingan eyes continued to spin slowly, conveying a subtle danger with their hypnotic rotations. The man's face remained perfectly neutral, apparently unperturbed by the massive amount of killing intent generated by the blonde and his own sharky accomplice. He stood statuesque, tranquil. Even in the midst of 2 dangerous creatures sizing each other up for the approaching clash, his face didn't betray a thing. Itachi simply stood there, waiting. "Itachi?" The deep and slightly trembling voice of Kisum asked. The man continued to stare unblinkingly at their target. Clear me to engage the target. I don't care if your plan is half done and I don't care about collateral, just clear me to engage. Though Itachi's face didn't show it, the Kiri swordsman had surprised him. The Akatsuki had strict rules about nearly everything, with the foremost being the rules of engagement. Collateral damage of any kind, though often necessary, was unacceptable. Their organization had to remain in the shadows and as such, they afford the luxury of running wild. However, this wasn't what surprised him. What surprised him was the tone of voice that Kisum used. The shark man had ordered Itachi to clear him for combat. Akatsuki was an extremely rigid organization. Operatives were always paired in teams of 2, no more no less, consisting of a senior member and a junior member. Out in the field, the senior's word was unbreakable, unquestionable law. If the junior failed to follow the orders of their senior, no matter how trivial, Leader Sama would punish them. Severely. For Kisum, the junior, to give an order to Itachi, the senior, was something unheard of. The very notion was almost insulting enough to warrant the use of the "No." Itachi deadpanned. "And be wary of your tone, Kisum. Were we alone, I would not hesitate to remind you of your place." The monster of the mist just grinned wider as he finished unwrapping the bandages that constrained his sword. "Sorry, senpai. I'll accept my punishment after the fight." The eyes of the normally stoic Uchiha narrowed in anger. Nothing he could say would stop the blood-hungry shark man now. Trapping the swordsman in the would be somewhat detrimental to their current situation, and killing him outright would be just as ill-advised. Itachi was powerless against his partner's stupidity, a situation that he'd hoped to have been rid of after leaving Anbu. "Oh," he whispered dangerously. Kisum shot across the field at speed seemingly impossible for a man of his size, his beloved Samahata trailing behind him as though it were made of paper. Upon seeing this, the demon vessel let loose an ear-splitting roar. Dropping to all fours, the boy seemed to vanish, creating a trail of smoldering grass and charred earth as he closed in on his newest prey. Under normal circumstances, the Kirinin wouldn't even be able to see due to the speed at which the boy was moving. But at night, Naruto's five-tailed chakra cloak lit up in the darkness like a signal flare. The shark man planted his foot on the slick grass and without even waiting to completely stop, swung his blade. Samehada intercepted the crimson blur with sickening force, stopping it dead. However, that was all that the Kiri swordsman managed to accomplish. Instead of doing what most people did after being struck by the legendary sharkskin, he rocketed uncontrollably through the air. The demon child did the unthinkable. He absorbed the hit. His claws formed a crosshatch web as they connected with the sword, and although his legs nearly buckled under the force of the swing, he was able to remain standing. Though the very notion seemed impossible, Naruto, through brute strength alone, had managed to block Kisam's massive sword. If Kiri Nukenin was surprised, his face didn't show it. With practiced ease he adjusted his stance, flipping his grip in the process so that he could take advantage of Samehada's long handle before levering the giant blade downward on the boy. Naruto grit his teeth as the swordsman slowly but surely began to overpower him. The demon vessel twisted out of the way, causing his opponent to lurch forward at the sudden loss of resistance and inadvertently bury Samehada in the soft muddy ground. Caught off guard, the monster of the mist was forced to momentarily abandon his weapon in order to dodge a head-level swing from the boy's razor-sharp claws. The child missed and consequently overshot his target by a fairly large margin. He landed and was forced to immediately duck as Kisam's colossal weapon passed through the space where his torso previously was. He weaved through Kiri Nin's unnaturally quick strikes with the grace of an acrobat, dodging every single swing effortlessly, dancing around his much larger opponent. Playing with him. The Nuke Nin mistimed one of his strikes, and the demon container immediately exploited it. After a running lunge, the jagged blade hung in the air for a fraction of a second too long, just enough time for Naruto's claws to latch on. He slammed the sword into the ground before lashing with his five immolated tails at the flat-footed Kisam. The burning appendages knifed through the air at incredible speeds, whipping and spearing all around the still madly grinning shark man. The swordsman had to admit this kid was good. It didn't take a genius to figure out that Kisam was the muscle of the operation. His thick muscles, huge stature, and colossal weapon screamed, "I'm a close combat freak. Let me crush your skull." However, that was the only function he could play. As the role of a tank, all of these traits were a boon, but in any other situation, they were a severe drawback. The swordsman's considerable bulk hindered his ability to dodge, forcing him to rely on his thick hide and sturdy bones to protect him in combat. But when facing an opponent like it, not even his stout defenses would be able to shield him from the beast's punishing blows. Already, the blonde's talons had torn across his torso multiple times, each time striking closer and closer to the Mist Nin's vitals. But the path between him and his weapon barred, Kisam was beginning to become slightly nervous. Coupled with Samehada, his size was a deadly weapon, but without the blade, it just made him a giant target. The shark man roared in pain and frustration as Naruto's claws once again raked across his chest, carving deep angry wounds into his blue flesh. He lashed out blindly, scoring a lucky punch on the boy with enough force behind the blow to tear a normal man's head off. Though disoriented and in a considerable amount of pain, the demon child was able to spin into a clumsy landing. As soon as he touched down, the boy found himself on the defensive, flipping away from the thorny blade as Samehada nearly ripped him in two. Again the boy landed, only this time when he hit the ground, pain exploded from his shoulder. He lashed out at the phantom assailant, only to be blindsided by the shark man's newly reclaimed weapon. Naruto sailed through the inky sky, a bolt of lightning revealing the boy's mutilated left arm and an arc of blood trailing behind him. The blonde's injured body struck the ground with a wet squelch, and for a moment he didn't move. Waves of excruciating pain flared throughout the demon vessel's ruined arm, the massive tattered muscle seemingly unable to heal itself. Suddenly he was on his feet, cackling wildly as his fishy opponent began to close the distance between them. He flexed his uninjured right hand, conjuring a metal ball into existence and targeting the swordsman's head. But as soon as the shot was lined up, another spectral blade entered his body. Only this time it struck his perforated arm. The pain was unimaginable. Naruto howled in rage, swinging his tails violently in hopes of crushing the unseen opponent behind him. Even though it felt like fire was lancing through his arm, the boy didn't forget about his target. With an ear-splitting bang, the heavy cannonade was sent rocketing through the air towards the charging swordsman. The supersonic projectile connected with Kisam's forearm, splintering the shark man's thick bones with an ease that suggested that they were made of toothpicks. The force behind the impact was more than enough to send him sprawling face first onto the wet ground. Across the battlefield, Itachi's Sharingan eyes widened. To the traitor Uchiha, time had all but stopped, giving him a clear view of the incoming cannonball that was streaking towards him. He dodged, dropping to his knees and sliding forward through the mud as the heavy steel ball missed the top of his head by, literally, a hair's breadth. The ex-Leaf Nin immediately knew that he wouldn't be able to draw out this battle. Against a host of the Nine Tails, the duo's normal strategy, trapping the opponent in a genjutsu and letting Kisame beat the crap out of them, would be of no use. For starters, the boy had already inflicted a crippling injury on his partner. Without the use of his arm, the swordsman would be hard-pressed to beat the boy unless he merged with Samehada. And even then, the prospects looked bleak. The wounds that his shadow clones had been inflicting on the boy were being healed almost instantaneously. Even that last strike to the boy's heavily wounded arm didn't seem to do anything. Any other ninja would have fallen to the ground unconscious from the pain or at the very least stutter in their next attack. But Naruto had barely even flinched. It seemed that the only thing that Itachi had managed to do was piss the off. The drawback that came with their two-man Akatsuki cell could only be exploited under such a selective set of parameters that it was thought to be non-existent. And yet here he was, dead in the water. The impossible had happened. Kisame, the monster of the hidden mist, had been rendered practically useless due to his shattered forearm, and Itachi didn't have the skills necessary to incapacitate the demon child. At least not without damaging his eyes no end. Genjutsu was completely ineffective against the demon container. During the trio's little staring contest at the beginning of the fight, the Uchiha had cast no less than 20 different on the boy. Every single one of them had been broken before they even had a chance to take hold, and the scary part was that the boy didn't even seem to be consciously releasing the illusions. With his ace in the hole gone, Itachi was forced to rely on his taijutsu skills. However, they had managed to rob him of that skill as well. The simple fact of the matter was that Naruto's veil of demonic energy was far too potent to come into direct contact with. In fact, with the amount of red chakra he was releasing, the Uchiha was surprised that the boy was still breathing, let alone fighting. Ninjutsu was still available to the Konoha Nuke Nin, but it didn't make much of a difference. The large majority of the jutsu that he knew were area of effect jutsu. Not only would they draw an obscene amount of attention to their little battle, but he would also catch his partner in the crossfire. With all other venues closed off, Itachi was forced to use his ultimate trump card. As the Sharingan wielder pirouetted out of the path of a second steel ball, he was able to briefly lock eyes with his opponent. Their crimson orbs met only for a fraction of a second, but that was all the time Itachi needed to seal the boy's fate. A horrible burning sensation took hold of Itachi's right eye, as though someone had splashed a phial of caustic liquid into his face. Blood began to drip down the side of his face, and his vision blurred out of focus. Tsukiyomi. Itachi's eyes flashed into a shuriken design, and abruptly Naruto found himself bolted to an iron crucifix. He roared in pain as the weight of his body began to crack the stake-impaled bones of his arms and legs. But even amid the torturous pain, a twisted grin spread across his face. "Time to meet something scary." He chuckled. The demon child snapped his head up, meeting eyes with the floating figure of Uchiha Itachi. "This is the realm of the..." He drawled disinterestedly as he slowly drove a ninjato into the chest of the suspended boy. Though his teeth clenched at the pain, the grin didn't fade from the blonde's face. "Here I am God. Here I control all things. For the next 72 hours you will roam the darkest depths of your nightmares." He finished burying the blade into the growling child and drew another from his cloak. As the second blade neared him, the boy unexpectedly burst into hysterical laughter. Itachi's eyes narrowed in anger as he rammed the sword into his prisoner, but instead of silencing him, the child's psychotic laughter only grew louder. "Itachi," the demon vessel rasped, undeterred by the droplets of blood that had begun to fall from his mouth. "You seem to be gravely mistaken about who is God in this place." A sharp crack was heard as the bones in Naruto's arms suddenly gave way. Yet the boy didn't even seem to feel the pain, his malicious grin only widened. "You're a very long way from home, Uchiha Itachi." An abrupt pain exploded in the Uchiha's skull, and behind his closed eyes tiny white light flickered and danced. He opened his mouth to cry out in surprise only for his mouth to fill with putrid-tasting water. Itachi recoiled from the taste of instinct, unintentionally breaching the surface of the shallow water. The Sharingan wielder's mind was a storm of questions, the foremost of these being what happened. And where am I? Of these two questions, the latter was much easier to answer. The shin-high murky green water, the labyrinth of pipes running overhead, the soft trickle of distant drainage conduits, he was in a sewer. A rather large and sinister sewer, but a sewer nonetheless. His first question never got the chance to be answered. As Itachi got to his feet he heard a sound that made his blood run as cold as ice. Laughter. Menacing, inhuman, earth-shattering laughter. Laughter that he'd only heard once in his life 12 years ago on the darkest day in Konoha's history. The laughter of the Kyuubi. In front of him the water began to froth and steam, lit by an evil reddish light submerged just below the water's surface. A blast of searing mist momentarily blinded the Uchiha, and the next moment the man found himself staring upon the ever-grinning visage of his demonic opponent. "This is the realm of the Kyuubi, the domain of the nine-tailed king. Here we are God. Here we control all things." The laughter crescendoed, igniting the surface of the water through some unseen means, and the boy's figure was quickly consumed. However, his demonic voice continued to echo throughout the sewer. For the next 72 hours you will roam the deepest depths of any nightmare that I can imagine. Welcome to hell, Uchiha Itachi. The curtain of superheated fog dispersed, slowly unveiling the colossal form of the nine-tailed fox. Its face slowly stretched into a grin, mimicking its jailer's cruel expression, almost exactly as the beast slowly brought its head towards Itachi's petrified body. Little Uchiha, it began to chuckle softly. Let's play. Pain. All he knew was pain. Itachi reeled forward, unable to even think, let alone stand in the midst of this mind-numbing torture. His head struck the unyielding floor of the sewer with a sickening crack, leaking a splash of crimson into the murky green water. Submerged beneath the rapidly expanding halo of blood and putrid water, the Uchiha Sharingan eyes spun wildly, vainly trying to break the illusionary world that their master was trapped in, but unable to do so. Itachi could move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even scream due to the horrible amount of pain he was in. His fingers twitched sporadically, struggling desperately to latch onto something, a lever, switch, a cyanide pill, anything to put an end to this unholy torment. A sticky mixture of blood and fragments of tongue began to seep from Itachi's gaping mouth. The Nuke-Nin unconsciously shredded the organ in an attempt to make the pain stop. His Anbu training did nothing to numb the pain. There was no happy place he could retreat to, no pocket of solace that he could hide within, no escape from the undiluted agony that now coursed through his veins. He couldn't escape into the depths of his mind because he was already there. All of his mental blocks were crushed to dust by the fury of the nine-tailed king, swept away as though they were constructed from sand or ash. Kyuubi had brought him to his knees effortlessly. It was killing him without even touching him. The Uchiha's body began to self-destruct. His bones splintered within his body, simply unable to bear the strain that the man's own muscles were exerting on them. Tendons and ligaments snapped under the tension, tearing themselves away from Itachi's ruined skeleton in sharp jerky movements. He grit his teeth until they shattered, again causing a gory soup to once again pour from his mouth. Amidst the indescribable torment, only one thought remained anchored in Itachi's mind. "Ami, please, let me die." The mantra echoed inside his mind over and over again, as unceasing and unrelenting as the suffering that racked his body. Itachi's mind was instinctively trying to destroy itself in order to spare its host from any further pain. "Ami, please, let me die." Darkness claimed him. Whether his optic nerve had been severed or his prayers had been answered, he didn't know. The darkness seemed soft and safe. It was quiet now. No more frantic splashing as his nails clawed at the floor. No more rushing of blood in his ears. No more cracking of bones, no more tearing of muscle, no more pain. Silence. Solace. Death. The feather-soft voice whispered in his ear. "Wake up, Itachi." The Uchiha smiled at the voice's naive suggestion. "I can't hear your silly voice, I'm dead." The soothing voice was suddenly replaced by roaring laughter and Itachi's eyes snapped open. Staring back at him from no more than 3 feet away was the colossal grinning visage of the Kyuubi. "But Uchiha, if you're dead then how are we talking?" The demon questioned with a mocking childlike innocence. Itachi fell to his knees, trembling in anguish. It wasn't fair. He was dead, he'd escaped from the fox. "Not again." He whispered brokenly, "Please don't hurt me again." Kyuubi's eyes glittered with malice. 71 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds little Uchiha. Both Naruto and Itachi fell to the ground. The former managed to catch himself, panting in exertion as he worked his way up to an unsteady base. The latter struck the ground like a sack of bricks, unresponsive. Broken. From where he knelt, they could clearly see the amount of damage that his prisoner had inflicted on the Sharingan wielder's mind. Itachi's sharp calculating eyes were now dull and dead, more closely resembling the eyes of a doll than a living breathing man. Aside from the occasional twitch, the Nuke-Nin's body remained unnaturally still. If one were speaking scientifically, Itachi would still be considered to be alive. His heart continued to beat, his lungs continued to breathe, and his chakra network still circulated his life force. But all it took was a single look into Itachi's legendary eyes to realize he was dead. They once said that a person's eyes were the windows to their soul, reflected in the Uchiha's eyes was nothing. His brain still functioned, but his mind was shattered. Itachi was gone, but the earthly chunk of meat that people knew as Itachi remained. With a furious growl, Naruto plunged his claws into the ground. How? How could the pride of the fabled Uchiha clan die so easily? How could this happen? Again he'd been robbed of his existence. Again he'd battle with a supposedly worthy opponent, only to be met with bitter disappointment. Again the wheel of pain had been turned. Amid the storm of anger and disbelief that raged in the boy's mind came a small nagging feeling, like he had forgotten something. It was a thunderous punch to the temple that finally rid the demon vessel of his amnesia. Kiss him. He skidded across the slick ground, unable to recover from the first blow in time to dodge the second. 5 knife-like claws entered the boy, carving a series of deep bloody gashes across his back. Naruto roared in anger, tails whipping blindly at the source of his pain, striking nothing but open air. Again the hammer-like fist connected with his head, and again the boy was sent flying. Strobes of multicolored light danced across his vision as he flew into the air, creating a technicolor nightmare which served only to accentuate the throbbing pain that now coursed through his head. Naruto knew of no word which could aptly describe the force behind the Sharkman's blow. It had felt like a building had collapsed on top of him, nothing had ever hit him with such horrific power before. Which was most likely the reason why Naruto had never before felt such overwhelming excitement. Yes, Hoshigaki, kiss him. You're worthy of my claws. Your flesh will satisfy my hunger. It twisted in mid-flight and touched down, driving up a spray of earth on impact. He hooked his claws into the ground, slowing his out-of-control momentum, just enough so that he could roll into a low crotch and face his assailant. For the first time in a very long time, Naruto was surprised. Looking back at him was the hulking figure of Kisame. Kirinin seemed to be more shark than man now. 2 large fin-like appendages extended from his arms with a third running down the length of his back. His whole head had changed, becoming sleeker and more streamlined, jutting slightly forward in order to better utilize his massive crushing jaws. Wicked saber-like claws extended from the tips of his fingers and a transparent membrane connected the digits to one another, like the feet of a frog. However, all of these features were quickly forgotten when the demon child caught sight of his opponent's powerful tail. It swished slowly, menacingly, behind the Kirinin, an action that made Naruto's body cry out for the swordsman's blood. Kisame was a monster, a demon. Something like him. The boy's tails began to mimic the motions of his enemies. They slowly swept back and forth across the ground behind him, challenging Kisame, encouraging him to attack. The look of psychotic glee seeped into the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's face. Kill me. The Nukenin needed no further encouragement. He crossed the distance between them in the blink of an eye, his wrecking ball fist once again aiming at Naruto's head. The boy vanished in a flash of crimson mere seconds before the blow connected and a sudden pain lanced across the Sharkman's face. Kisame's eyes darted around wildly in vain hopes of finding his invisible foe. A flicker of scarlet was the only warning he had before the demon vessel's talons embedded themselves into his side. Kisame roared in anger. His hand shot forward, clamping down on the Jinchuriki's neck with horrendous force. Naruto's eyes went wide as his windpipe gave way with a wet crunch. Kirinin whipped his body into the ground again and again, as though he were little more than a rag doll caught in the grasp of a sadistic child. The Sharkman pinned him to the ground and readied the claws on his massive hand for the killing blow. And then, suddenly Kisame was on the defensive. Naruto's flaming tails tore into his opponent's body, their demonic energy burning large rotting holes into the Nukenin's hide. Kisame acted on reflex, viciously backhanding the boy in an attempt to escape from his lethal tails. However, luck seemed to be smiling down on Kisame. The jarring impact of the blow gave the Kiri swordsman just enough time to escape from his foe's fiendish tendrils. The grievous wounds that littered the Sharkman's torso slowly began to heal, though the pain still lingered. Apparently the little bastard's tails inflicted damage on the soul. Kisame would most likely deal with this pain until the day he died. He shot a backwards glance at the rapidly healing boy. And if he couldn't figure out a way to put the down, that day would arrive much sooner than he had anticipated. The sound of quiet laughter floated past the Nukenin's ears and a smile slowly began to creep across his face. This kid was good. The laughter slowly intensified until it erupted into an echoing symphony of psychotic laughter. Excellent. Excellent. I haven't felt so alive in ages. Again Kisame, kill me again. The swordsman turned, hands blurring through seals. Water release. Grand waterfall jutsu. Fire release. Fire dragon missile jutsu. The union between fire and water could only be properly described by one word. Catastrophic. The nearby town was completely annihilated, consumed by the advancing wall of water, smothered beneath the 1,000-ton wave. All manner of plant life crumbled into fragile chunks of ash in the presence of this unholy supernova before being swept up by a never-ending wave. The laws of nature seemed to abandon this spectacle. Flames continued to burn beneath the dome of water. Waves rejected the laws of gravity, bent into inaction by a sinister will. The world dissolved into a wasteland of steam. This was a submarine voyage to hell. This was a thing that should not be. And shielded from the eyes of Kami beneath a veil of steam, the demons fought. They were animals, wild dogs whose unquenchable lust for the enemy's blood had blinded them to thought and reason. Tactics were abandoned, strategy was meaningless, and any semblance of form was cast aside as the monsters ripped into one another with teeth and talons. Naruto materialized out the mist, slamming his blood-drenched claws into the shark man's chest again and again, hardly noticing the deep jagged gashes that had been inflicted upon his own body. It was unfathomable pain that finally halted the demon container's assault. Isam's massive jaws slammed shut on the boy's shoulder, severing the Jinchuriki's entire arm in a torrential spray of gore. Naruto roared in agony, which only caused the monster of the mist to tighten his hold on the child. The Kyuubi vessel shifted his attack, his claws jackhammering through Kisam's neck in a shower of blood and tissue. The Kirinin recoiled in shock, unintentionally releasing the boy from his jaws in the process. Now that he was free, Naruto could inflict some serious damage. He vanished into the fog, distancing himself from the swordsman in order to maximize the effectiveness of his next attack. When he took aim with this jutsu, taking cover behind a mountain wouldn't be able to save his target. And then suddenly it hit him, his gloves were gone. On two separate occasions Naruto's arms had been ripped from his torso, the first by Samehada and the other just now. And while his arms may have regenerated, his gloves didn't. His thoughts were brutally interrupted as Kisam's knee collided with his jaw. Instinctively the torqued his body in an attempt to land on his feet, but to his great surprise and mild panic, he realized he couldn't move. He was trapped within a globe of water, his body held stationary by the water's crushing pressure. His burning eyes widened when they locked with those of the Kirinin below him. The cruel light inside the shark man's eyes told him everything. Isam was going to drown him. For the first time in his life Naruto felt fear. True fear juxtaposed by true happiness. The human side of his mind screamed at him to do something, anything, to avoid the cold grasp of the Shinigami. His demon side screamed at him too, but for a very different reason. If he was going to die here, Kisam would die as well. The demon vessel racked his oxygen-deprived brain for an answer, it didn't disappoint. They had pitted their bodies against one another in a test to see whose broke first, now they would do the same with their minds. Ivory flames erupted from the child's mouth, enveloping his form entirely, and instantly the aquatic prison began to boil. Kisam grit his teeth at the blistering pain that shot through his arm, it felt like he'd submerged his hand in magma instead of water. His initial reaction was to tear his hand from the sphere of frothing water, but he knew that he couldn't. This would be his only chance to defeat the demon boy. The hosting the Nine Tails was practically invulnerable, however the key word was practically. Apparently even a demon has to breathe. The whole scene was disturbingly beautiful. Kisam's hand plunged into a sphere of immaculate radiance, its soft luminescence reflecting off of the surrounding raindrops, making it appear that a million diamonds were falling from the sky. It was serene. It was perfect. It hurt like Motherfucker. Kisam tore his hand from the orb of molten moonlight, revealing that his flesh and muscle had been melted completely. Without the swordsman's influence, the water prison immediately evaporated and the boy fell to the ground, haggard and groggy but still alive. The kneeling Naruto grinned darkly as he stumbled to his feet and began advancing on his opponent. You have fought better than I'd ever imagined. You are truly worthy of my claws, Hoshigaki Kisam. Naruto's grin wavered. It's truly a shame that I have to kill you now. A small smirk settled on Kirinin's face. Don't feel too bad about it. I have a hunch that you won't even touch me. He cast an amused look at the monster of the mist, a look that was soon replaced by anger. Amaterasu. Naruto found his path barred by a wall of ebony fire, and a sense of mounting frustration overcame the demon container at the prospect of being robbed of his kill by a man who was supposed to be dead. Crimson eyes met and a ghost of a smile played across Itachi's face. I killed you? Apparently not. The Uchiha deadpanned. Naruto could almost feel his patience withering. I saw the look in your eyes when you fell to the ground. You were dead. Shadow clone. And the collision of our jutsu. Susanoo? The child simply nodded as he continued to eye the wall of fire. Fucking Uchihas. So what now, Uchiha Itachi? Are we simply going to stare at each other for 7 days and 7 nights until the ebon flames of Amaterasu die out? No. We are going to retreat. And with that both Itachi and his mutilated partner shot off into the mist. Naruto remained motionless, paralyzed by unthinkable rage. Don't run. He whispered hollowly as his glowing eyes continued to track the rapidly retreating heat signatures of his prey. His chest heaved, his heart thundered in his ears, his tail struck the ground behind him furiously. Don't run. The cyclone of ruby chakra exploded from the boy, condensing into 7 flickering tails. Why are you running? Flecks of foam began to fall from his mouth. Don't run. The Jinchuriki's tail slammed against the ground one final time before lashing forwards towards the child's mouth. A vivacious plume of crimson light flared into existence within the boy's gaping jaws, crackling with a fury that only its creator could rival. Sparks of black light danced across the orb's surface, eclipsing the scarlet sphere until nothing but darkness remained. 7-tailed menacing ball. It was like witnessing the birth of a second son. The foggy wasteland was swallowed beneath an ocean of light and fire, utterly consumed by the flames of inky garnet. Sky met earth, and all things dissolved into a nightmarish realm of shadow and flame. Hurricane-force winds leveled what remained, their actions seemingly guided by an evil master. There was no life in the void, only death. A malefic grin spread across Naruto's face as he surveyed his handiwork, but as the midnight flames began to die down, his face twisted into a mask of hellish rage. They had lived. The spectral form of Susanoo wavered out of existence, and Itachi fell to the ground, tears of blood leaking from his patternless Sharingan eyes. Itachi was blind. All around the Uchiha, shards of silver glass clattered to the earth, shattered remnants of the unbreakable mirror, the Yata no Kagami. Not even the legendary shield of Susanoo could stand against the might of the nine-tailed fox. Kisame had escaped from the attack unscathed due to his partner's interference. To Naruto, this only leads to injury. Not only did he fail to kill the fleeing pair, but he also wasn't even able to touch his true prey. His attack was for nothing. A mirthless chuckle floated out of the Jinchuriki's mouth. Still alive. The boy's tail slowly began to move back towards his mouth. Allow me to remedy that. The voice as cold and unyielding as steel sounded from behind him. Shinra Tensei. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as pain exploded throughout his entire being. It was as if some vengeful god had reached out of the heavens and backhanded him. He was sent rocketing into the air at incredible speeds, cutting through the sky like a bullet. With a sickening crack he struck the ground, the impact of which broke nearly every single bone in his body. The sharp stone of the earth tore into his body, peeling great strips of flesh from him with every subsequent impact. He didn't know how far he'd been thrown, and he didn't care. Only one thought lingered within the boy's mind before darkness claimed him. He had been defeated. Pain's eyes narrowed in anger as they took in the scene of hellacious destruction that now stretched before him. The ground, once soft and green, had been baked into a sheet of solid rock. Trees had been incinerated entirely, leaving behind hollow carapaces of charcoal and ash, crumbled shadows that would forever mar this land. Deep chasms of fire littered the surface of the wasteland. Labyrinthine. An infernal web, born of an infernal father. The corruption of this land was absolute. Even the air that he breathed was dead and burning, a poisonous fume laced with the potent energy of the nine-tailed fox. As his eyes settled on the broken forms of Itachi and Kisame, Aimenin's face contorted into a scowl. They had disobeyed him. In Akatsuki, rules were written in stone. They could not be bent and they could not be argued. They were absolute, and the punishment for breaking the Akatsuki's creed was severe. But to break his rule, his creed, was to incur the wrath of a god. They were criminals. Scum. Traitors and murderers who were not even fit to look upon him let alone serve him. He had taken them in, sheltered and protected them, and this is how they chose to repay him, by undermining and destroying all that he was trying to create. Kisame, had he the chance, would have killed the vessel of the nine tails, in spite of his specific orders that was to be captured alive. This act angered the Amikage greatly, but it didn't surprise him. Kisame was an intelligent creature, he could plan and reason, recognize logic and foresee consequences. However, any semblance of intelligence quickly evaporated when he was faced by a powerful opponent. Kirinin walked like a man, but in his heart Kisame was just a monster. A predator driven to madness by the siren song of fresh blood. However, Itachi's actions, or lack thereof, were completely inexcusable. He was the senior member, he was in command. If his junior was being insubordinate, then the proper course of action would have been to strike him down. But instead the Uchiha allowed himself to be manipulated like a puppet, a marionette at the beck and call of its insane master. Itachi was weak. And in Akatsuki, weakness was not tolerated. Though in the darkest corner of his mind the Rinnegan Wilder knew from whence his anger spawned. He was jealous. The battle between the Kyuubis and Kisame tore this peaceful land asunder, cutting short countless lives in the process. Countless sinners. For decades Konoha and its enemies had used his home as a battlefield, caring nothing for the thousands of innocent civilians that happened to get caught in the crossfire. His family was killed, his friends were killed, and everything that he had loved had been destroyed. The land wept for the fallen. The land of rain. The land of hell. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. He had killed the boy who he thought of as a brother in order to exact his revenge on the village of the Leaf. Konan, the girl that he loved, the girl that he would have done anything for, hated him because of his insatiable lust for vengeance. He had lost everything that he cared for in order to make Konoha pay for what it had done, and Kisame and Itachi had simply marched into Fire Country and laid it to waste. And they hadn't even realized the magnitude of what they had done. Pain's eyes snapped to Kisame, a murderous light glowing within his multi-ringed orbs. Kirinin opened his mouth to say something, but the leader of Akatsuki instantly cut him off. Shinra Tensei. Kisame roared in pain as his already wounded body was crushed to the ground by the Amikage's Kekkei Genkai. Try as he might, the shark man's body refused to move, immobilized by unmatched pressure. With a soft click, a large obsidian blade slid from the same nun's robe. "Ashigaki kiss him," he drawled neutrally. "You are guilty of insubordination, the punishment for which is death." In a flash the blade had bitten through the shark man's neck. Slicing through muscle and bone effortlessly, severing Kissam's head in a shower of gore. Save for a few sporadic twitches, the Nukenin's body lay still. Pain flicked the bloody beads from his weapon and turned towards the still kneeling figure of Itachi. "You have failed me, Uchiha Itachi." The Sharingan wielder bowed his head. "I know, master. I am sorry." The smirk tugged at the corner of Pain's mouth. "Do not worry. You will have many chances to prove your usefulness to me." Itachi's brow furrowed in confusion. "That is to say." Without warning the ebony blade swept downwards, severing the Uchiha's head in one clean motion. "Your body will." Naruto's eyes slowly began to open as the aquatic metronome of leaking pipes roused him from unconsciousness. The blonde shook his head in puzzlement as he began the arduous task of getting to his feet. His body just didn't seem to be moving the way it did normally. In fact, it was almost as if the air surrounding him was heavier than normal, like he was trying to swim through jello or tar. His mind, usually a whirlwind of activity, was totally still, and a strange sensation like his head was filled with moist cotton gradually began to take hold. The sound of soft gravely laughter echoed behind him. "It's not easy being human, is it, Naruto?" The grin came across the boy's face as he turned to face the one who had addressed him. "No. It's not easy at all, Kyuubi-sama." "Kyuubi-sama." The fox chuckled in amusement. "Why so formal, Naruto? There's no need for such proprietary among longtime friends." The boy cocked his head in confusion. "But you are my king, my king. I would sooner die than think of myself as your equal." "Oh?" The demon questioned in mock curiosity. "If I am your king then why treat me as if I were a scullery maid? Surely you can't expect me to keep picking up the pieces and patching your broken body back together." The Jinchuriki's eyes widened in horror. Please forgive me Kyuubi-sama, I meant no." The child's sniveling was promptly squelched by uproarious laughter. Naruto. Kyuubi chided through laughter. "You take things too seriously. I have no qualms about stitching you back together." Suddenly the fox's laughter cut off. "But take heed Naruto, you are not immortal and if you continue to do battle so recklessly, you will inevitably be destroyed." The boy nodded warily. "If I am not overstepping my bounds, my lord, how can I be killed? I've been decapitated and yet still I could fight. I bleed for days and suffer no ill effects. Fire cannot touch me, wind cannot scathe me. With your power, Kyuubi-sama, how can I not be invincible?" The phantom smile crossed the great demon's face. "You've already answered your question Naruto, and yet you can't see the forest for the trees. We are a hybrid race, neither human nor demon, and as such your frail human shell limits your true potential. My power is volatile, much too volatile for your mortal body to control. With time you can adapt to it, but if you were to initiate the seven-tailed transformation again, you would die. You still need to partake of food and drink. And least you've forgotten so quickly, you still need to breathe." Naruto at least had the good graces to look embarrassed by that remark. However the Kyuubi seemed not to pay the boy any mind and continued to speak. "And as you yourself said, this power is mine and as such it can be ripped from you in its entirety. Most assuredly, that would kill you." The boy looked away, for the first time ever ashamed by his pride. What must I do Kyuubi-sama?" he asked softly. The fox merely chuckled. "You're a clever boy, figure it out for yourself. Like I said before we are a hybrid race, your weakness is mine just as much as my power and knowledge is yours. You'll figure it out. One way or another you'll figure it out. Wake up Naruto." X. The Jinchuriki's eyes shot open, snapping rapidly from side to side in an attempt to locate any oncoming threat. Thankfully there was none. The voice to the blonde's left spoke slowly and in an overly calm voice. "Don't stab me in the face." A small smile settled on the boy's face as he turned towards his godfather. "I'll be sure to take that into consideration." Jiraiya snorted at his godson's glib version of humor and began to look the boy over. "You look terrible, kid. What the hell did you get yourself into out there?" Naruto blinked in a befuddled manner. "Out there? Where am I now?" The Sannin quirked an eyebrow. "You're in the hospital kid, you've been here for 5 days. This is where people end up after they've had most of their skin come off." A pang of worry shot through the demon vessel. "Why didn't I heal? My skin came off." Jiraiya leaned back in his chair and nodded. "It was gruesome to say the very least. At first the doctors thought that you'd been hit by a fire jutsu, but when they took a closer look they discovered that the damage was at its worst inside you. It was almost like you'd been cooked from the inside outwards." Kyuubi's warning replayed itself in his mind. "My frail human body," he whispered. "You say something kid?" the hermit questioned. Naruto shook the thoughts from his head. "Nothing of any importance sensei." "So what happened?" If I was melting a couple days ago, how am I awake now? Jiraiya looked at him as if he were crazy. Well, crazier. Naruto, you regrow your limbs on a regular basis and eat people. I would have been surprised if you didn't wake up a few days after being melted. However, that begs the question. Why were you so injured? The boy was silent for a long time before he finally spoke. You will tell no one of what I'm about to tell you, are we clear? The Sannin flinched at his godson's abrupt change in demeanor, but nodded his head. I'm the blind-sighted. I'm not strong enough to use the full power of the Kyuubi. I drew out too much of its chakra and it started to kill me. Jiraiya digested this information and chose his next words very carefully. How much of the Kyuubi's power did you use? 7 taels. Though the toad hermit's face remained stoic, brain began to work in overdrive. 7 taels. 7. Just being around him when he activates 4 taels is almost too much, but 7? That's ridiculous. What was Naruto fighting that would warrant the use of that much power? The Sannin paused. Who were you fighting? The boy ignored the question, opting instead to pull the various IVs out of his arms and get out of bed. Naru. Jiraiya. The demon container interrupted. Do you trust me? Not at all. His godfather immediately replied. Naruto smirked at that. You are a wise man, Jiraiya. In that case, do you fear me? The toad sage didn't like where this was going. Yes. He answered tentatively. Then believe me when I tell you that no good can come from the knowledge that you're seeking. Suffice to say, it is my business and mine alone. If it would allay your fears, I can assure you that your village is in no danger. The simple fact of the matter is that it would make my life much more difficult if Sarutobi were to uncover what occurred on my mission. Tell him that one of my original jutsu backfired. As a ninja, Jiraiya had no qualms about falsifying testimony. However, the thought of offering up false information to the Hokage left a bitter taste in his mouth. Sarutobi was his mentor, his friend, the man whom he thought of as a father. Could he really lie to him? Naruto was beginning to get impatient. Sensei. He was going to have to. What could he say? Jiraiya liked living. I recognize that you are a very capable ninja, Naruto. Sarutobi will say nothing about what you've just told me. I can only pray that my faith in you is not misplaced. The boy's stern expression softened considerably upon hearing his godfather's words. Thank you, Jiraiya. Think nothing of it. The peaceable silence was broken by the Sannin snickering, and the blonde gave his godfather an irritated look. Something funny, Jiraiya? Kid, he chuckled. Have you seen what you're wearing? The wave of embarrassment and anger flooded through the boy as he looked down at his current attire. Uzumaki Naruto, the nine-tailed king, the monster of the hidden leaf, was wearing a hospital gown with his ass hanging out the back. Jiraiya, the boy seethed. Where the fuck are my clothes? It took every fiber of control within the toad sage's body to keep him from saying something very stupid. I couldn't begin to tell you, kid, but hey, how about I use buying you new clothes as an excuse to get the hell out of here? The boy nodded, seemingly unaware that ribbons of scarlet chakra were beginning to leak from his body. See you, kid. And with that, Jiraiya leaped out the window and disappeared in search of clothing. Thankfully, the hermit returned before his godson was able to kill anyone, and with that little issue behind them, the duo left the hospital. The clothes that Jiraiya had bought him were practically identical to his old ones, except for one major difference. I need new gloves. The deadpanned as he continued to flex his hands. Mine were, shall we say, rendered inoperable. The toad Sannin shook his head in disbelief, but then suddenly went still. Oh, this is gonna be beautiful. Come on, kid. It's high time that you learn how to seal. Naruto opened his mouth to complain, but then he was hit with a thought. What else am I going to do to pass the time? Sure. Why not? As it was when Jiraiya began teaching him 8 years ago, Naruto learned many things. And like before, none of them were considerably useful. The art of sealing was difficult to say the very least. In fact, unless you had inborn aptitude for the technique, it was damn near impossible to even learn the basics. That being said, Naruto was a combat specialist. He lived and breathed the thrill of battle and reveled in the fact that he was best of the best. So when his godfather began to teach him the intricate details of sealing a steel ball into a glove, the boy nearly lost it. It wasn't until the sage showed him the effects of an exploding tag that Naruto actually began to pay attention. Ravenously. Like all men, he was born with an innate attraction to things that blew up. This trait in and of itself was normally harmless and would eventually play out in one of 3 ways. 1. The man would control his pyromaniacal urges and grow up to become someone of little interest. 2. The man would blow off a few fingers before realizing, hey, that was a stupid idea. I'm not doing that again. And, like in case 1, become someone of little interest. 3. The man would blow himself apart. The unifying detail in all 3 cases is that in the end the man would no longer be able to blow things up. Naruto, on the other hand, blew the shit out of himself constantly and hardly even noticed. This led to problems. These problems were promptly solved by the proper application of explosives. To make matters worse, the Toad-san accidentally let it slip that he was training both his genin team and Naruto through the use of shadow clones. This led the boy to discover that memories of shadow clones are transferred to the original upon the clone's dispersal. And with that, a technique that was originally intended for the purpose of scouting was morphed into an intensive training technique. With the boy's ungodly amount of chakra, he could create thousands of shadow clones to learn for him. In one day he could learn a year's worth of material, and with the King of Demons so integrally connected to him, Naruto could process the sudden surge of knowledge almost instantly. Only too late did Jiraiya realize that he'd mounted the proverbial Gatling gun on the shark this time around. High-grade exploding seals were carved into every single steel ball that the boy had in his arsenal. Reinforcing seals were drawn into every stitch of clothing that he wore. Elemental repulsion seals were affixed to his gloves, chakra reservoirs, and training weights were tattooed onto his body. And if that wasn't frightening enough, the boy began to tamper with Yondame's seal. After 2 weeks of this training, the Hokage could take no more. He sent Naruto on an S-rank mission far away. The mission quashed an insurrection in the Land of Waves. A revolution led by one Mamachi Zabuza. Have I done the right thing? Sarutobi sighed wearily as the question yet again dug its way out of his subconscious. For his entire political career, this question had followed him like a wraith, an intangible whisper whose sole purpose was to fill him with a sense of restless dread. When he was younger, it was much easier to silence these negative thoughts, much more desirable to remain ignorant of the fallout caused by his actions. But now he is old. He was too old to maintain the ruse that he'd set in place in his youth, too wise to be tricked by his own lies and wishful thinking. And now, with his defenses worn away, the question plagued him endlessly. Naruto plagued him endlessly. The old man took a long drag from his beloved pipe and slowly released a stream of blue-hued smoke into the air above him. His eyes drifted to the open folder on his desk. It was the Wave mission, Naruto's mission. The mission had started out as a C rank. Like any other C rank mission, the objective was fairly simple. Escort a bridge builder back to his homeland and then provide protection for said bridge builder until his bridge is complete. Challenging for a team of rookie genin, but nothing extraordinarily dangerous or life-threatening. However, the client had lied. By building his bridge, the client had managed to draw the eye of a shipping industry giant named Gato. For years Gato had had a monopoly on the shipping yards in Wave, and when one controlled the imports and exports of an island nation, they controlled everything. Suffice to say, Gato was a very rich, very powerful, and very dangerous man. If this bridge were to be completed, Gato stood to lose hundreds of millions of Ryo. And in an instant, the bridge builder was Gato's greatest priority. The bridge builder's treachery was discovered by his guards only after they had reached the heart of Wave. Gato had employed one of the most lethal killers in the business, a man by the name of Mamachi Zabuza. Against the legendary demon of the hidden mist there could be no victory. The genin, their Jonin sensei, and the bridge builder all were killed. After his job was completed, Gato felt that Zabuza's promised payment was too steep for his taste and tried to double-cross him. Of course, the demon of Kiri didn't take too fondly to the idea of being stabbed in the back and killed by the shipping giant. This left him in complete control of the man's wealth as well as his shipping monopoly. In essence, Zabuza was now the new ruler of Wave. Driven by his lust for power, the pseudo-Kage enacted a law which granted amnesty to any missing nin who swore their loyalty to him. And, as expected, all manner of scum swarmed to Wave. An army of cutthroats and villains whom Zabuza would inevitably let loose on his home village of Mist. The man's insane obsession to become Mizukage was finally becoming a reality. Sarutobi exhaled another plume of smoke before closing the file and placing it in his desk. Although the situation between Zabuza and Kiri was none of Konoha's concern, the fact still remained that Kiri Nuke Nin had killed 4 of their ninja. That was an offense that Sarutobi couldn't let stand. Now more than ever, the village hidden in the leaves couldn't appear weak. Konoha's enemies would only stay their hand if they witnessed an act of overkill. And overkill was Naruto's specialty. The boy's mission was about as clear-cut as an S-rank mission could be. In the file, the mission was described as unrestricted heavy urban combat, but in simple English, this could be translated into kill everything that moves. An objective that Naruto would be all too eager to complete. This mission was absolutely perfect for the sadistic, and yet Sarutobi couldn't shake the feeling of anxiousness that had settled in his heart. He'd always known that the child was powerful, frightfully so, but that knowledge still hadn't prepared him for the utter destruction that Naruto had wrought on his mission 3 weeks ago. The wake of ruin that followed the boy had made it absolutely clear that he was unable to carry out missions within Fire Country. The collateral damage that inevitably ensued was far too steep a price to pay, even if the mission was completed. This was why Naruto was perfect for this mission, any damage that the boy inflicted would do nothing to harm Konoha. Wave, however, was an entirely separate matter. Sandame's reluctance to send his most powerful agent to a country that was neutral towards the Leaf Village. Sarutobi had no qualms about ending innocent lives if it meant that Konoha would endure, and he cared far less about the lives of those who resided in Wave. But after witnessing firsthand what the boy was capable of, the question tortured the old man. Have I done the right thing? In a few hours the sun would be setting. That was when Naruto would arrive in Wave. That was when the Hokage would have his answer. Naruto lay against the trunk of a large tree, watching peacefully as the sun disappeared behind the horizon. A soft smile spread across the boy's face as he continued to bask in the crimson light. This was his vice, his flaw. His humanity. However, as the sun slipped away so too did his smile. The familiar vicious grin took its place on his face, and the warmth in his eyes took on a much darker air until only hunger and rage remained. Because of Zabuza's offer of amnesty, the docks of Wave were choked with murderers and traitors looking to take the man up on his offer. Boatloads arrived every day, and with so many bodies moving about, nobody noticed a young blonde boy, no matter how out of place he seemed. It was only after the boy started releasing an evil-feeling chakra did they take notice. "Hey kid." A wiry green-haired spoke. "Whatcha doin'? That's some kinda keke genkai." Naruto's answer was to lash out with his talons, decapitating the man in a spray of blood. 4 more quickly followed suit, dead on the floor of the dock, before they even realized something was wrong. It was a jonin from Iowa who reacted first, and consequently, was the next to die. The jonin struck, lunging at the with a ninjato. The man's eyes widened in horror as the boy seemed to vanish. A gurgling scream was ripped from Iowa Nin's throat as Naruto's arm exploded out of his chest. By this time, the rest of the missing nin had figured out what was happening, and kunai filled the air. A malicious glint filled the demon vessel's eye as he took hold of 2 Chunin. The men screamed in pain as dozens of knives skewered their bodies before falling silent. Naruto's form evaporated from view, reappearing just long enough to shear off an arm or a leg before vanishing again. The dock became awash in blood. The jonin began to rapidly form hand seals, but was abruptly cut off as the boy's jaws slammed shut around his neck. With a violent jerk of his own neck, Naruto ripped the man's head from his shoulders, roaring in triumph as he was splattered by sticky sheets of hot gore. From behind him, they heard the familiar crack of an incoming lightning jutsu. He spun on his heel, raising his hand toward the oncoming attack. The elemental repulsion seal on his glove flashed white, and with a loud bang, the Kumo-nin found his own jutsu fired back through him, punching a perfect hole clean through his chest. The demon container pirouetted out of the way of a water jutsu and lunged at the caster. He took hold of the man's outstretched arm and with a wet crack, ripped it from the man's torso. Kiri-nin's screams of pain were abruptly silenced as the man's head was flattened by his severed arm. Naruto wrenched the disembodied limb out of the pool of blood and gray matter, whipping it like a javelin through the head of an incoming enemy. Earth release. Stone Garden Jutsu. The Jinchuriki's grin widened as spires of razor-sharp stone began to erupt from the ground, spearing through enemy ninja as they converged on him. Naruto dodged the jutsu effortlessly, snaking through the forest of earth and thorns with unnatural grace. With a sickening crunch, the demon vessel's foot connected with the rock nin's chest. The man fell to his knees coughing blood and Naruto's other foot came down, smashing Jonin's head against the ground like a piece of overripe fruit. The demon child had little time to admire his kill before he was forced to dodge again. With flawless precision the boy deflected his opponent's kunai and while the man was still off balance, Naruto took hold of the nin's head and skewed it on the stone spikes. Again a storm of kunai assailed him and again he seemed to fade in and out of view, causing the knives to strike nothing but open air. He landed on top of a Taki Chunin and tore the man's head from his shoulders, bathing himself and those around him in a deluge of blood. Before anyone had a chance to attack the boy, crimson chakra exploded from his body. Those who were closest to him died instantly, the sudden rush of demonic chakra, reducing their bodies to little more than smears of ash on the dock floor. They were the lucky ones. Those who were on the outskirts of the blast didn't have the good fortune of dying immediately. Their bodies burst into flame and began to dissolve, the result of a mortal body taking in far too much demonic energy. The deck itself was transformed into a deadly projectile as the force of the blast sent thousands of pieces of stone flying through the air. And in the middle of it all stood Naruto, seething with rage as his 5 blazing tails writhed behind him. With firm footfalls, the slowly made his way into town. Even before Geto had taken over, Wave had never been an extraordinarily nice country. The salty air quickly ate away at any exposed metal, and as a result much of the buildings in town were in a state of total disrepair. Back when the people were free, much of their pitiful income went towards fixing up their homes or shops. After the economic vampire, Geto, showed up the town began to rot from the inside out. People turned to crime. Drugs flooded the streets. Murder and rape became commonplace. But if you throw a bunch of dangerous angry men, say missing Nin, into the mix. Let's just say it wasn't pretty. Humans. Naruto spoke to no one in particular. You're like a plague, a fucking disease. I'll be doing the world a favor by wiping this blight from the face of the earth. But so much chakra surrounding his body, the demon vessel didn't even need to weave the hand seals. Fire release. Fire dragon missile jutsu. The air in front of the boy rippled like water and immediately buildings began to ignite. Azure fire shot from the demon child's mouth, utterly disintegrating anything unlucky enough to be caught in its path. Everything in his sight was incinerated, houses, people, stores, it didn't matter. Everything was burned. Erased from this earth by flames that raged so hot not even dust remained. Off in the distance Naruto took in the sight of a large glass skyscraper that glittered like a spike of crystal and silver in the light of the moon. Zabuza. He would deal with this so-called demon of the hidden mist personally. This man would pay dearly for affixing the epithet demon to his wretched human name. Before the night was out, Naruto would show this man the power of a true demon. Zabuza stood at the top of the building, hands clasped behind his back as he stoically watched his town burn. It seems that I've overplayed my hand. It seems like this last evil act was the straw that broke the camel's back and now the Shinigami himself sends his hounds for me. The knock came from his office door. Enter. He commanded, still looking outward at the burning town. A feminine-looking boy walked towards Zabuza. Zabuza-sama, there is an intruder in the building. The men are doing the best that they can but they can't stop him. Quickly my lord, you must escape. Behind his bandages the missing Nin smiled. You're a good lad, Haku. I'm so sorry that you had to be a part of this. I'm not running away Haku. The boy looked shocked. But Zabuza-sama you. You are welcome to run if you wish. The demon of the mist deadpanned. Never. Zabuza chuckled, of course Haku would stay with him. Then how about you give our guests a proper welcome? Haku bowed. If it will please you, Zabuza-sama. With that, the boy vanished. Naruto suddenly found his path barred by a girlish-looking boy. You will not harm Zabuza-sama. The boy said as he began to twirl a long black needle. The Jinchuriki's eyes glinted menacingly. You dare to order me? The moment the boy's mouth was open, Haku fired. Senbon after senbon struck the wide-eyed Naruto square inside his mouth. Blood spilled from his needle-peppered mouth and the demon vessel's body rocked from side to side before it fell to the ground. Then blurred out of sight. Haku couldn't even scream as the demon child's steel-like grip wrapped around his throat and lifted him into the air. A second Naruto came into view juggling a metal ball. I like to throw things too. Check this out. With a resounding bang the projectile flew towards the head of the strangled Haku. Hatsu. The cannonade erupted into a rush of molten slag and flames, the force of the explosion nearly toppling the building. Naruto grinned, but his victory was short-lived as a rain of needles slammed into his back. Power Emi. You will not harm Zabuza-sama. The boy repeated with an air of finality. The grin returned in full force when he realized that he had to use Plan B. Plan B is great. Maybe it should have been Plan A. He mused. Oh, I'm pretty sure I will. By the way, that's a really nice tattoo on your neck. In fact, if I'm not mistaken it almost looks like a high-grade explosive seal. Huh. Fancy that. Haku's blood ran cold. Oh yes. The boy chuckled. Katsu. Haku's scream was muffled by a second monstrous explosion that reduced the boy's body into little more than gory paste. However, Naruto hadn't planned for the boy to have so many senbon on his person and as such, the explosive seal had more or less turned Haku into a human pipe bomb. Fuck. He thanked Kami that nobody was around to witness his painful blunder. The door to Zabuza's office swung open and the overwhelming stench of blood and burning meat began to permeate the room. I take it that Haku is dead. Naruto actually laughed at that. Haku? Look around you Zabuza, everyone is dead. His chuckling tapered off. How did you possibly become the ruler of the wave? Here. Zabuza roared as he swung the head-chopping sword at the boy. Let me show you. The Jinchuriki's claws lashed out and struck the blade, cutting it in half with no effort at all. Zabuza's eyes widened in shock and Naruto struck, ramming his talons through the man's shoulder in a spray of blood. No Zabuza, let me show you. He snarled as he twisted his claws deeper into the Nuke-Nin's arm. Let me show you the price to be paid for claiming to be a demon. Let me show you what I think about pretenders to my glorious race. Zabuza moved to draw a kunai from his waist but was halted when Naruto's hammer-like fist slammed against his head. The demon container's hand wrapped around the missing Nin's head, smashing it through the nearby window before throwing him like a rag doll against the far wall. Dazedly, Zabuza's eyes locked onto the form of his assailant. Silhouetted against the moon, Naruto's eyes glowed hatefully, daring the demon of the mist to make his move. There is a jutsu that I've been trying to develop, please, allow me to show it to you. Naruto's hand slowly formed a window-like seal. A burst of ruby-hued light erupted from the top of the skyscraper, causing the beautiful crystal spire to twist and shatter, launching millions of fragments of glass into the sky. Steel groaned and concrete heaved as the massive structure began to unmake itself. Tar-garnet tendrils of demonic energy ravenously engulfed the building, ripping it down piece by piece. Naruto's mission was complete. The land of waves was no more. For a ninja, there was no greater source of pride than the completion of their first S-rank mission. It was an honor, a rare privilege, for the Hokage to even consider sending one of his Jonin on an S-rank mission. It was an act that said, "You are my right hand. You are the one whom I trust above all others." He had faith in you. And by succeeding in the mission, you showed the Hokage that his trust had not been misplaced. So why then, did Naruto feel nothing but disgust and rage upon walking through the gates of Konoha? He was a genin, a wet behind-the-ears rookie who managed to not only be chosen for an S-rank mission, but had also completed it without taking a scratch. Such a thing was unheard of. Not even Kakashi, the elite of the elite, had been able to accomplish an S-rank without injury. And yet, Naruto's anger remained. It was easy, so fucking easy, to simply walk into the land of waves and crush the life out of it. The insurmountable odds, the gaping chasm between the levels of combat experience, it was all meaningless when placed against the power of the nine-tailed king. It shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been so easy. He was furious that his opponents could be so weak. For nearly 13 years they had sought out his death. 13 years of searching for the one who would make him feel alive, the one who would give his life meaning. And for 13 years Naruto had found nothing but bitter disappointment. He was a prisoner trapped in a cage made of glass. Everything was so fragile, so brittle. It made all of his power seem so meaningless. "And Naruto-sama?" inquired a nervous-sounding voice. The demon vessel's eyes locked with those of a man in his early 30s, and his rage flared. How dare this piece of shit even think to call his name? "Why do you speak to me?" the boy hissed darkly. "Perhaps you want me to end your miserable existence." The demon child's talons slowly began to extend from his fingers. "Then no, my lord, please," the man begged, nearly in tears. I was only trying to be a gracious host. I meant no disrespect." "Gracious host?" Naruto's eyes snapped away from the terrified man and took in his surroundings. He was in a bar. The look of confusion settled on the boy's face. Why was he in a bar? The realization was unsettling to say the very least. He was the vessel of the Kyuubi, his mind was powerful and sharp. He could breeze through complex equations in the blink of an eye, he could recall in perfect detail nearly everything he saw. How come he couldn't remember how he got here? Naruto suddenly became acutely aware of how strange he was feeling. The air seemed thick, oppressive, almost as if he were trying to breathe tree sap instead of oxygen. It was hot, far too hot for the heat to be natural. His mind went blank as the most extraordinary smell washed over him. It was crisp and clear, soft, like rainwater and sky, powerful and harsh like lightning. It was intoxicating. The scent filled his mind, pushing out every other coherent thought in its attempt to envelope him completely. His brain shut down. He no longer cared about how he got to the bar, no longer cared about being constantly disappointed. None of that mattered anymore. The only thing he cared about now was finding the source of this delicious fragrance. It was a simple task. Since the arrival of Naruto, the population within the bar had dwindled significantly. The only people who remained were the ones who were foreign to Konoha. Naruto's eyes widened in awe when he discovered the origin of the smell. It was a woman. The Jinchuriki's first instinct was that he'd fallen into some sort of dream. A creature this beautiful, this perfect, couldn't possibly exist anywhere other than a fantasy. But the more that Naruto looked at her, the more he came to realize that he didn't care if this was a dream. Her soft golden hair was pulled into a braid, a rope of sunlight that rolled off her shoulder and dangled teasingly in front of her tantalizing assets. Naruto traced the generous curve of her breasts upward to her face, and oh Kami, how he wished he hadn't. The minute he'd laid his eyes on her face, he knew he would never be able to look away. Her skin was flawless, soft and creamy, as if it were made of liquid ivory, taunting him with its very existence. The woman's mouth opened and immediately Naruto's eyes were drawn to it. Her pouty delicate lips parted just wide enough for her to slip a slender straw between them, and Naruto felt his heart hammer in his chest as he caught just the smallest hint of her slender pink tongue before her mouth closed again. The man on the other side of the table leaned in close to whisper something to the woman, an act which filled her with a sudden urge to rip the man's head off. However, Naruto reined in his murderous instincts, his fear of frightening off the beautiful woman stronger than his lust for blood. Her head turned and their eyes connected. The heat that surrounded him became overwhelming as he continued to gaze into the pools of violet smoke that were her eyes. Naruto could hold himself back no longer. Slowly he walked towards her. Yujito took another sip from her drink as she continued to listen half-heartedly to T ramble on about something. He was a monster of a man. Handsome, dark-skinned, thick muscles. He almost looked like a bigger version of B, if such a thing was even possible. In fact, if he traded in his mohawk for cornrows and shaved his beard, Yujiro was fairly sure that they'd look practically identical. It was just too bad that T was just as annoying as B. Yo, kitty. The man's abrasive voice jerked her from her thoughts. That foo over there be staring at you. He leaned closer, a smug look on his face. Guess you're too hot for these tree huggers. The container of the Nibi let out an exasperated sigh. He's right. I'm too hot for my own good. She turned, her eyes meeting with those of her admirer. He consumed her as the boy's lustful crimson gaze sent pleasurable tingles through her body. She whimpered softly when he began to advance on her. Yo, you cool Yujiro? Questioned the far-off voice of T. Yujiro shook her head in an attempt to rid herself of the unbearable heat that surrounded her. If anything, the feeling intensified. Her voice came out in a trembling moan. Get B. To his credit, T reacted almost instantly in spite of the seemingly random claim. He gave her a quick nod and jumped out of his seat in search of his other teammate. The only problem was, now Yujiro was completely alone with the boy. Upon realizing this, a sort of pleasurable terror filled her body. Terror not of what this boy would do to her, but of what she would do to him. It didn't matter to her that he was still a child, hell it didn't matter to her that he was a ninja of the leaf. Reason had abandoned her, and only mindless need remained. It was something about him, something about the way he carried himself that made her knees go weak and her blood run hot. His stride radiated power and confidence as he neared her. He was a being, regal and proud. An emperor. A demon. Something like her. What is your name? He purred in a voice like shadows wrapped in velvet. His voice sent delicious shivers down her spine and she struggled to form a coherent thought. Why Yujiro? She stammered. He chuckled darkly as he moved even closer to her. Pleasure to make your acquaintance, Yujiro. Yujiro could only nod in wordless agreement as the boy got even closer to her. The back of Naruto's hand slowly brushed across one of her flawless cheeks and she moaned softly, leaning ever so slightly into his caress. The moment was shattered when a sudden annoying voice rang out. You naughty girl, Yujiro, robbing the cradle. So I'ma knock you on the top of your head with my ladle. The grit her teeth as the obnoxious rap ended and a large metal ladle hit the top of her head. When she turned around and looked up into the oblivious smiling face of Killer B, it took all of her restraint to keep from punching him. Naruto, on the other hand, showed no such restraint. His talons were out and immediately they were turned on the one who dared to interrupt him. As the strike closed on his head, B weaved out of the way, escaping from the blow with only 4 shallow scratches on his face. Scratches that faded from view almost instantly. Naruto's face gave away nothing, the boy was amazed. No one had ever been able to dodge his claws, not Jiraiya, not the Hokage, not even kiss him. This man was special. A strange feeling washed over that, like he was missing something trapped just below the surface of his consciousness. You. Naruto murmured in a far-off voice. I know you. A grin spread across the Kumonin's face, but other than that, B made no effort to answer the boy. Who are you? The demon child asked, excitement beginning to creep into his voice. B and Naruto slowly began to circle each other. I implore you, tell me your name. Pillar B, Kirahachi, the Hachibi. Call me what you will, it's all the same to me. Naruto's familiar psychotic grin threatened to split his face in half as sparks of ruby-tinged chakra began to arc from his body. Pillar 8. The other nodded as his own body became alight with crimson sparks. Encroaching on my territory, Killer 8. Naruto questioned in mock anger. That must be it. After all, why else would you enter my domain? Pillar B chuckled in amusement. Of course you'd say that, my very vain friend. You can relax for now, I'm just following orders. Naruto sent the man a knowing smirk. Oh. And what orders might those be? Exams, son. Just gonna run a little defense, so to speak. The boy laughed. I see that your annoying habit of talking in riddles hasn't changed. He rubbed his chin in fake conjecture. The Chunin exams you say. Killer 8 I'm so upset. I thought you'd come to do battle with me, not a rabble of mindless genin. Surely you will consider fighting a worthy opponent. Pillar B smirked. You sure have a backwards ass way of challenging someone to a fight, but I accept. We do battle at the finals of the Chunin exams, the grandest stage of them all. Savor the anticipation 9 tails, this will be over far too soon. As you wish Killer 8. Naruto said as he began to walk towards the door. I will see you on the other side. And with that, he vanished in a blast of scarlet energy. See you on the other side. Killer B replied to the empty air. Oh shut up you cryptic freak. Yelled a very flushed Yujiro. Her teammate winced at her sudden outburst, but the act went unnoticed by the irate woman. Who the fuck was that? Why the hell does he want to fight you? She blushed. Why was I trying to get it on with a little kid? Yujiro paused for a second. And why did you hit me on the head with a ladle? Killer B rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Because ladle was the only thing I could think of that rhymed with cradle. His teammate's eyes narrowed dangerously. Of course he would answer the least important question, he was Killer B, the most infuriating man on the planet. She grabbed hold of his shirt and pulled him down to eye level. We are going back to the apartment and you are going to fuck my brains out. Then you're going to tell me exactly what the hell just happened. Are we clear? The dark-skinned Jonin could do little more than nod his head before he was dragged out of the bar by his very pissed-off teammate. And with that, only an incredibly confused T remained in the bar. Team 7 had come a long way in just a little over a month. Under the harsh but necessary tutelage of Jiraiya, the genin had grown by leaps and bounds. 24 D-rank missions and 9 C-rank missions had been completed within that time, a feat which no other rookie team could claim to have done. All 3 of Team 7's members had also been killed on their missions, another exploit that was exclusive to them. Sasuke had shown the most progress during his short time as a shinobi. He'd unlocked the fabled Sharingan Eye during the 3rd C-rank mission that the team had completed. At first Jiraiya had been reluctant to allow the Uchiha to use his newly unlocked for training. At first he was worried that it would seem like cheating to his other students, but when neither In nor Kiba voiced any complaints he caved. So far nothing serious has resulted because of it. Not far behind Sasuke was Ino. The girl had continuously surprised her sensei, the biggest of which being the member of the team with the highest kill count. After only a month into her career Ino already had 13 kills under her belt, an accomplishment that even Sasuke couldn't ignore. Through a combination of Jinjutsu and Yamanaka mind control techniques, the young mind walker didn't even need to lift a finger to do some serious damage. And last but not least, there was Kiba. After spending 8 years of his life on the wrong end of Naruto's claws, Jiraiya was able to teach his godson's fighting style to the Inyazuka almost exactly. With his canine abilities, Kiba was perfectly suited for the brutally effective style that they had developed. The style was deadly to be sure, but without Naruto's insane regenerative capabilities, the Inyazuka was forced to modify the Taijutsu form. The end result was a smaller, far less destructive version of Naruto in genin form. Jiraiya smiled at his students as he pulled 3 registration forms from his vest. I've nominated the 3 of you for the Chunin exams. Participation is strictly voluntary. If you wish to enter, bring these forms with you to the academy, room 301 by 4 p.m. 1 week from today. Remember you don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you choose not to enter it will not be held against you. The Sannin barely had the time to blink before 3 fully filled out registration forms were pushed into his hands. Well alright then, I guess that concludes business for today. Remember to show up bright and early because tomorrow you're going to work your asses off. The genin were just about to leave when a cackling voice suddenly rang out. Oh, I wouldn't let them leave just yet, Jiraiya. They should stick around for this. After all, it does pertain to them. The Toad Sannin stifled a groan as his maniacal godson appeared in a flash of vermilion light. What do you want, Naruto? The grin spread across the Jinchuriki's face. Why, what everyone else wants of course. For Sensei Dearest to nominate me for the Chunin exams. Jiraiya knew where this was headed. Sorry Naruto, but only 3 people can be chosen to participate in the exams. If I nominated more, then the exams would be unfair. Naruto didn't seem fazed in the least. So you nominate one of your students before I have to do so for you. The Toad Sage sent his students an apologetic look. Sasuke's eyes went wide. You're not seriously thinking about taking one of us out of the exams in order to enter him, are you? The Uchiha's bloodline activated. We earned this, Jiraiya-sensei, you can't just take it away from us because he tells you to. Sasuke's gaze shifted to Naruto. What right do you have to? Continue looking at me with those eyes, Uchiha, and I'll break you in half. The demon child roared. I have every right in the world to demand such things from your teacher, you on the other hand, have no right to even speak to me. Naruto's hand wrapped around the boy's throat. I'll crush you like a bug, you worthless. I'll do it. Ino screamed. Naruto's eyes lazily drifted to the girl. You can enter the exams in my place, just please, don't hurt Sasuke. The demon container continued to regard the blonde for a few seconds before letting the Uchiha fall to the ground. Fine by me. He shrugged before vanishing in a maelstrom of crimson light. Sarutobi let out a smoke-filled sigh as he continued to watch the chaotic scene unfold. For the past 6 hours the old man had been forced to listen to nearly every single clan head question his mental status or barring that insult his intelligence directly. Looking back, the Sandaime took note that virtually every single meeting involving Konoha has eventually degraded into this. Suffice to say, Naruto's sudden decision to partake of the Chunin exams was not well received by the general public. Within 2 hours of the boy's official introduction into Team 7, the number of Leaf Nin who were participating in the exam was almost negligible. In fact, out of the 23 teams that were originally entered, only 5 of them remained. This bit of information wasn't exceptionally surprising. Actually, what surprised the Hokage more was the fact that there were still Konoha teams that chose to take the exam. Within the village hidden in the leaves, Naruto had a fearsome reputation. He was regarded from afar with the sort of careful respect that one would expect to see in a man who was being stared down by a tiger. Even the Anbu, the Hokage's right hand, wouldn't walk along the same street as him. This thing wasn't human. It didn't feel a shred of remorse for the atrocities it had committed, nor did it show an inkling of restraint when faced with an opponent. Naruto was a mindless, heartless killing machine, nothing more. This was the reason why Sarutobi was so surprised that 15 Konoha nin had elected to remain in the exams. What was even more shocking was the fact that 3 of these teams were not only rookie squads, but also the future heirs to all of Konoha's most prominent clans. Hence the reason why all of the clan heads, excluding Aburame Shibi, were in an uproar over this decision. Sarutobi couldn't exactly fault them for being so upset. Apart from Jiraiya, he was the only person who fought with the boy and lived. He knew exactly how scary the boy could be. The sound of a fist slamming against a table jarred the old man from his thoughts. This is bullshit. A very irate Inuzuka Tsume spat. How can you let a monster like that compete against our children? People died during these Sarutobi exams. To be put in the same room with that thing is a death sentence. You would do well to remember whom you're speaking with, Inuzuka-san. Homura said warningly. You will show the proper respect towards the Hokage. Like hell I will. The Inuzuka matriarch shot back. I don't care if he's Kami itself, I'm not gonna sit on my ass and let that demon kill my son. The few heads nodded in agreement. In the chair to Sarutobi's right, Jiraiya leaned forward towards the fuming Tsume. Hold your tongue, Inuzuka, he growled dangerously. I won't let slide another comment like that. Tsume's eyes narrowed at the Toad Sage, but she did as he said. Danzo spoke, for once, in agreement with his Hokage. You're allowing your emotions to control you, Inuzuka-san. As a ninja, you know full of the dangers that come with this line of work. The prospect of death is something that you should have come to grips with long ago. Tsume grit her teeth. Of course I'm prepared for the eventuality of death, you idiot, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to go traipsing through Iowa. I'm prepared to die, my son is prepared to die, everyone at this table is prepared to die, but that doesn't mean we actively seek out death. Again, the other clan heads nodded. Jiraiya frowned. Your actions say otherwise. A uniform look of confusion spread across the faces of those who were present. Naruto, the Sannin continued, has never been one to take no for an answer. He's a proud creature, so proud in fact that the act of debating this issue might be enough of an insult to warrant our deaths. I know Naruto better than anyone here. I know exactly how scary that boy can be when he's denied something that he wants. That is why I know that we cannot bar Naruto from the exams. He would raise Konoha to the ground just to spite us. However, I don't think that this is the case. Naruto rarely takes interest in ninja matters, so for him to demand so suddenly that he be placed in the exams. It just doesn't fit. If the boy wanted to kill Leaf Nin, he would have just done so. Therefore, I can only conclude that this isn't about killing, well, at least not entirely. Though it seems strange, I don't think any of your children will be in any real danger as long as they avoid Naruto. I know him, or to be more specific, I know how much he hates fighting a weak opponent. Naruto won't go out of his way to attack your children, he's too proud for that. For a long time nobody spoke, all of them were too busy trying to digest the Toad Sage's words. Jiraiya-sama. The monotone voice of Aburame Shibi broke the silence. Logic dictates that the only person who knows of the boy's motives better than you would be the boy himself. The air became noticeably tense. I suggest that we bring Naruto here so that he himself can tell us his intentions. Shikaku sent the man an incredulous look. Is this what passes for humor in the Aburame clan? Surely you can't be serious. Of course I'm serious. The insect wielder replied. If what Jiraiya-sama says is true, we are either safe or we are as good as dead already. In either case, Naruto has already decided our fates. Again a long silence descended on the table. Shikaku finally spoke. Let Naruto explain himself. Toza looked at his old friend before he also spoke. If both the Nara and the Aburame see no fault in this decision, I must also agree with them. Hyuga Hiashi gave the faintest of nods. I can only hope that your words are true, Jiraiya-sama. Yamanaka Inoichi also nodded. From what my daughter told me, the beast is not bound by his thirst for blood. She has met him on several occasions and not once did the boy harm her. For me, that is enough. Both Koharu and Homura nodded. The world thinks we are weak. Danzo spoke. But this boy, he is powerful. We must show our enemies that Konoha is still a force to be reckoned with. We must allow the boy to compete. Tsume scoffed. You've all gone mad. This boy is a killer and yet all of you are ready to welcome him with open arms. I haven't forgotten what that monster did to my clan. I won't let more lives be lost on the basis of fear. We are the council. Jiraiya stated. The Hokage must be the one who decides. All eyes in the room fell on Sarutobi. The old man breathed out another cloud of smoke before answering. Anbu. A ninja with a tiger mask appeared. Yes, Hokage-sama. Bring Uzumaki Naruto to me. Of course, Hokage-sama. The Anbu replied before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Not 2 minutes later, a pillar of ruby chakra erupted from the center of the room, signaling the arrival of Konoha's monster. Upon seeing the boy, many of the faces present contorted into a look of utter hatred. Naruto grinned at their reaction. Humans were such amazing creatures. His crimson gaze shifted to the Sandaime. Why have you called me here, Sarutobi? The old man spoke in a tired voice. You know why you've been called Naruto here. Please don't waste our time. The Jinchuriki's grin only widened. Well, since you said please. The boy put his hands behind his back and walked towards the large bay window behind the Hokage's main desk. The scarlet-orange light of the dying sun filtered through the window, reflecting off of the smoke and soot that filled the room and making it seem as though the entire office was filled with neon mist. You're worried about what I might do during the exams. The boy said without turning away from the window. A murmur of agreement flowed through the room. Naruto gave an amused chuckle. And to think, your race labels mine as the proud one. What do you mean, Uzumaki-sama? Shibi questioned emotionlessly. Uzumaki-sama, you say? My, we are formal, aren't we, Aburam-san? The demon container turned to face the man. Allow me to answer your question with one of my own. Does anyone here think that they can stand before my power? The tension in the air grew thick, and although there were many angry faces among the clan heads, no one said anything. Again Naruto grinned. I thought as much. None of you have the strength to face me. None of you are worth the mess you'll make, and yet for some reason you think your children are. I don't know whether I should laugh or be insulted. The Ashi's pale eyes narrowed. You're saying that you will not harm our children? The boy's eyes widened in mock surprise. Oh heavens no, Hyuga-san. Rest assured that if your children cross me they will die. I simply meant that they were not worth my time. As long as they don't get in my way, I'll have no reason to kill them. You're treading on thin ice, boy. Tsume snarled. If I catch even a whisper that you're planning to harm my son, I'll kill you without a second thought. Small sparks of vermilion light began to jump across the boy's body, and with a sound akin to steel on stone, Naruto's talon sprang from his hands. Is that a fact? The whispered dangerously. I give you my word and still you question my motives. Kiba is my teammate. If I kill him I won't be able to enter the finals. And believe me when I tell you that that is the only thing that's keeping me from ripping him apart. That last comment was the breaking point. Tsume howled in rage and leapt for the boy. Naruto made no motion to dodge, and the Inyazuka matriarch rammed her kunai deep into the boy's chest. Naruto's vice-like grip wrapped around the woman's wrist and with an audible crack, snapped her wrist as the bones were made of straw. Tsume didn't even have time to register the damage that had been done to her wrist before white-hot pain exploded from her chest. She looked down, dazedly realizing that Naruto had lodged 5 razor-sharp claws firmly in her stomach. Even as Anbu began to come out of the woodwork, the boy remained eerily calm. He leaned closer to Tsume. If you survive the night, you are forgiven. And with that he let the woman fall to the ground. Inyazuka's body didn't even have time to touch the floor before being caught by an Anbu guard. The man disappeared through the forest of animal masks, and the remaining Anbu slowly began to advance on the boy. Naruto's hands formed a window-like seal. I think I've played this game before, and if I recall correctly I think I won. Want to press your luck and try again? Halt. The Anbu did so, heeding the word of their Hokage immediately. Sarutobi rubbed his eyes wearily, making a shooting gesture with his other hand. Your services are no longer required. Without a word the Anbu disappeared. Naruto's grin faded and he dropped the seal. Not worth my time anyway. Naruto. Jiraiya sighed. If you want people to do things for you it's not exactly a good idea to attack them. The boy sent his mentor a hard look. I was defending myself. I was under the impression that a shinobi had the right to defend himself. His gaze shifted to the council. I'm not wrong, am I? The cloud of insects behind Shibi slowly retreated into his coat. What Uzumaki-sama says is true. Although she was goaded into attacking him, Inyazuka-san should have been able to control herself better. The other clan head sent the man a wary look. Logically, if Uzumaki-sama wanted us dead he wouldn't have cancelled his jutsu. That argument seemed to carry a bit more weight, and gradually the other ninja relaxed their guard. So, Naruto grinned. Do I make the cut? X. Bitsujin jutsu. Sasuke whispered to his teammate. I know. Kiba growled, annoyed at the other boy's lack of faith in him. Team 7 currently found themselves standing on the second floor of the academy, the path in front of them blocked by a massive genin standing outside a door labeled 301. "Come on," one of the genin whined. "Let us through so we can take the exam." One of the two genin who were standing guard in front of the room laughed. "No way," he jeered. "If you guys are this weak then you have no right to be in these exams." "He's right," the other genin said darkly. "People die in these exams, you know." The boy's words had the desired effect and a few of the genin started shaking. "Oh really?" one of the boys asked. "Really?" a steel-hard voice answered from behind him. The crowd turned to face the newcomers. "I suggest you all get out of my way." Naruto started coldly. The Miss Nin stepped forwards. "Oh yeah? And just what are you gonna do if we don't?" In one fluid motion the wrapped his hand around the boy's throat and slammed the genin's head through a nearby wall. The boy's limbs twitched sporadically for a few seconds before his body went still. Less than a second passed before the other squads began scrambling to get out of the way of Naruto and his team. As they began to climb the next flight of stairs, both Kiba and Sasuke began to get the distinct feeling that Kami hated them. As a genin, Kiba had never been very fond of room 301. Back when they were academy students, this was the room where they took all of their written exams. Even though it had been changed since he graduated, Kiba couldn't help but recall the hours of boredom that he'd endured in this room. "Yoo-hoo. Sasuke-kun." "Kiba." And Yuzuka's eyes widened when he heard that voice. "There's no way." Slowly the boy turned to face a familiar blonde girl. "Ino?" A smile spread on the boy's face. "How did you get here? I thought you weren't going to be in the exams after." His eyes shifted towards Naruto. "You know. Oh, that wasn't a very big problem. After all," she winked. "I'm the number one kunoichi of our graduating class. And yet somehow she still manages to be troublesome." Shikamaru drawled as he and Chaoji took their place behind Ino. This comment earned him an elbow to the ribs and a few less than ladylike phrases about laziness and pineapple hair. Kiba laughed at his friend's predicament. "You better be careful what you say around her, Shika. She might just kick your ass." Shikamaru was about to say something, but the sudden opening of the door drew his attention. His pupils shrank as Shino, Hinata, and a certain pink-haired kunoichi walked through the door. "Troublesome," he mumbled in a far-off tone. Chaoji also seemed to shrink back. "What?" Kiba turned to look at the new arrival, and slowly it dawned on him. "Oh crap. Sasuke-kun." Sakura cried as she launched herself onto the Uchiha's back. In spite of the fact that he had a flailing girl on his back, Sasuke actually managed to remain looking fairly cool. "Sorta. Hey, get off his forehead, girl. Sasuke-kun's mine." Ino yelled as she too glumped onto Sasuke. A sound of derisive laughter sounded from behind Kiba. "Don't tell me you're just going to leave him to his fate, Inuzuka." The boy scowled as he looked toward his other teammate. Naruto grinned. "Even I'm not that cruel." Kiba continued to glare at the demon child and slowly the boy's smile faded. "But seriously, if you don't shut them up soon I'm going to kill someone." "Yosh!" exclaimed a spandex-clad genin who seemed to have materialized from out of nowhere. What an unyouthful reaction to such a beautiful display of affection. "You should be ashamed." The boy's speech was cut short by a girl's hand clamping down over his mouth. "You'll have to forgive Lee." She laughed nervously. "He's kind of an idiot." Naruto looked at the strange-looking ninja in the girl's grasp and then back to her. "So it would seem. For his own safety, don't let him near me again." "Yeah, no problem." The girl replied quickly before pulling her struggling teammate off into the crowd. "Humans. Killer 8, you must be even more sadistic than I am." "Hey. You kids want to settle down a bit." A boy with glasses and silver hair called out as he walked towards the group of enthusiastic genin. The rookie squads all turned to look at him. Naruto's eyes locked with those of the newcomer and a wicked smile slowly spread across his face. "What are you up to, snake in the grass?" With the exception of Naruto, nobody else noticed the brief look of horror that crossed the boy's face. "Snake in the grass. No, you got it all wrong. I'm a leaf nin just like you guys, we gotta look out for one another, you know. I just thought I should tell you guys to calm down a bit. A lot of the people here are itching for a fight, so you don't want to give them any reason to start one with you." The boy rubbed the back of his head. "I made that mistake my first time through and wound up in the hospital before the exams had even started." "Your first time?" Chaoji questioned. "If you don't mind me asking, how many times have you taken the exam, Mr. Kabuto?" The bespectacled shinobi answered. "And I've taken the exam 7 times. A small smile formed on Sasuke's face. "Then you must know a thing or two about the exams, right?" "Maybe a little bit." Kabuto adopted a modest look. "Well, the exam itself changes from year to year, but I can tell you what I know about the other teams." He pulled a stack of white cardboard from his pocket. "These are my ninja info cards. Everything that you could ever want to know about the competition is sealed inside these. He drew a card from the top of the deck and after channeling some chakra into it a map of the 5 great shinobi nations appeared. Pretty cool, huh? Perhaps. Sasuke responded. Do you have any information on the applicants themselves? Of course. Is there anyone in particular that you want me to look up? Uzumaki Naruto. Uchiha answered. The group of genin turned to look at the boy in question. For his part, Naruto didn't seem to care all that much. Shooting high A, Uchiha. The demon child grinned. I think I've been insulted. Don't cross him. Kabuto said in a cold voice. He's A. The confused look came over Sakura's face. Oh, what's that? It is a person who has a tailed beast sealed inside them. You guys might have been too young to remember what Naruto did when he was a child, but me. Kabuto shivered. Don't fight him. If you're lucky he'll only kill you. The group went silent. One by one his fellow leaf nin began to back away from him. Naruto didn't even seem to notice them. No, he was far too interested in the red-haired boy who continued to stare at him. Gaara's scowl deepened as his malevolent jade eyes continued to burn into those of the blonde. There was something about the boy, something about his presence that made Gaara want to crush the life out of him. Perhaps it was his insufferable grin, his unnecessarily loud clothing, or perhaps it was merely the way he carried himself, but one thing was certain. This boy would die. Unconsciously, a few tendrils of sand began to pour out from the gourd on his back, reacting to the rising bloodlust within the one whom they called master. Slowly, like a desert viper, the sand slithered through the crowd of genin towards the grinning boy. Why are you smiling, you idiot? The Redeed whispered mockingly as his own face twisted into a grin. Don't you realize you're going to die? To his right, Tamari took a few steps back. Are you okay, Gaara? Her brother didn't even seem to hear her. You won't be smiling much longer. The Sunanin hissed. How will it taste, I wonder? Delicious. Your blood will satisfy your mother. Gaara is a good boy, isn't he, mother? The sand slowly wrapped its way around the boy's leg, but instead of reacting in terror, as Gaara had expected, his grin only seemed to widen. The coil of sand that continued to climb up his leg was all but ignored, forgotten as the boy's eyes once again locked with his own. It had been a long time since Redeed had been afraid. After all, with mother watching over him, what use did he have for an emotion like fear? Nothing could hurt him, nothing could stop him. But those eyes, those sinister crimson eyes, inside of them lay something truly scary. The sand on the boy's leg fell to the ground and disappeared back into the crowd, a fact that went completely unnoticed by the boy as his ruby eyes remained securely on his own. Gaara took a step back, a look of blank horror forming on his face, as the boy took a step forward. Gee, Gaara? Kankuro asked nervously. What's the matter? The puppeteer's blood ran cold. His psychotic little brother wasn't afraid of anything, he couldn't be. After their father, Gaara was the strongest ninja in all of Suna. He'd seen grown men break down in tears at the sight of his brother, he'd seen ninjas throw their lives away rather than be paired with Gaara for a mission. What in the name of Kami could possibly be worse than Gaara? He followed his brother's wide-eyed gaze and instantly wished he hadn't. Fangs bared, eyes alight with wicked intent, the object of Gaara's terror unhurriedly walked closer as the crowd of genin hurried to get out of his way. Gaara's mind was a mess of emotions. One part of him screamed for the boy's blood. It yearned to feel his fragile body shatter under the unrelenting pressure of the desert sand, hungered for his body to be coated in the sticky heat of the boy's blood. And yet another part of him railed against the idea. It was like a panicky whisper inside his head, pleading with him to leave this place, leave this boy, and run far, far away. Naruto's eyes glimmered dangerously. Such hate and fear in your eyes, little desert rat. I do hope you aren't planning to do something stupid. The scowl on Gaara's face returned as the boy got closer still. If you take another step, I'll kill you. The demon child came to a stop. Still grinning, Naruto slowly tilted his head. Kill me? He chuckled softly, do you think this course is action-wise, desert rat? Gaara's sand swirled around him angrily. Who are you? Naruto shook his head theatrically. People are so rude these days. If you want my name, perhaps you should give me yours first. The sand nin said nothing. So impolite. The demon vessel sighed. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I trust that now you'll tell me yours. Gaara. The boy deadpanned. Sabaku no Gaara. Sabaku no Gaara. Naruto repeated. Well then Gaara, if you ever try to kill me again I'll make you wish you'd never been born. The sand on the floor began to move. Is that a fact? Naruto's only response was to extend his claws. Suddenly a massive cloud of smoke exploded from the front of the room, signaling the arrival of nearly 3 dozen leaf nin. A muscular man whose face was littered with scars stepped out of the smoke. An ugly sneer came onto the man's face. Fun's over maggots. Now shut up and form ranks. The throng of Chunin hopefuls tore their attention away from the staring contest and began to quickly get into position. Naruto smirked and began to walk away. "It seems that you'll have to kill me another time, desert rat." Gaara's eyes narrowed. "So it seems." Gradually the ninja in the room began to quiet down. The large man at the front of the room nodded. "Good. Now then, my name is Marino Ibiki. Head of Konoha's Torture and Interrogation Division of Anbu Black Ops, as well as the proctor for the first stage of the Chunin exams." Ibiki turned to the blackboard and quickly scribbled out a few lines of text. The first line simply read, "Plans built on uncertainty are doomed to failure." The second line read, "Everyone breaks eventually." He placed the chalk back in its tray and turned to face the crowd. "Can anybody tell me what the first line means?" Sakura was the one to answer. "The first line that you wrote is the 14th rule of shinobi conduct. It means that if you don't have the proper intel for a situation, then you can't develop a sound plan of action." Ibiki smirked. "Very good. But how do you know if your information is accurate?" Sakura gave the man a blank look. "By making the enemy tell it to you straight," replied a gruff voice. Ibiki turned his attention to the mohawked cloud nin who answered. "And how are you going to accomplish that?" "By torturing him." A few of the genin squirmed and Ibiki smiled darkly. "That's correct. In the ninja world nothing is more precious than information. The success of the mission, as well as your lives and the lives of your teammates, will often depend on the quality of the data that you've been given. With the right knowledge, a man can infiltrate a fortress with no trouble at all. Likewise, if you have no knowledge of a situation or even worse, false knowledge, there's a very good chance that your mission will end in failure." The scarred man again wrote on the board, continuing to speak as he did so. "Assassin, mercenary, saboteur, thief," he paused and circled that last one. "And spy. No doubt you all recognize these as the 5 basic roles of a ninja. This is why information is such a commodity," he tapped the circled word. "Because we're surrounded by liars. Sometimes while you're out in the field you'll be forced to interrogate an enemy in order to come up with a sufficient plan. But here's the kicker, your prisoner is a liar by trade and you can be damn sure that he's trying his best to get you killed. So as a ninja, it's absolutely vital that you can differentiate between what is true and what is a lie. There is another side to this." Ibiki tapped the second line of text. "If you ever find yourself at the mercy of the enemy, this is the only thing that is constant. No matter who you are, no matter what clan you come from, no matter what rank you are, the fact will remain, everyone breaks." Ibiki caught sight of the still madly grinning Naruto. "Well, almost everyone. If you are captured, your only chance will be to stall until either your allies arrive or you figure out how to escape. In both cases this must be done quickly. Both the human mind and the human body are surprisingly fragile. Here is the test. Out of every 3-man squad, one of you will be selected to play the role of the prisoner. The prisoner will be given 2 pieces of information, the room number in which their interrogator's teammate is being held, and also the room number in which the next stage of the exams take place. In order to pass this portion of the exam, you must arrive at the correct location with your missing teammate within 1 hour of the exam starting. If neither team is able to break their prisoner and discover the room in which their captured teammate is being held, then both teams will fail." "Let me get this straight," a grass nin called out. "Someone in our squad is going to be tortured. You can't be serious." A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. Ibiki smiled. "Oh, I'm dead serious, but if you don't like it, feel free to leave." He waited for a few seconds, but nobody moved. "Excellent, now it's time for the rules. Rule 1. You can't kill your prisoner. Do so and you'll be charged with murder." "Damn it," cried a frustrated voice. A few teams laughed at the outburst, but the majority of the genin looked afraid. Rule 2. You can't cause any permanent injury to your prisoner. Anything like blinding, crippling, or deforming will also result in an immediate disqualification. You are allowed to give your prisoner a couple of new scars if you like, just nothing that will impede their abilities as a ninja. Rule 3. There is nothing that prevents the prisoner from trying to escape, in fact this is encouraged. Since the prisoner will be given the room number of his own team and the room number in which the next phase begins, those who escape can easily pass the test. Any questions? Naruto stepped forward. You said that it was forbidden to kill the prisoner. If you are the prisoner, is it also forbidden to kill your captors? Ibiki rubbed his eyes tiredly. No. If you're the prisoner it is legal to kill your captors. Many of the faces in the crowd went pale and a few teams walked out of the room. Though it is not encouraged, it is legal to kill your captors. There will be ninjas stationed inside every single room, so if you feel that you are in danger of being killed, you are able to forfeit. If you do so, the proctor in your room will break up the fight. Now if there's nothing else, we will begin pairing the teams. The Chunin took out a clipboard and began to read a list of names. After a few minutes Naruto's ears perked up. The Konoha Team 7 will pair with Iwa Team 2. The prisoners will be Uzumaki Naruto and Fabium Nashi. Will the prisoners please step forward? Both Kiba and Sasuke watched in disbelief as Naruto walked forward towards the proctor. It looks like we lucked out. Kiba whispered to his teammate. If they're interrogating Naruto, we're guaranteed a spot in the second round. He's gonna tear them apart. Sasuke didn't answer, he just watched as the Chunin whispered the numbers into Naruto's ear before leading the Iwa team off to their deaths. The proctor finished whispering the numbers into Nashi's ear and gestured at the pair to come over. Sasuke nudged Kiba's arm. Let's go, Mutt. This is going to be ugly. The Kusanin found himself in a tiny concrete room shackled to the wall. Glaring down at him were two of the scariest ninja that he'd ever laid eyes on. One of them, the smaller of the two giants, just leaned off in a corner, mumbling something about rhymes as he scribbled something down in his notepad. The other one, the one with the mohawk and the beard who'd answered the questions earlier, was standing uncomfortably close. The Chunin proctor took a seat against the far wall and pulled out a stopwatch. You may begin. The big one turned to his teammate. You want 1B? I've done this shit so much it's not even fun anymore. Filler B looked at T. Before he was demoted back to a genin, T was the head of the Kumo Anbu interrogation unit. It went way beyond unfair for him to use his skills against a genin. Oh well, life sucks. Out in the field I'm the combat king, but interrogation is your thing. I'll just stay out of your way and let you go ahead and play. Suit yourself. The behemoth muttered. You gonna talk? The grass nin said nothing. T sighed. Man, I pity da fool who doesn't talk to me. Cloud Nin's massive mitt clamped down on the boy's head and after a few seconds a fountain of sparks began to crackle and fizz. The boy screamed in agony as the lightning chakra began to attack the nerves in his brain, manipulating his nervous system into thinking that his entire body was in excruciating pain. I'll talk. The boy screamed as he writhed against the wall. Please I'll talk. He stopped channeling electricity through his hand and savagely wrenched the boy's head up by his hair. You gonna talk now? Tears continued to roll down the boy's cheeks. The second stage is in room 78. Your partner is being held in room 32. He quirked an eyebrow and sparks began to pour from his free hand. I think you're lying. The grass nin's eyes went wide. No. Please don't hurt me again. I'm telling the truth, I swear. His hand inched closer. Why should I believe you? His prisoner began howling in terror as tears once again began to trickle down his face. I've got no reason to lie. He sobbed brokenly. He let go of the boy's hair and turned to B. He's telling the truth. The Kumo quickly wrote down the rest of his rap before flipping the notebook closed and following his teammate out of the room. Shikamaru grunted as again Taki Nin's fist slammed across his face. Give us the numbers. The large boy demanded. The lazy genin spat a bit of blood onto the floor. Sorry, but it's too troublesome. I'm more afraid of the beating that I'd receive from Ino than I am of you. Oh really? The other boy grinned as he pulled out a kunai. Well I guess we're gonna have to cut it out of you. Me and my big mouth. Be careful Mizukai, if you kill him we'll get disqualified. The larger boy warned. Yeah, don't worry. I'm just gonna mess up his face a little bit. You know, make it difficult for him to get a date. The kunai drew closer and closer to Shikamaru's face and then suddenly the steel door swung open. Shikamaru. Are you having a good time with these guys? The two Taki Nin whipped around, their eyes wide and their mouths agape. They got beaten by a fat guy and a chick. No way. You guys broke a gamo already. Taoji grinned as the proctor released his friend from the restraints. Well yeah, of course we did. Ino's a mind reader so figuring out what the num. Ino elbowed him in the stomach. Honestly Chaoji, how did you ever become a ninja? Come on Shikamaru, let's get out of here while we still have some of our secrets intact. The shadow user rubbed his bruised jaw and began to follow after his team. Troublesome girl. X. Niji watched dispassionately as Tenten continued to whip Senbin into a Kiri shinobi. It had been almost 10 minutes since the exam began and in that time the girl had done a pretty good job of turning the ninja into a cactus. His arms and legs were littered with needles, so many in fact that it was nothing short of a miracle that the boy was still able to stand. Niji winced as one of the Senbin came dangerously close to hitting him. To hitting something very painful indeed. If nothing else, the Hyuga had to admire this idiot's dedication. Oh man, I missed. Tenten mumbled. Maybe if I aim a little lower. The Mist Nin's eyes widened in horror. Okay. I'll talk. Niji activated his and stepped forward. I'm listening. The room where your teammate is being held is room 23. To get to the next phase of the exam you need to go to room 45. He's lying. Niji stated. The Mist Nin cried out in pain as a chakra-coated finger jammed into the juncture between his neck and shoulder. But I'm telling the truth again, the boy's scream cut off the end of what he was saying. Niji retracted his fingers. My eyes are all seeing so lying will be of no use to you. I also advise you to tell us the real numbers or else Stenton might make your life very miserable." The bun-haired girl pulled out a warhammer and winked at the boy. "Oh fuck this, I'm not getting my balls crushed over a test. The real numbers are 65 and 78. Room 65 is where your teammate is being held." Niji looked at Tenten. That was the truth. The girl pouted as she followed the Hyuga out of the room. That was actually kinda fun. Damari and Kankuro leaned against the wall, patently watching the rain nin who was affixed to the wall. As soon as the exam had begun, Kankuro had injected a hallucinogenic toxin into the girl and now it was time to play the waiting game. The poison that now flowed through the girl's veins was incredibly dangerous and if left alone it would kill her. The venom's effect was twofold, not only did it attack the nervous system, causing delusions, but it also attacked the muscles, something that was, if the girl's violent twitches were any indication, very painful. Eventually the poison would leave her brain dead, but the toxin didn't reach that stage of damage for nearly a week, ample time to keep her from dying. Thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoy it. If you want the next part of this video, turn on that bell notification. Like, subscribe and comment down below. And also check out the others' videos I have created and enjoyed it. See you guys next video. Till that, take care.